Hello everyone. If you are new to my channel, then consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do it, thanks. By the way, I also have a Luffy fan fiction channel. If you are interested, the link is in the description. Dragonslayer by KitsuneDragon. He said he saw great potential in my small body and he raised me. Because of him I lived, I learned, and I finally found someone I could call friend, even if he didn't call me the same. I am his son. I am his student, the Dragonslayer of Aknologia. I don't own anything. Adios.
Dragon King's palace. Allegezia golden eyes rose up to stare upon the majesty that was the palace of the most powerful being in the universe. The palace of the Dragon King was a massive four-walled piece of architecture that would have made even the most magnificently made castle across the multiverse be brought to shame. Made from the hardest and most beautiful materials from across the cosmos, the Dragon King's palace was forged through magic and took on an appearance so amazing, it did well to catch the eye of many a dragon who gazed upon it, and no words in the existing vocabulary would be able to do it justice. The black and white-haired Dragonslayer walked through the ebony halls, lengthy passageways that stretched on for what seemed like miles and were only what made the entrance of the palace. Dragon claws made of stone were attached to the walls to act as the holds for the torches, each one alight with the orange-yellow flames of the fire dragons. While the torches did their job to provide a light source in the shadowy hallway, the bright flames paled in beauty when he marveled at the windows, which were crafted from multitudes of colored crystals that were mined from the mountains of terra firma, the realm of the earth dragons, which turned the white light of Waisalogya's artificial sun into a myriad of colors that would bring a terror to even those who bore the hardest of hearts. If he were to offer a comparison, they were similar to the stained glass windows that were found in the churches of Earthland. He then left the darkness of the halls as he now walked through the magnificent gardens which lay within a massive open-air room so as to allow the plants to have access to the elements of the wind, water and lightning dragons. The elements worked alongside the light of Waisalogya to give birth to many forms of plant life, primarily flowers, which had grown for many years in the fertile volcanic soil provided by the lava dragons. This provided the wide expanse of greenery with a bright combination of colors: violets, roses, daisies, daffodils. Name a flower and it was probably there in all the possible colors that it could appear in nature. The flower fields then became more organized the further he walked through the garden, lining the dirt path that led to the large walls of foliage which formed the decorative maze. Their care was maintained by many a dragon, but there were also a few orange-scaled lava dragons and blue-scaled water dragons who acted as the primary overseers of the Dragon King's garden. The servants of the Dragon King bowed their heads in recognition of the adopted son and Dragonslayer of their lord and master before returning to their work. The son of the Dragon King took a little pleasure in trying to escape the labyrinth of grass, finding the experience stimulating for his brain and also giving him a feeling of nostalgia. The maze was one of the few ways his draconian father had served to train him mentally, but once he began to memorize the maze in its entirety, the exercise lost its luster. As he exited the maze and the grand gardens themselves, he returned to venturing down the halls and peeked into the art room. The art room had an interior made entirely out of gold and was where the gifts to the Dragon King would be stored. Many of these gifts were sculptures of fantastical beasts such as Pegasi or dragons, each forged out of elements such as ice or crystal and imbued with magic so they would never lose their beauty. And in the case of the ice sculptures, so they would never melt. He was greeted by any and all members of staff he came across, whether they were merely dragons who maintained the castle itself or elemental dragons who served as members of the Dragon Guard, his father's personal battalion of guards where members were chosen from among their kin by the Genso themselves to protect their divine lord. Two of the Dragon Guard members stood outside, guarding the massive doors that were crafted from the ore of meteors and melded with magical enchantments. The sleek, silvery reptiles focused their obsidian orbs upon the human before them. Ryujin-sama is expecting you, Kankaku-sama. The Iron Dragons stated in their gruff tones. Kankaku nodded his head and watched as the Iron Dragons merely gave a pulse of magic energy into the doors. The heavy doors responded to the acts of the Dragon Guard members and they opened inwards. Kankaku took a deep breath and exhaled slowly, calming his nerves and quieting his mind. No matter how many times he moved to enter the throne room of the Dragon King, he always grew nervous. The throne room was beautiful in many ways. It was created from dark earth and had numerous amounts of crystals of various colors, shapes and sizes jutting out. Stalactites and stalagmites were as numerous as the crystals. Waterfalls lay on either side of him, pouring forth from the walls of the throne room and into the flowing rivers which meandered to fall into the massive pool which seemed almost otherworldly as it reflected the glow of the crystals. Wafting lazily above his head, beautiful orbs of white light floated through wisps of pure darkness, the gift of pure beauty that was presented to the first Dragon King by the first light and darkness dragons and continued to remain there for eternity with the Dragon King's chambers. Kinkaku stepped across the pool, using his control over space to do so, before he came to a stop at the base of a massive mountain of jewels and precious stones among other things. He did not look up. His head kept down to face the ground as he placed himself on bended knee. He remained silent for quite a while until finally, a powerful and deep voice spoke. Insert music. Fairy Tale Dragon King, rise to your feet and raise your head, my son. The simple command was enough to send a chill down his spine. Power filled the words and it provided him with a mixture of comfort, fear and a willingness to obey all at the same time. Yes, Chichiyu. Kinkaku obeyed, rising to his full height and looking up at the magnificent creature that lay upon the mountain of wealth. His silver scales were as brilliant as the stars that were scattered throughout the void, and the black flame-like marking which decorated his form served to provide a stark contrast. His eyes were the same blinding white as the light of Waisalohia, and was something he and his siblings all had due to their status as divine dragons. He had a lengthy snout, much like the dragons that were depicted in the days of Camelot, and a pair of sharp, silver horns which sprouted from his skull. Large spines lined his back. His feather-like wings unfurled majestically, creating small gusts of wind that howled throughout the cavernous throne room. Powerful and strong muscles made his underbelly which were black with flecks of silver, as if his entire flesh were forged from the cosmos as it glittered brilliantly like starlight. His claws and talons were sharp and were capable of tearing apart even the greatest of foes. The same could be said for the fangs that lined his jaws. A long tail slithered across the mountain of precious materials, said tail being tipped with a massive club that was glowing a bright blue like a comet. His very breath distorted the space in front of him and the silver and black aura of magic energy that continuously outlined his form was intense, making it feel as if gravity itself had increased significantly around his mighty form. This was Zenu, divine dragon of the void and the sixth Dragon King. Zenu gave a hum of recognition as he looked down at his son from his throne of jewels. The sky dragons have healed you well, Kinkaku. You have made sure to thank them for their service, did you not? I did, Chichiyu. However, though they are the greatest healers in the universe, they have failed to heal me completely as I now bear a scar. Kinkaku replied. He opened out his new white vest slightly and revealed the haphazard formation of scar tissue on his left pectoral, near to the location of where his heart was. Your voice bears a tone of dislami the sky dragons for not being able to heal you properly? No, I am merely disappointed in myself. You have searched far and wide across Earthland to find Agnologia, and upon finding his Dragonslayer, you tasked me with killing him. I apologize for my failure, Chichiyu. Indeed you did. Agnologia is the divine dragon of energy, but he has taken the title that the world of Earthland has given him, the Black Dragon of the Apocalypse, very seriously. Something which he has passed on to his son. I warned you that this battle against the son of Agnologia would be difficult and that underestimating him would be a grave mistake on your part, and yet you ignored it. You will now forever be forced to remember your folly and be forced to gaze upon it for the rest of your life. Kinkaku winced as he heard the sharp tone that his father spoke with. The sixth Dragon King's shining white eyes then gained a softer glow as he shook his head with a sigh. But, in spite of this, I am glad to see you are alright. I would be filled with great displeasure if my son were to have perished after so many years of being among the humans. You are too kind, Chichu. Kinkaku chuckled, smiling brightly as his silver-scaled father. Now that I am healed and back into fighting shape, I know not to underestimate my cousin anymore. With your all-encompassing gaze to peer through the void, finding my cousin so that I can do battle with him once more. I swear that this time I will not fail you, and will end him. I have located my brother's son during the time it took for the sky dragons to heal your body after your duel. But you will not be going off to fight him, nor will I allow it. Zenu stated. The void Dragonslayer's eyes widened in shock. Chichiyu, why? I may have made the mistake of underestimating him, but you know that I have always learned from my mistakes. I will know that in order to defeat him I shall use the greatest of a Dragonslayer's abilities. Nothing short of Doragon Fosu will defeat him, and I. Silence. Zenu's roar echoed throughout the cavernous throne room and the void Dragonslayer was immediately silenced. And what makes you so sure that you will be able to topple your cousin so easily, dear nephew? A male voice emerged from the mighty dragon that came from a portal of swirling blue energy. The sound of a ticking clock was heard for a matter of moments before the portal closed, the ticking ceasing immediately as it did so. The dragon was similar in size and as the sixth Dragon King, but was much thinner. He bore scales that were a blinding shade of blue that was more brilliant than the electric blue-scaled subspecies of the lightning dragons and the ocean blue scales of the water dragons. Turquoise flame-like markings decorated his scales. His underbelly was white, and if one looked at it, it gave the appearance of being an empty white void that vanished into eternity. His wings were covered in scales, but gave off a feathered appearance just as his elder siblings' wings did. His tail was whip-like, serpentine just like his body, and tipped with 4 sharp spikes that were an identical shade of white as his teeth and claws. Their curved spikes which grew from his knees and elbows, and 2 more spikes jutted out from the blue-scaled dragon's face, A bright sapphire of some sort glowed with power. A blue and turquoise aura of magic energy, not unlike Zenu's black and silver aura, outlined his body. His glowing white eyes bore the same look of divinity as Zenu's, but even though they bore no pupils nor irises, the son of the Dragon King was able to see his dual hair-colored nephew deadpan gaze.
Seikaku Oji-sama, I have fought against actual dragons, and I have slain actual dragons.
Kinkaku. You are my favorite nephew. The female voice that lay to the left of the Dragon King was calm, but carried a weight that was akin to that of the voices of the dragons of the void and time. Her appearance was more muscular than that of even the muscular Dragon Kings, but she was equal in height to her brothers. Her scales were a beautiful shade of white with golden flame-like markings adorning them, but they gave a more armor-like appearance. Her joint areas and the upper portion of her face were covered in much thicker scales than the rest of her body. Her underbelly was brighter than the gold which made up Zenu's throne. Her wings had a feathery appearance like that of her brother, and was also covered in her scales. Sharp ivory spines traced the length of her, starting from the back of her head to the tip of her tail. Her claws and teeth were as black as the scales of Agnologia, but the most intriguing feature of said teeth were the fact that two of her upper fangs were much larger than the rest of her teeth, like the draconian equivalent of a saber-toothed cat. A pair of ivory horns sprouted from her head, seeming to originate from the supraorbital region of her skull. Her glowing white eyes looked at the annoyed appearance of her nephew. I am your only nephew, Jiraku Oba-sama, Kinkaku chuckled. Not since we found out about the existence of the Dragonslayer of Agnologia. Kinkaku's golden eyes narrowed at that, but the forest dragon took no heed of it.
However, you are not the only Dragonslayer to have slain dragons. True, your generation of Dragonslayers has not have had to fight dragons, but it is something we divine are trying to avoid. The dragons you have fought were gifted with the ability to use magic, but I have felt the events through both the living and cosmic forces, and my brothers have gazed through the windows of space-time. You are aware of Morpheus's fall, are you not? He has informed me of his triumph over Morpheus in the reverse world, and he does wield the blades of Merlin, Excalibur and Ascalon.
His victories, while they have mostly been against humans, are still very impressive. The Time Dragon stated. Kinkaku turned to him, watching as he underwent a drastic change in appearance. What was once a tall and powerful dragon in their prime, was now replaced with the image of a much smaller version. He looked very much like a dragon that just entered its infant stages. He flapped his tiny wings to keep himself aloft in the air, but his white eyes, though much larger as if to enhance the innocence which he portrayed, still glowed with power and retained the wisdom that came with being the Time Dragon. Your pride guides your hand, just as many a Dragonslayer has. However, he has also shown to be driven by a purpose. It is dark in nature, but it acts in tandem with his pride. It is because of that he went to such lengths to try and have you killed. That is an understatement, Seikaku Oji-sama. The Void Dragonslayer scoffed. He actually used the full might of Excalibur against me, but I proved I could match it. That is why I believe I have a chance at victory should I go up against him in a second battle. Please grant me my chance at redemption, Chichiyu. Your words betray you, Kinkaku. The Blue Dragon of Time said as he shifted into his original adult form. You speak of redemption, but that is not your motive. Your pride has been wounded by the fact that he has managed to scar you. Kinkaku's head dropped with a sigh of defeat. That is correct. We are well aware of your skills, nephew. Seikaku's child form went through another significant change, becoming much older than even the adult form of his prime. His scales were a slightly duller shade of blue and his lean yet powerful muscles were a bit smaller, giving him a frail appearance. There were also areas of his face that appeared to be sunken in, especially around his glowing eyes. After all, Zenu was the one who raised you and taught you the branches of magic that you now know. The reason Oni-sama is not allowing you to go off to fight the son of Agnologia is not due to a lack of skills nor your abilities, nephew. Juryoku stated. The reason is that when your fight came to its conclusion after you both destroyed a great portion of the moon, you were both falling barface. You used what little strength you had left to come here for healing, so you did not bear witness to the fact that the anima had opened up to take the members of the 9 you and Hashirama encountered, to Aeolus. So you're saying that my cousin was taken up by the anima? He asked. The Void Dragon nodded before raising a single claw. He drew a line with his claw against the open space, but his powers over the void were called upon and Kinkaku watched as space warped in front of him. The window of the void opened up to reveal the image of the Apocalypse Dragonslayer sitting in a magic four-wheeler alongside a young blue-haired girl, a blonde girl and a pink-haired man. He journeys across the land which bears no magic and appears to have Nakama by his side. You are my son and my Dragonslayer, Kinkaku, controller of the void, and you have the ability to go to this world. The oath of the dragon I have made when I took the throne, the oath which forbade me from interfering with anything beyond the realm of Algesia. Interfering with the realm of man and beast will keep me from assisting you. You may be able to go there, but you will not be able to leave as your ability to draw upon the void will be lost alongside that of your magic once you enter Aeolus. Then how am I supposed to finish our battle? Kankaku exclaimed. That remains to be seen, my son. Until the day you can return to the field of battle against my brother's son, you shall remain here under the protection of the dragons of Algesia. The brown-skinned Dragonslayer bit his lip. He wanted to argue, but his father's words were a law and it was obvious that he stood by his decision to have him remain in the dragon homeland. He dropped his head in defeat before going on down bended knee once more. Very well, Chichiu. The Void Dragonslayer bowed his head and the silver-scaled Dragon King nodded. Good. Now leave. Kankaku nodded, but just as he rose to his feet and turned to leave, he froze. The three divine dragons turned to each other and then to the Void Dragonslayer, their curiosity increasing when the physically 20-year-old man turned back around to face them. Chichiu. I wish to ask you something concerning what my cousin told me during our battle. Go on. Zenu motioned for his son to continue with a wave of his claw. He said that you did not earn the throne and that you stole it from Aknologia. He said you made a deal with a human, the black mage Zareth of all people. In order to do so, he said you were a usurper. Zenu's eyes widened, his fangs were bared and his killing intent filled the entire throne room in a single burst. Insert music. Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood envy revealed. That insolent brat dares to call me, the Dragon King, such words. To insult the Dragon King is to insult the very ruler of the universe itself. I am Zenu, Dragon of the Void and 6th Dragon King. And you, my son, insult me by showing such doubts in the legitimacy of my rule simply because of the words you heard from the son of a traitor. Remove yourself from here at once. Kankaku knew better than to continue to converse with his father at this point. The rage and killing intent the silver-scaled divine was exerting was practically palpable. He turned tail and was watched by the shining white eyes of the 6th Dragon King as he left the throne room. The massive doors opened and closed with resounding slams, and once they were assured to be closed, Zenu's rage-infused growl increased in volume and intensity, turning into a full-blown roar that would have shaken heaven itself. My own son is questioning my rule. Why is it that Aknologia must continue to be a thorn in my side? Aknologia's boy lives and has placed a scar on Kankaku, and that despicable dragon continues to evade my detection. What is the point of being the all-seeing Dragon King when I cannot even find one despicable dragon? Zenu roared and slashed the air, ripping apart the space and causing it warp. Where there was once a crystal-laden wall, there was now a gaping hole as it was sucked into a random area of the void of space. Then, it appeared as if the portion of lost rock was going through regeneration as the rock and crystals came back. It was as if Zenu had not even removed it at all. This is sacred ground, and even you know it is frowned upon to destroy any part of it. Sikaku spoke as he regressed from his elderly form into his childlike one. I apologize, Sikaku. But everything revolving around Aknologia does not have a positive effect on me. Obviously, Sikaku's form suddenly transformed in size as he returned to his prime. Oni-sama, we have stood by your side ever since you took the throne. Aknologia's fall from grace was something no one in our generation will ever forget, but Oni-sama, this is becoming ridiculous. The Force Dragon stated. Zenu's eyes widened and his rage spiked, but his younger sister raised her claws in gesture for him to wait until she had finished speaking. Ever since you sent him through that portal that sent him to Earthland, you have searched far and wide across the realm of the humans for over 400 years. You feared his return for so long that it has begun to take its toll on you. I fear his return because he will return, Zenu roared. Sikaku, you told me that our eldest sibling would one day return to Algesia, did you not? The time dragon shifted to his elderly form, nodding his head. I have. As the dragon who holds the element of time within his grasp, other than this one which causes me to shift between my forms as a child, adult and elderly appearances, I have had the side effect of seeing events that have been and are yet to be. The return of the energy dragon cannot be stopped for he is a divine, just as we are. We cannot do anything when it comes to the events that circle around another divine.
He will come, but you are the Dragon King, Oni-sama. Jueryoku raised a forelimb and patted her silver-scaled brother on the side of his face. The golden-scaled Force Dragon smiled warmly at him in reassurance. You have the power of the past kings within you, and despite Aknologia's immense strength, I am confident in your victory should he return.
Your words are kind, Sikaku. Juryoku, we are your advisors and your siblings. You have our counsel whether you want it or not, Oni-sama. Outer Wall, Royal Capital, Daedalus Night had fallen upon the parallel world by the time the trio of Dragonslayers and Lucy had arrived at the gates to the capital. Dragian forced the four-wheeler to drift, slamming his foot down on the brakes as he stopped a few kilometers away.
This is as close as we can get you to the capital without being spotted by the guards from the Royal Army. Ashley said as she turned back to face the passengers. You'll have the darkness from it being nighttime as your ally, and while they do sometimes have legions acting as aerial patrol, well, I still can't over the fact that you killed one with just physical strength. The only people I know in Daedalus that are capable of that are the members of the Shiroikage Corp. The 4 citizens of Earthland tilted their heads in confusion.
Who are they? Lucy asked her Daedalus counterpart. They are the strongest combatants throughout the entirety of the royal army. Dragian was the one to reply to the blonde. During our recon missions within the capital, we managed to get info on them. They hold the ranks of being the 9 most powerful soldiers ever, but they are mainly used for assassination missions. Don't let that fool you though. When they are allowed to let loose, they really let loose. There was a series of guilds banding together to form a rebellion against the kingdom a few years back, but Faust sent them out and they completely destroyed them. Not one person survived that attack. They are ranked by number, and the higher the number, the stronger they are. Ashley explained. Gaara is rank 1, and is the greatest spear wielder who is even capable of outclassing Urza Nightwalker. Yugito Ni told us she's a dog fanatic and fights like one too. They say she once tore out the throats of her kills, which earned her the moniker, the Mad Dog. That's pretty hardcore. Natsu and Lucy commented. Naruto remained quiet as he couldn't really be one to judge, seeing as how he ripped out Cobra's throat in the exact same manner during the battle against Oracion Siete. Yeah, well, numbers 3 through 5 are just as hardcore. They specialize in close combat. Yagura, Roshi and Han are literally so strong that they can shatter your bones and rupture organs. They are the ones who usually assassinate via breaking your neck. Or your head. Or pretty much your entire body. Everyone's sweat dropped at how Dragian was listing the ways that people have died. Yeah, nice way to die, huh? Ashley commented sarcastically. Now there, 6, Yu Takata. He's a demolitions expert and seems to have a rather odd craving for fizzy drinks. Never seen a picture of him not holding a bottle of cola in his hands. It's really weird, but he's as good as they come and he can get rid of a body pretty well too. When the other members of the Shirokage work to get rid of the body, they tend to still leave traces because they like to make a mark. Yu Takata though, he's thorough. Every time we received a tip he was going on a job, we would try to go off and warn the target, but they would already be dead and there's no trace of them. Flesh. Bones. All gone. Thorough as hell, but their top 3, numbers 7 to 9 are the closest things to monsters in human form that you will ever come across. Fu and Karabi are juggernauts. Can't be stopped and can't be beaten. But nothing comes close to their captain. Menma Nightwalker, Urza's twin brother. Years of following Nightwalker's trail and her following ours led us to actually getting a glimpse of him, and he looks. Ashley looked at Naruto. Just like you. I see. Naruto muttered. So even in another world, Urza and I are related. The 4 citizens of Earthland then climbed out of the magical 4-wheeler as Dragian shifted the gears in preparation of driving off into the moonlit night. Thank you for taking care of us. Wendy bowed as she hopped out of the 4-wheeler with her surrogate brother. Ashley and Dragian gave her toothy grins in return before looking to their Earthland counterparts. Good luck with whatever it is you guys plan to do. We'd love to help you look for your friend, Kurumi or something. Kurama. Naruto and Wendy corrected the brown-eyed sadist.
Yeah, that guy. But we got our own shit to do, so again, good luck. The 2 Daedalus Fairy Tail Guild members gave the mock salutes before Dragon planted his foot on the accelerator. The wheels burst into the flame and the engine roared, and soon the duo were nothing but vanishing specks in the wasteland. The group of 4 had wasted no time in moving across the wasteland towards the western gates that led to the kingdom capital. The 4 remained hidden behind a large boulder and observed the small number of guards which stood at the ready, their spears gripped tightly and their shields held firmly. There's 12 guards. Natsu muttered. Congratulations. You can count. Naruto replied sarcastically. He received a glare from the son of Igneal, but the pink-haired firebrand was stopped from doing anything as Lucy placed a hand on her guildmate's chest. Natsu, don't. And you need to stop provoking him. Lucy then stood up and whipped out a golden key. Gate of the Virgin, I open thee. Virgo. With the sound of a bell and a flash of golden magic energy, a rift in spacetime was generated. The gate closed just as quickly as it had come, and the pink-haired celestial spirit stood at attention before her master. Haim-sama, is it punishment time? No, and stop asking me that every time I summon you, Lucy whispered harshly. I will attempt to commit to the task, Haim-sama, but I make no promises. The blonde sighed in exasperation as her head fell forward. Just dig some tunnels and loosen the bedrock beneath the feet of those guards, would you? Virgo's green eyes shifted away from her summoner and looked at the 12 members of Daedalus's royal army. Of course, Haim-sama. Virgo hopped into the air and performed a swan dive, the ground literally breaking down as soon as her fingertips made contact with it. The earth rumbled for a few moments, and the guards of the western gate were sent into a panic as they thought they were experiencing an earthquake. They took a few steps to run for cover, but that served to be their undoing, for just as they took a single step, the ground fell apart. Massive holes opened up and the guards were practically swallowed up by the earth. Their screams of terror were quickly silenced as the sounds of chains clinking accompanied that of choking sounds. Within a minute, the night was once again silent.
Virgo jumped out of one of the holes and performed a spectacular combination of flips and twists, sticking the landing and throwing her hands up in the air as a gymnast would do after performing their routine. The maid uniform-wearing spirit then gave her compatriots a glance as Wendy, Natsu and Lucy were suddenly holding up large white cards bearing the number 10. "You flatter me," Virgo spoke in her robotic tone of voice. "By the way, Virgo, what exactly did you do to them?" Lucy asked as she walked over to the edge of one of the holes. She spied the unconscious guards as they lay within the depths of the earth like puppets that just had their strings cut. "I choked them before applying blunt force trauma to the backs of their heads. They will not be getting up for quite a while, Haim-sama." Virgo bowed before gesturing to one of the holes in the ground. "I have taken it upon myself to also ensure a stable tunnel that goes beneath the gates. Since you are moving under the cover of night and it appears that Haim-sama's task requires stealth, I have prepared the exit to be within one of the alleys." "Wow." Natsu and Lucy's eyes widened in shock at how much foresight and the level of deduction that the pink-haired spirit displayed. "Thank you, Virgo-san," Wendy said with a small bow, a gesture which Virgo returned. "Impressive," Naruto commented with a raised eyebrow as he made his way over to the hole by the gate. He turned back to the former Heartfilia air and gave her a nod of approval. "Looks like you and your spirits are not as useless as you tend to make yourself out to be." The brown-eyed celestial spirit mage gave her fellow blonde a deadpan stare. "I can't tell if you're complimenting me or insulting me." "Both," was his reply. With that, the son of Acknowledgia hopped down into the hole. "Oh Oni-san, wait for me," Wendy stuttered as she followed after the blonde. Natsu jumped in as well. "Smartass Dragonslayer." Lucy sighed. She pointed the golden key at Virgo, performing a forced closure to return her to the celestial spirit world, before she followed after the 3 Dragonslayers. The tunnel was pretty much a straight line, but it took a veer to the right when they made their way towards the exit hole. Probably because of the alleyway's location. The 4 mages climbed out the hole and glanced out of the alleyway. It was still bustling with activity and lights, but the darkness of the alleyway kept their forms hidden. The winds howled and some of the shifting air molecules flowed through the alley, the sense of the capital city meeting the noses of all that were present. Naruto sniffed the air and his eyes widened as he registered the sense. Natsu and Wendy gained similar expressions as they inhaled deeply through their noses. "I have their sense," the 3 declared simultaneously. Lucy's eyes bugged out of her head in shock when Natsu suddenly grabbed her by the hand and pulled her along. "Oi, hold up, whose sense? Is it Roshi-san's? Urza's? Gajil's? Juvia's?" Her questions went unanswered as they ran out of the alley and into the lights of the street, but they had their chosen path laid out for them. They shifted through the crow going so far as to actually shove people out of the way. He ignored their cries of him being a jackass and a rude hooligan. Their footsteps pounded against the cobblestone pathways until they came to a sudden halt before the large lacrima in the center of the city. "Oni saw. I mean, Ogo no Fujin." The cry of alarm from the brown-eyed Titania of fairy tale met the ears of all present. "Roshi-sensei. Natsu, Salamander, Kurigane. Juvia-san, Gajil-san, Urza-san, Wendy, Fujin? Iron Dragon. Fujin-san, Water Dragon, Gai-sensei. Lee." All forms of yelling came to a halt when the citizens of Earthland all turned to look at a rather horrific sight. 2 men, one looking to be about Naruto's age and another who looked to be in his late 40s, were yelling each other's names. They had bowl-shaped haircuts, and were dressed in matching green, skin-tight leotards of some kind and orange leg warmers. Their most horrific features were their monstrously thick eyebrows, so thick that they were practically rectangular in shape. The 2 were hugging each other. Rather tightly, tears fell like a waterfall from their eyes. "Oni-san, I can't see. What's going?" The blue-haired Dragonslayer was quickly grabbed by Naruto, her tiny form held tightly as he faced her away from the traumatic sight. "A Dragonslayer you may be, but I will not allow you to gaze upon this horror Imoudo. Do not worry, I shall shield you until it is over," he stated. His blue eyes were wide in disgust and horror, but no matter how much he tried, he couldn't look away, and it burned. "Let us go take part in the springtime of youth, Lee. We shall run 500 laps around the castle tonight. And if we can't, we shall do 1,000 laps on our hands. That's my student. Let us go, Lee, Yash, Gai-sensei." The pair then took off at a great speed, kicking up clouds of dust as a result. The silence exhibited by the small group of Dragonslayers, Urza and Lucy, was practically deafening. They were pale as ghosts, their eyes wide and their mouths agape. Clouds of despair hung over their heads, and Wendy, who managed to wriggle her way out of her overprotective brother's grip, could only watch them in confusion. "Wendy-chan." The blue-haired Dragonslayer's ears twitched as she turned around, a wide grin forming on her face a split second later as she caught sight of her fellow Dragonslayers.
"Fu-san, Haku-san," she waved excitedly to them. The Dragon Slayers of Wind and Ice came to a stop as they managed to navigate through the crowd and get to the young preteen mage.
Wendy, man, are you a sight for sore eyes? Fu dropped down and hugged the daughter of Grandine. I thought we would have lost you. If we did, I'm pretty sure I'd be dead when Naru, the mint-haired girl, let her go before looking at the horrified expression printed on her superior's face, as well as on the faces of everyone else that was present. What happened here? You look like you guys saw something horrific. Lucy pointed a shaking finger in the direction that Lee and Guy ran off in. Dee, did anyone else see that? It was as if she hadn't even heard a word the Wind Dragonslayer said. My eyes. Roshi muttered as he fell to his knees. I thought we were impervious to burns, but my eyes. Natsu rubbed his eyes in an effort to try and see if he could remove what he just saw. Juvia cannot unsee it. Juvia cannot unsee it. Juvia cannot unsee it. The Water Dragonslayer was hugging her knees close to her chest and rocking back and forth. Can any of us unsee that? Gajeel muttered. When I find a way to get back my magic, I am using the Mokushiryu no Baikugan on myself, and I am going to wipe that image from my mind completely, Naruto said before he felt a comforting hand resting on his shoulder. As amusing as it is to see my adorable Obito in such a state, we need to focus on the task at hand, Haku said. The Ice Dragonslayer gestured to the gray lacrima, but more specifically at the crimson magic energy which lay within it. For some reason, the energy within this lacrima gives off a magic energy signature similar to that of Kurama-chan's. And Chomei's. Fu piped. If the magic energy signatures of Kurama and Chomei are in there, then that means Sun's might be in there too. The red-haired Dragonslayer spoke. And you are? Fu asked. Roshi, son of Volcanus and the Lava Dragonslayer. He didn't even turn to face his fellow Dragonslayer when he replied as he steadily walked up to the lacrima. The Lava Dragonslayer rested his hand against the massive sphere. He stretched out his senses, feeling the energy which was emanating from it. His coal-colored eye widened before he turned to his fellow members of Earthland. Son Goku. Sun's magic energy signature. I can feel it in here. What do you mean, Roshi-sensei? Natsu asked. The magic of the nine resides within that lacrima. Naruto answered before turning to Haku and Fu. Have you managed to find out the reason why? Also, can we break the lacrima? We haven't. Fu shook her head. And we can't break it because it's similar in structure to the lacrimas that were used by the second and third generation Dragonslayers. The moment that lacrima breaks, any magic energy that's stored within is going to dissipate. Chomei told me that the nine are creatures of pure magic energy and that they can't die, as they simply reform, but I'm not willing to take that chance. Second generation Dragonslayer? Natsu asked. You mean like Laxus? And what's a third generation? Gajeel added his 2 cents. Everyone else, signs Naruto, nodded in agreement with Gajeel about wanting to know about the unknown third generation Dragonslayer. Third gens were a prototype creation made by the Magic Council in an effort to replace the second generation when it failed. They take actual Dragonslayers and implant a dragon lacrima into their bodies. Fu explained. The Dragonslayer they experimented on was the Earth Dragonslayer, daughter of Welgaia the Earth Dragon. However, she died because the lacrima ended up turning unstable when she entered Doragon Fosu. Oh, enough pleasantries, Wind Dragon. The son of Agnologia growled out in annoyance. We need to get the nine out now. And we will, Otuto. Haku assured the blonde. We went to the bar and asked some questions to which we got answers to most of them. Roshi, Gajeel and Juvia all turned to Urza with knowing looks as the redhead rolled her eyes at them. She flipped them the bird before focusing back on the daughter of Glacia once more. The lacrima is apparently an invention that distributes magic energy across the entire capital city and is described as being limitless in its output. Seeing as the energy is provided by that of the nine, the description is far from exaggeration. Also, it appears that the energy that the lacrima is receiving, the magic of the nine, leads underground, beneath the castle. The nine are most surely located there, and the only way to get there would be to dig beneath the castle. However, we have no way of telling how deep we'll have to dig to get to them, Haku explained. So then why don't we just bust down the castle gates, find this King Faust guy, threaten him to get the information of the nine and then find them? Natsu asked as he slammed his fists together with a grin. I'm all fired up. We may be stronger than most, my young apprentice, but we are not juggernauts. The royal army numbers in the thousands, and while we can all probably take out quite a number of them, unless we have our full powers available to us, there is no way we can handle the entire army. Roshi replied to the Fire Dragonslayer. So what do you suggest we do, Roshi? Urza asked. We climb over and sneak into the castle. We keep our heads down. We take down some guards, interrogate them for information such as where Faust is and if they know anything about the nine. Afterwards, we steal their armor, dump the bodies in the bushes or in a closet or something, and then we make our way through without being bothered. Roshi replied. "Ch as I respect your ingenuity, the fallibility of this plan of yours is quite apparent," Naruto said. Ogo no Fujin, for all your power, you must realize that we can't all be destroyers of mountains and shakers of the earth like you. The son of Volcanus smirked before tapping his forehead. Sometimes a little ingenuity is all that is needed, plus some faith. Naruto snorted. Seeing as how we are desperate and in need of options, I will go along with your plan, son of Volcanus. However, I will make it apparent to you when this plan of yours falls apart and doesn't work. Insert music. Sword Art Online survived the Swordland. Throne room, royal capital. Daedalus. The great doors of white, gold and royal blue opened and the sounds of feet meeting the marble floors echoed throughout the massive throne room. The footsteps came to an abrupt halt as their owners stood at attention before the king of Daedalus. The elderly man stroked his beard as he looked at the members of his royal guard who stood before him. Wars often occurred both outside and within the walls of the capital city, but the 9 that stood before him were his personal assassins and also his most powerful knights within the royal guard. They served to kill any and all who opposed the rule of the royal family, continuously fighting the battles that no one else had to. In essence, they were a suicide squad, but they were far too good to actually commit to the suicide part of that title. Their battles often took place in the shadows, fighting the battles that no one else had to and the battles that were fought so as to ensure the peace and security of the Edelesian kingdom as a whole by taking care of those who would threaten it before they could even gain the momentum to do so. They were his finest warriors. The Shiroikage Corps was composed of merely 9 individuals and the phrase quality over quantity was truly emphasized when it came to these warriors of Daedalus. After all, there was no reason for a group of assassins to be compared to that of an army in terms of numbers. The uniforms of the Shiroikage members were made up of baggy-looking, white bodysuits. 3 long black rectangles were found on the forearms, while 3 smaller, black rectangles were stitched onto the areas of the bodysuits on the shoulders and knee areas. The legs of the suits were tucked into their dark gray, armored boots, and dark gray gauntlets covered their hands. X-shaped, dark gray pieces of metal crossed over their bodies and attached at the back, the center and lower parts of the X being wrapped securely with white bandages. The lower left portion of the X had 9 red tassels, each tassel decorated with a turquoise orb, which hung from the metal by a loop. The pieces of metal actually served to attach a dark gray chest plate to their bodies. The chest plates had a red swirl-like pattern which made a stark contrast against the darker material. Each member of the Shiroikage was equipped with a todachi that was attached to their backs and lay within a white sheath. Wrapped around their foreheads were headbands made of white cloth with rectangular metal plates stitched into the cloth, with each plate bearing the kanji for a certain number from 1 to 9. Members of the Shiroikage, Faust greeted his personal assassin group. You all have been chosen specifically for a task that no other member of the Knights of Daedalus can undertake as only the ones whom I believe to be the strongest among my forces should be graced with performing it. You are too kind, King Faust. The Shiroikage member with the kanji for 3 spoke. He was a young male with gray hair that was messy looking and pupil-less eyes that were pretty shade of pink. A stitch-like scar ran from underneath his left eye, all the down his cheek. His most impressive characteristic was his height, as he towered over most of his fellow Shiroikage at an impressive 6 feet and 3 inches. You underestimate yourself, Yagura, Faust said. After all, it was you, alongside Kurabi and Utataka, that managed to kill off some of those horrendous guilds. Tell me, were you 3 successful in your latest strike? Kurabi bore the headband which had the kanji for 8 engraved on its metal plate. Kurabi was a dark-skinned man with light blonde hair that seemed almost white due to its shade, and a goatee. He also wore a pair of oval-shaped sunglasses. He was the sole member of the Shiroikage Corps that bested Yagura in height with a towering 6 feet and 5 inches. His musculature was well-defined and his heavily built body was so large that it made the baggy-looking bodysuit that was his uniform appear skin-tight, and it served to enhance his powerful, gargantuan image. In essence, he was what most people thought of when they imagined what a giant would look like. However, as powerful and fearsome as he was, that was all ruined for you see, Kurabi had this annoying habit that served to annoy nearly everyone around him. Oh my good Kane, this tale deserves to be told in the form of an eloquent poem that will leave shock written across your face. A tale that will be worthy of your grace. He spoke in rhymes. A well-educated man who spent a large portion of his time in the royal library when he wasn't out performing missions for Faust, Kurabi took a great liking to poetry. He grew to like it to such a degree that he consciously made an effort to not speak like a normal person, and instead tried to make a rhyming poem out of every single thing he wanted to say, much to the chagrin of those around him. The king's eye twitched and the other members of the Shiroikage groaned loudly, making their displeasure well known. Ahem. Kurabi cleared his throat in preparation. The king's eye twitched rapidly, and the other members of the Shiroikage groaned loudly to make their displeasure well known throughout the throne room. Even the members of the royal guard who were present rolled their eyes in exasperation. Blades flash as the trio of death dash. The dead do not sing as they hear the sword's metallic rain. Their blood stained the ground, and thanks to you Dakata, their bodies can no longer be found, huzzah. The dark-skinned man raised an eyebrows, a wide grin on his face as he looked to his superior for his review on his usage of language. Faust's eyes stopped twitching. but the grimace on his face was paramount. "Your rhyming is forever abysmal, my dear Kurabi," Faust deadpanned. "I shall commit to making sure my poetry will be worthy of praise someday. I will go all the way," Kurabi proclaimed with an exaggerated bow to the king of Edelis. "Please don't," Utakata muttered as he drank from a plastic bottle of cola before burping disgustingly loud, small bubbles escaping through his mouth in a rather cartoonish fashion. Utakata bore the kanji of 6. He was a tall, thin young man with pale golden eyes and brown hair that reached to his shoulders. His side parting let a large portion of his bangs cover the left side of his face. "Utakata, that's disgusting, and Kairabi, spare us the torture and just stop making poetry. Fu." The Shiroikage corpse holder of the kanji for 7 whined. "Neko-chan, how can you survive hearing this?" The holder of the kanji for 2, Yugito ni, giggled like a high school girl that had seen a cute boy. Her dark-colored eyes were staring down at something that was in her hands. Fu's orange eyes stared quizzically at the blonde woman before they widened in shock as Yugito glanced up from whatever it was she was looking at. Her blonde hair, which had been styled in a manner that gave it the illusion of looking like dog ears, mysteriously flapped as if they were actual ears. She pumped her arm high into the air as she revealed the contents of her hands for all to see. It was a picture of a white-furred puppy. "Look at my cute puppy, Akamaru. Isn't it adorable?" "Yugito-chan's showing US Akamaru's picture all the time again," Fu exclaimed in shock. "I wish I had something like that to distract me to such a level so I wouldn't have to hear Kurabi's poetry every day. The Shiroikage's 4 holder Rosh not appreciate the art of poetry that I create. Thus, the day we meet on the battlefield, defeat shall be your fate, huzzah."
Please stop. The Edelis counterparts of Gara and Han, holders of the kanji for 1 and 5 feet respectively, groaned.
"All of you are heathens who eat paste. Surely our esteemed Menma Taiko has great taste." Huzzah! The 8 members of the Shiroikage Corps turned to their esteemed leader. His headband bore the kanji for 9, the number that was reserved for the strongest of the Shiroikage and for the one who held the position of their leader. He stood at a height of 6 feet and 2 inches, his arms crossed over his chest as he stood calmly and quietly beside Kurabi. His eyes were closed as if he were asleep, but his wild, spiky blonde hair shifted as he turned his head. Sharp blue eyes snapped open as they stared directly up at Kurabi, and the dark-skinned poet was silent as he awaited Menma's words. The serious expression of Menma's face suddenly vanished and the blonde scratched the back of his head in embarrassment, a sheepish look on his face. "Ooh, sorry, what did you say?" Everyone in the throne room sweat dropped at the leader of the Shiroikage. "Taiko, you wound me by not listening to my poetry. But Kurabi, you're terrible at being a poet." Kurabi's look of sadness suddenly became one of complete and utter shock. He fell to his knees and sobbed crocodile tears. All of it gone. Years of poetry school, wasted. Faust clapped his hands and the Shiroikage immediately returned their attention back to their king. "That's enough squabbling for the day. However, as I said before, I have a task laid out that only the 9 of you, the members of the Shiroikage, can do. As you are aware, due to the creation of the unlimited amount of magic that can be spread across the kingdom, our Chief of Staff of the Royal Army, Bairo, has long since begun the creation of a piece of technology that would help in giving our forces the ability to use magic. Not through magical items, but through our own bodies, just as the Exceed can." The Shiroikage turned to face Bairo as the diminutive man gave them a small smile. Faust rose from his chair, leading the way with Bairo through the massive halls of the castle. The 9 combat experts followed dutifully behind their leader and moved down a hallway that led to the left of the throne room. Insert music. 2 steps from Hell Dark Ages. They moved through the maze-like interior of the castle before they began descending the spiraling staircase that led to the dungeon level of the castle. The cries of pain and agony echoed through the halls as they began to walk along through the stone-made labyrinth that contained the torture chambers. Wooden doors were bolted shut, with tiny square windows that gave only a glimpse of the horrors that were taking place on the other side. Some were bathed in boiling oil. Some were forced to lay flat atop red-hot coals which would cook their flesh. The sounds of the whip cracking were followed by the screams of pain, and the begs for mercy came from those that were having their nails ripped off and the bones of their fingers and toes being broken one by one. The noises did little to bother them, either because they were used to it in the cases of Bairo and Faust, or they had heard much worse in the cases of the Shiroikage members. Bairo suddenly released a giddy cry as they reached the end of the hallway, where metal doors were guarded by a pair of muscular knights, each one brandishing a massive battle axe. "Bairo-sama. King Faust." The guards stepped aside and bent down on their knees before their superiors as the Group 11 had come to a halt as they entered the laboratory where Bairo committed his technological experiments in. They entered the lab before the doors were closed behind them. There were test tubes, centrifuges, vats of chemical substances that were of a variety of colors and scents, and numerous other pieces of scientific equipment that the 9 warriors of Edelis could not even begin to name yet alone recognize. "Follow me, this way," Bairo said as he led his king and the Shiroikage court through the lab. The diminutive man grumbled in annoyance as he pushed aside a desk filled to the brim with books and papers that were lined with equations and notes that only few would be capable of understanding. It was in the back portion of the room that the 11 occupants of the laboratory found themselves standing before a young man who was strapped vertically to the wall by heavy metal chains. His spiky black hair stuck to his forehead due to the sweat covered his body, but his dark-colored eyes were brimming with anger as he panted heavily from whatever torture Biro had put him through. He was only clothed in a pair of black pants and brown boots, but he wore no shirt, thus leaving his muscular upper body visible for all to see. Said upper body was covered in bruises and there were a few puncture marks from where Biro had drawn blood from the young man, the vials of blood resting on the table to the left of the bound individual. Looks of pity were present on Fu's and Karabi's faces as they saw the young man seemed to be no older than 17. However, the most eye-catching feature that the young man had was the dark blue symbol which was emblazoned on his chest. Who is this and why is he still alive if he is a member of Fairy Tail? Menma asked as he and his fellow Shiroikage members reached for their blades. I'm the guy who's gonna kick your fucking asses the moment I get free. That's who. Grave Fullbuster pulled on his chains in an effort to break them and choke the life out of the grinning Biro. But a few volts of electricity flowing along the length of the metal chain served to stop that as the electrocution rendered him unconscious, smoke literally rising from his body. I found this man outside the castle grounds, fighting off the members of the royal guard. He was quickly beaten and subdued despite his best efforts, however, because he bore the mark of a guild, I immediately took him down here to the torture chambers. A member of Fairy Tail would not be so stupid so as to come to the royal capital of all places, so I ran a few tests. Interestingly enough, while he does bear a similar DNA signature to that of Grey Surge of Fairy Tail, this young man here has a rather odd addition to his biology. And that would be, Yu-Gi-Oh! Motioned for Biro to continue. He has a magic circulatory system. The eyes of the Shiroikage members widened in shock, causing the Royal Army's Chief of Staff to chuckle. I had quite a similar reaction when I found out as well. However, it appears that he was also carrying these. All eyes watched as Biro reached over to the desk where Gray's blood vials were located, but instead snatched up a small, tightly capped, orange medicine bottle which had a large label marked with the letter X. What are those? Han asked. X pills, the elderly man replied. They were a secret drug formula made to try and forcibly create and activate a magical circulatory system. However, the drug proved to be too unstable and there were quite a few side effects. Death was the most common one and so the entire project was scrapped, but when I looked at these pills, the chemical structure was flawless. It was complete and it will work. But they were too weak as they wouldn't provide the necessary power to generate the creation of a magical circulatory system in people such as this. But this young man who obviously hails from our parallel world of Earthland, he provided the missing link I need to further improve on the X pill. We of Edelus can now obtain the power needed so that we will be able to topple the kingdom of Extalia. And thus, Biro created these. Faust then gestured to a second orange bottle which Biro uncapped to reveal crimson pills. The entire portion of the room they stood in was bathed in the bright crimson glow that emanated from the glowing drugs. What is this? The dog-loving Yugito asked. These are the upgraded X pills. The magic energy we managed to obtain to power the kingdom. And you 9 are the most worthy candidates to be capable of using these new drugs. Immense power will be granted to you once the operation is complete, and with it, you can serve me in the kingdom in a way you all would never have thought possible. Faust explained. Will it be painful? Edogara asked. Biro chuckled in a rather sadistic manner, something which worried the 9 members of the Shiroikage. Oh, it will be excruciating, the elderly chief of staff replied. But as the young ones say these days, no pain, no gain. Biro then poured out the bottle, revealing there to be a total of 9 pills that were made. Each pill was about the size of a ball of bubblegum that kids would often get from a gumball machine. Biro carefully sorted through the orb-shaped pills as he passed on a single one to each of the members of the Shiroikage. You will each take a pill. From there, each of you will take the position of generals of the royal army as this time we will not fail in our rise to prominence, Faust ordered as the 9 assassins now generals swallowed the pills in one swift gulp. Insert music. Naruto Shippuden Jinchuriki theme. Their eyes widened as they felt their bodies tremble and they watched in awe as crimson waves of power and energy burst forth from their bodies, scattering the pieces of laboratory technology. Biro was sent flying into the wall, but Faust gripped onto one of the sturdier tables and grinned maniacally as he watched the 9 before him undergo rapid physical changes. Their muscle mass increased. Their teeth became fangs and their nails became claws. A demonic aura cloaked their bodies, flickering and raging like an inferno of crimson. The rush. Gaara gasped out. The power. Utakata muttered as he looked over his body. I love it, Fu cackled maniacally. The army waits for you within our warships and you will lead the charge. We will conquer Extalia and we humans will take our places as the rightful rulers of the world of Edelus. Members of the Shiroikage, you have your orders, you slaughter them all. Am I clear? Faust shouted. The Shiroikage all stood at attention and saluted to their king. "Yes, your majesty." "Menma Nightwalker, my greatest weapon of the royal army of Edalis," Faust called out over the winds generated by the power of his new weapons of mass destruction. "You will be supreme commander over them, and you will lead the charge." Menma gained a feral grin as the whisker-like birthmarks on his face darkened and became more prominent. His blue eyes burned with bloodlust, but as he blinked, what was once a beautiful shade of sapphire became burning crimson and his rounded pupils became vertical slits. "Yes, your majesty." The 9 then vanished from view, wisps of crimson energy being the only remnants of them as they sped out to the courtyard. Faust swiftly turned to face Biro as the diminutive man was climbing back to his feet. "The 9 have been converted into their forms of pure energy, correct?" Faust asked. "They are stored within the central lacrima which we placed within the middle of the capital, your majesty. Your word is all that will be required and we will make the final adjustments to reroute the power from the lacrima and place it into the lacrima power core of the Dragon Knight. Do it. I want to be the one to crush that disgusting feline, shag it myself." "And what of the boy?" He gestured to the unconscious form of Grey. Faust gained a look of malicious intent as he glanced at the ice make master of Fairy Tail. "Make him an example before the royal army, boost their morale." "As you wish, my liege." Castle Courtyard, Royal City, Edalis. "I can't believe that worked," Naruto muttered as he adjusted the armor he had placed over his clothing. "Told you so." Roshi chuckled. "Roshi-sensei is so awesome." Natsu grinned toothily, earning a high five from the Lava Dragonslayer. "How did this even work? It was almost too easy," Lucy mumbled. "I still can't believe they let Wendy off without a hitch." "I mean, look at her," Urza replied to her guildmate. All eyes focused on the brown-eyed preteen as she was fighting to keep her helmet from covering too much of her face. Fortunately, they had managed to find some guards who were suffering from the condition known as dwarfism and found a bodysuit which fit her in terms of height, but in the end, the size was for a slightly larger, male individual. This fact made it even more humorously adorable as the Sky Dragonslayer raised the sleeves that completely covered her hands to adjust said loose helmet. "Oni-san, this helmet is annoying," she whined, looking up at the Apocalypse Dragonslayer with a cute pout. "You will have to suffer through it, Imo Udo," Naruto replied before turning to Urza as she stood next to him. He leaned towards her, the younger twin blinking owlishly at how intense his stare was. "What?" she asked. "Titania." He then raised a hand before plucking something from her hair. It was hexagonal in shape and shone like gold. "Why do you have glitter in your hair?" Unfortunately for Urza, her older twin brother's question reached the ears of the 3 Dragonslayers that had been her travel companions to the royal capital. Roshi, Gajeel and Juvia released stifled fits of laughter, and Urza's eyes widened. A blush of embarrassment formed on her face as her escapades at the bars suddenly came to the forefront of her mind. Her brother became rather perplexed and was about to push on the subject, when the mutterings of the other 10,000 Solider of the royal army of Edalis ended. Entering, the generals of the royal army of Edalis, a familiar-sounding voice announced. "Oh, thank the dragons." Urza thought as she and her compatriots immediately switched back to their roles as soldiers of the army. Her brown eyes then widened as she caught sight of the generals. Menma Nightwalker stood with the other 8 members of the Shiroikage, introduced to their forces by none other than Urza Nightwalker. "Mistogen wasn't kidding when he said there was the possibility of there being people here who looked like us," Roshi muttered as he spied his doppelganger. Soldiers of Edalis. A chill ran down the spines of all who knew Naruto, finding it rather fearsome that there was someone else out there that looked like him and sounded like him. If the man before them was the same in terms of strength. Well, whoever this army was prepared for, they were screwed. "You are brothers in arms who have, since the dawn of this kingdom, fought tooth and nail against foe after foe which has aimed to topple this great kingdom of ours," the newly appointed supreme commander declared. 40 years ago, it was recorded that King Faust went to the Exceed for help as we were running dry on magic energy. He was denied that and the Exceed forced him out of their homeland, from their kingdom in the sky known as Extalia. But now we have magic of our own and it will finally bring about the dream that our king has so desperately strove towards, to show those winged vermin that humanity is the superior race. The roars of agreement from the throng of soldiers. "Now climb on your legions, fly the airships and tonight we show the Exceed our magic." A burst of crimson energy surged out of the supreme commander's body, and all eyes widened in awe at Menma. They gazed upon him like a deity, and their reverence only increased when the other members of the Shiroikage displayed the same power. But for Roshi, Naruto and Fu, they gazed upon them with burning hatred. "They took it. I don't know how they did it, but they took it," Roshi muttered as he glared at his Edalis clone. "They have the power of the 9 in them," Fu snarled. "Fujin-sama. Here is an example of the power we have." Menma turned and nodded to his sister. Urza Nightwalker gripped a fistful of black hair and the gasps of shock that escaped the lips of the members of Fairy Tail were practically silence amongst the cheers of excitement. Ray winced as he was roughly brought to his knees by one of the S army. On your command, Anaue. Nightwalker stated to her brother as she raised the Ice Mage's head up to display his throat to the world. Menma nodded to his sibling before reared back his clawed arm. However, as the Supreme Commander was about to deliver the execution blow, a small chuckle escaped Gray and the sound of a small crunch was heard by the ears that were capable of hearing it. Insert music. Fate Stay Night UBW 2014 Warfare Again. Ice Make. Freeze. The members of the Shiroikage and Urza Nightwalker were quick to leap out of the way, but the surrounding area and the soldiers that were nearby were not as lucky. Coated in shining blue ice, they were frozen solid, and Gray smirked as he raised the bottle of X-Pills as he removed them from his pocket. You really think a little electroshock was gonna knock me out? I heard your entire plan and I managed to take the bottle of X-Pills when you thought you were dragging my unconscious body out of that lab you were keeping me in. But to say, they worked pretty damn well. Gray smirked at the enraged forms of the soldiers and their superior officers. The raven-haired mage's smirk then increased in size as he glanced in the direction of his friends, winking at them. Gray! Natsu shouted, immediately blowing their cover. But it was nothing that wouldn't have been done already, since Natsu was already thinking of going to charge in if Gray was about to be executed. Flame Brain. Catch! He crafted a firearm of ice and loaded the bottle of X-Pills as if it were a bullet. He pulled the trigger and the X-Pill bottle rocketed through the air, flying straight and true as it found its way through all the army men and into the hands of the pink-haired member of Fairy Tail. Natsu caught it and immediately took a pill before passing it on to Lucy. Magic energy and fire roared to life around the son of Igneal as he charged across the courtyard, scattering the Edala's infant members like 10 pins. His flaming charge left a black trench made of scorched earth behind him, and the son of Igneal bumped fists with the student of Shiva. Didn't think you had the brain for such an elaborate plan, Snowcone. Yeah, well, didn't think you had the brain to even know the definition of elaborate matchstick. Gray then planted his fist against his open palm and magic energy flowed out as blue frost. Natsu raised his fists and orange-yellow flames blazed to life around them as he took his stance for battle. Now, who's first? A pulse of crimson energy streaked across the courtyard as Yugito and Han roared at them. That would be us. They charged at a rapid pace, the ground of the courtyard tearing apart from their magically enhanced rush. Natsu quickly took the forefront and slammed his palms down on the ground, a wall of flame rising to their rescue. However, the flames were parted and the son of Igneal's eyes widened as Han's massive frame moved unhindered. Han's large shoulder crashed against Natsu's face and sent the pink-haired Dragonslayer flying back. Gray quickly latched onto his guildmate's outstretched arm as he was about to fly past him before swinging him around and throwing Natsu skyward. Karyu no Kouen. The fire dragon's brilliant flame descended upon Han and Yugito's Edala's counterparts like a meteor from the heavens and slammed down on them, generating a powerful explosion that served to melt the surrounding stone that outlined the newly formed crater it created. A cloud of smoke and embers rose into the sky, yellow-orange flames licking at the air as they burned. Got him! Natsu chuckled as he landed down beside Gray. Damn it, Natsu. Don't say shit like that, why not? However, the cloud was parted as a roar was released from the crater and a shockwave of crimson magic energy raced outwards. That's why. The Ice Godslayer gritted his teeth as the powerful wind sent him and the scarf-wearing Dragonslayer skidding backwards, but he shifted into the stance that taught him and an ice-blue magic circle formed in front of Hyojin Maiku. Xerneas, a massive stag made entirely of black ice, thundered across the palace courtyard, bellowing like the forest animal it resembled. It bent its head, its sharp antlers prepared to run through Han and Yugito as they walked out of the crater Natsu's spell had formed. However, to Gray's surprise, Han began to break out into a run. The magic energy he took from the nine blazing like an inferno before applied a bit more force. The ground cratered from his jump, and he became as straight as a needle. He reared back his magic-covered fist and dealt a harsh blow against the charging ice stag's skull. The power of the ice goddess, in the hands of an inexperienced godslayer such as Gray, crumbled before the physical might of a demon-empowered general, and the momentum carried him forward towards the two members of Fairy Tail. Oh shit! Gray summoned a shield of ice to protect himself, but his eyes widened when a fist suddenly shattered his creation and nailed him in the chest, while an equally powerful kick from Yugito followed after and struck Natsu. Their eyes widened as they released simultaneous gasps of pain as they were sent flying through the air before slamming into the ground. The momentum worked against them as they formed a small trench as they skidded across the courtyard. Gray coughed heavily when he came to a stop, and winced as he felt the burning on his chest. Damn, they hit hard. Natsu grunted as he and his ice-using guildmate climbed back to their feet. He and every single other person present in the courtyard stared at Yugito and Han as their bodies were covered in the raging crimson energy, but it seemed to take on a more solid shape, bubbling like acid. Two tails of bubbling demonic energy and a pair of lengthy ears sprung to life from Yugito's, while Han's had 4 protrusions that resembled horns with 5 tails of energy swishing behind him. We will handle these perpetrators, Han told his brothers and sisters in arms. Go! Fulfill the order of the king. Slaughter the exceed, Yugito howled. They did not need to be told twice by the seemingly demon-possessed members of the Shiroikage. Soldiers climbed atop their legions and entered the airships which quickly rose into the air. The other members of the Shiroikage followed suit as they leapt onto their white-furred legions and took off towards Extalia. Pandemonium ensued as legions and soldiers released their battle cries. Soldiers pushed at one another in an effort to reach their mounts or modes of transport. However, a large number of them suddenly found themselves scattered when a loud moo echoed throughout the night sky. I will protect Lucis' boobs, Taurus bellowed as he swung his axe in a wide circle. The powerful swing made a circle around the group of Earthland natives, and gave them breathing room as Lucy ran up to them with the orange bottle of X-pills in hand. Guys! Lucy opened the bottle and handed each of them a pill. Take these. The Dragonslayers and Urza all held their respective pills. The Titania of Fairy Tail was about to pop hers into her mouth so she could go and aid Natsu and Gray, but she paused. Her ears twitched when she heard the low growl that emanated from the throat of her brother. Nightwalker. Naruto growled, flexing his clawed fingers as he shed the disguise of an Edalus soldier. His sapphire orbs projecting bloody murder at the red-haired military woman. You know her? She asked. She's your counterpart here in Edalus. She injured Wendy when we met her in battle. Naruto informed his twin. I will make her pay dearly for it. Urza's eyes widened as she looked across to Wendy and then to her Edalus counterpart. Her brown eyes then narrowed as she placed a hand in front of his chest and shook her head. Titania, move your hand and get out of my way. Insert music. Sword Art Online Swordland. No, I won't, because I'm going to handle her. Naruto gave the redhead a puzzled look. What? I've had quite a bit of time to think about it. Urza stated. I thought about what being able to recognize our relationship with one another because I was too confused as to whether or not I believed in that truth. I realized that you were playing the antagonist to me in an effort to force me to get stronger, to be worthy of a person of your caliber as a mage and to be worthy of holding the family names that our parents gave us. You played the part of the villain because you saw it as necessary in order to ensure my growth, and even though I was unsure of myself about making the choice, even when you belittled me for being incapable of making it at the time. I look back at how you looked at me and you held so much hope for me in your eyes. You placed your faith and your trust in me, and you said that you believed in me, and seeing you as you are now. Someone who gets so angry because someone injured one of your nakama, someone who is capable of now being able to push aside differences for the sake of saving someone dear to him. Then that just solidifies my choice. I will take the names of our parents, and I will accept you as you are, Oni-sama. Naruto's eyes widened as he saw the bright smile that formed on her face as she called him that. All eyes shifted between Urza and Naruto for a few moments. What? She's your brother, sister, indeed, and I can hold that title with pride. The daughter of 2 wizard saints declared before patting Wendy on the head. Now, someone has hurt Wendy. She sees you as her own brother, and that makes her my sister as well. I won't stand for someone who hurts my family, and so I will take the burden from you. Urza said as she shed the stolen armor and bid down on her X-pill. The familiar feeling of magic energy flooded her body once more and in a flash of white light, she stood proudly in her purgatory armor with the Sword of Kings held tightly in her grip, its platinum flames shining brightly in the night. Naruto gave the red-haired swordswoman a serious stare. As one who shares my bloodline, you are expected to crush Nightwalker. Urza smiled once more, tears flowing from her non-prosthetic eye. Oni-sama. Urza Uzumaki Namikaze planted her feet against the ground and pushed off with enough force to shatter the earth beneath her, her battle cry loud and fearsome. She carried herself with dignity and strength, she was prepared to fight with her pride in the name of their family. And Naruto could not be more proud of her at that moment. He turned away from his sister to let her do her battle on her front, and time for me to fight on mine. He thought as he held up his own X-pill. By the dragons, I never would have guessed that you guys were related, Roshi said. Well, I hadn't known about it myself until a few days before the guild war between Fairy Tail and Phantom Lord. I'll admit, I did not appreciate the information at the time, but Urza has proven herself to be capable of making the choice on her own and to be worthy of my respect. She carries herself with dignity and strength, and she is now prepared to fight with a family name at her side. As a fellow mage, she is still in need of maturity and growth, but as her brother, I am quite proud of her. That's great, but enough with the sappy words and long speech stuff. Gajeel pointed up at the sky where the army of Edalus was now located. Those assholes are up in the sky, and they can fly too with their airships and those flying monster things. So how exactly are gonna hand those guys' asses to them on silver platters? Gajeel asked, his red eyes gleaming with battle lust. I really want to fight the black guy. He seems like a strong one. It's simple, Gajeel. We fly too, Fu said as she bid down on her X-pill. Furyu no Hai Tsubasa. Oh, right, forgot you guys can do that. The son of Metallicana muttered as he watched the 4 wings of pure wind swirled to life, spreading out from her back. The Wind Dragonslayer picked up Haku and Juvia, who began taking their magic orange pills. Wendy flew for herself, while Naruto gripped Roshi and Gajeel in his clawed hands after he bit down on his X-pill. The power of the dragons circulated through their systems once more, and auras of pure power was exerted in such a large amount that it served to crater the ground beneath them. The Dragonslayers then took off through the skies, climbing higher and higher towards the kingdom of Extalia and the targets that were the human sacrifices that were subjected to the power of the Nine.
They took the power of the Nine for themselves. They think it to be their own magic greater than anything else they could ever dream of. Well, it's time these humans learn about the pure destructive force that comes from Dragonslayers. Naruto's sapphire irises were cloaked in ethereal white light as he bared his fangs.
Throne room, Extalia, Edelus, Charles and Happy were silent, their eyes wide and their mouths agape as they looked at the Queen of the Exceed with the very definition of the word, shock. You can't be serious, Charles exclaimed. I have no reason to lie to you, my daughter. Shaggy replied. What I have told you is exactly what happened. Don't call me that. Charles growled out. She took a deep breath and pinched the bridge of her nose in an effort to calm herself down. Alright, now let me get this straight, you had a vision.
I did. A vision that Extalia was falling. Shagat nodded in confirmation. During this time, Extalia had recently undergone its period of breeding and so 100 eggs had been laid. After you had the vision, you feared for the safety of the 100 unborn Exceed offspring. Happy and I were both a part of those 100.
Your egg was beautiful. The Queen of Extalia muttered absent-mindedly, her daughter's eye twitching a bit at the loving gaze that was directed at her. It was odd to say the least, to see such affection being directed at her. And so, she continued, you prepared to send them through the anima to Earthland. However, because it would be a rather ludicrous notion to just suddenly pluck the 100 eggs from their nests and send them through a rip in space-time to a parallel world, you and the council said that the children of dragons, the Dragonslayers of Earthland, would come to Edelus and attack. You said that the hatchlings from the 100 eggs would be somehow implanted with the message that they would be the ones who would be capable of killing the Dragonslayers and thus neutralize the threat to Extalia, and that the moment they hatched, they would grow up to fulfill that purpose. So you mean that we were supposed, Happy gulped audibly, kill Natsu and Wendy? That is true, a blue-furred council member stated. However, once Faust managed to begin using the anima to steal the magic energy from Earthland, Shagat-sama had the mission changed to a capture and retrieval mission rather than an assassination, as the Dragonslayers would be converted into lacrima. With the magic of the dragons at our beck and call, it would be quite a boon for the Extalian kingdom, Nichia spoke. So, with that in mind, it is best that you return to being members of the kingdom so that you can carry out the remainder of your mission, children. A black and white striped council member added. No, all eyes were wide in shock at the sudden outburst which echoed throughout the throne room. Happy's black eyes burned with disgust and rage. Nope, I would never do that to Natsu. And Charles-chan would never do that to Wendy. You all may have sent us to Earthland with this stupid mission in our heads, but when I was born, I knew nothing about it. I was raised by a Dragonslayer who is my father and my friend in every way. Many eyes on the council narrowed at the Exceed of fairy tale. You best hold your tongue, child, or else we. No, I refuse to be a puppet. Happy swiped his arms in front of him forcefully in an angry show on defiance. Happy. Charles watched her fellow Exceed with wide brown eyes as she began to develop a feeling of newfound respect towards him. Natsu's not a target, he's Nakama. Happy turned around and lifted his green neckerchief to show the symbol of fairy tale on his back. I'm a mage of fairy tale first and foremost. And an Exceed second. I'll be damned before I let anyone harm Natsu. And you won't have to, young one. Shagat turned to the black and white striped council member. There is no more mission for them to carry out. Just like how my ability to see visions was taken advantage of to play to the fear of the humans by making it seem as if I was able to control their deaths with merely a thought, the entire series of implanted orders to capture the Dragonslayers was entirely fabricated. She turned back to face the two young Exceed before her. It was a lie. You seem to do that a lot. Charles quipped. I may be a liar, my daughter, but I am Queen Shagat. I am the proxy of the Nine. I am ruler and protector of Extalia, and I will do whatever I have to in order to protect the kingdom and its citizens. Her strict tone caught the princess of Extalia completely off guard, considering she was very pleasant for the majority of the conversation in spite of her own rudeness. Even those who were yet to be born, and that includes the life of my own daughter. The room was quiet for a moment as Charlie's mouth was agape. Her jaws opened and shut a few times as she tried to form words to make a counter-argument, but all that came out were a few soft grunts. She clenched her paws into tight fists before she gritted her teeth and looked down at the ground, unable to hold eye contact with her mother at that point. Insert music. 2 steps from Hell, Sons of War. It was at that moment that a massive tremor seemed to shake the entire castle. Charles and Happy stumbled while the Extalian council members and their matriarch gripped the armrests of their respective thrones to keep themselves from falling. The sounds of explosions met their ears soon after, and all eyes were wide with surprise as their heads snapped in the direction of the throne room's doors as they were suddenly sliced apart. Shagad-sama, a humanoid, muscular, black-furred exceed clad in burgundy and silver armor, gripped a massive buster sword. Obviously he was the cause of the doors being reduced to chunks of rubble. His head was that of a black panther's, but he had a tall, muscular build similar to that of a human's. He had a white muzzle, small red eyes, and a scar running down across his left eye. Said crimson eyes were filled with cold fury as he held the buster sword out, pointing it directly at the proxy of the nine. Shagad-sama, he nodded curtly to the Queen of Extalia. P. Panther Lily? Shagad's eyes widened in shock alongside the council members. Captain Panther Lily, what's going on? Nichiya shouted. You were exiled. I was, Nichiya Taiko. Panther Lily growled. I saved the boy who was the Prince of Edalis, brought him here to recuperate, and yet I was banished simply for saving a human child from death. You committed to the taboo of Edalis, Panther Lily. One of the council members argued. You knew full well that was a serious act of treason to bring a human here to Extalia, injured or not. It's ironic how my own kind decided to banish me from Extalia, and yet it was the humans who were my salvation. Panther Lily turned around and flashed his cape to them. The eyes of the Exceed present in the room all widened in shock as the crest of the Edalesian monarchy was emblazoned proudly on the article of clothing. I am now a commander in the royal army of Edalis, and today, Extalia will fall. Insert music. Naruto Shippuden Girei, Extalia, Edalis. Many watched with confusion, others were quite curious. The majority were wrapped with fear. The night sky of Edalis was illuminated by the light of the massive full moon and the other shining celestial bodies that floated throughout the parallel universe. It allowed for all the Exceed to gaze up at the numerous dots that filled their skies. Airships and black-furred legions, all led by the 7 white-furred legions as they shot through the night skies of Earthland's parallel world. Their riders, the newly formed pseudo-jinchuriki, shone like stars as the crimson light of their magic energy burned brightly. Their supreme commander, Menma Nightwalker, growled as he looked upon his targets. His king made his wish, and as his soldier, so shall it be. The blonde rose to his feet and raised his clawed fist. His 9 tails of bubbling magic energy swished behind him as the other members of the Shiroikage mimicked his stance. The pseudo-jinchuriki of the Kyuubi inhaled deeply, air and magic swelling within his lungs before he unleashed it all in one deadly shout. Attack! Menma's command was akin to the bestial roar of the kitsune that his powers came from. A puajic was expelled from his jaws and it sent a storm upon the citizens of Extalia that was drowned out by the roars of the Edalesian soldiers. It was as if the sky had split and rained destruction upon them. The elements fell from above, bomb lacrima were dropped, and soon the kingdom of Extalia was met with the fires of war. Homes were reduced to ash and rubble, and the Exceed's cries of fear, pain and death permeated the atmosphere. Soldiers dropped down from their airships soon after and began to personally run through the streets of the bipedal cat's lands. No, please, not my baby, not my ga. Wah, why are you attacking us? Shagad-sama, help us, males. Females. Kittens. All Exceed perished beneath the might of the army. The soldiers of Edalis grinned maniacally, their eyes seeming to glow crimson as they reflected the fires of destruction they brought about. Your Shagad-sama has no rule over the lives of men. Not anymore. We have magic on our side and we'll show you all just what happens when you mess with humanity. The soldiers raised his sword and in one fell swoop, the female Exceed's head was removed from her body. Her kitten stood no chance as her crying visage was set ablaze by fire. The carnage was something that not many could have witnessed from a third-person perspective. The blood bathed their lands, their world turned to ashes in both the literal and metaphorical senses. Everything they built began to fall, and this time, their creators were not around to protect them like they had been 40 years ago. The 9 were lost to them, and they suffered for it. The pseudo-jinchuriki observed from their white-furred mounts with looks of approval. They were unstoppable, unmatched. They were gods among men and they reveled at the injustice they wrought. Menma Taiko, I believe now would be a good time to utilize the gifts that King Faust granted us. Edo Gara stated before a bloodthirsty grin stretched across his face. I'll crush their skulls and watch the brains implode. I'll feel their bones turn to dust beneath the sands. I want to see the blood flow from their little bodies. We shall step upon those cats and make their bodies flat as mats. Still a terrible rhyme, B. Yagura deadpanned, a sweat drop forming on the back of his head. Kurabi's face fell with a comical sob. You guys are so mean to the rhyming machine. Insert music. Fairy Tale Dragonslayer. Suddenly, the wind shifted and they glanced up at the once clear skies as dark cumulonimbus clouds gathered. The winds picked up and the rain began to fall, growing harsher and harsher until they were practically within a violent rainstorm. Despite the howls of the elements, their enhanced senses caught the sound of an object whistling through the air. What is that? Fu asked. Menma's eyes narrowed as he looked around the skies, his eyes widening as he caught sight of the very air distorting. "Jump!" he ordered. They quickly leapt off of their white-furred legions, dropping to ground zero as the winds were suddenly acting with a mind of their own. They looked up, their eyes widening as they bore witness to their legions suddenly exploding into masses of flesh and blood after having been turned to mincemeat from multiple blades of wind. The pseudo-jinchuriki landed on the ground, cracking from their landings. However, the sound of splashing met their ears and they were once again caught off guard as they caught sight of the daughter of Levia standing before them with the lower half of her body now in liquid form. Drip drip drop. The rain is Juvia's world, and in Juvia's world, Juvia is the master. Begone with the raging tides. Swiru no Swiru. The waters beneath their feet responded to Juvia's will to enact the water dragon's water prison spell. They rose up, swirling around their bodies and encasing them in spheres. The waters were already manipulated in their temperatures to being scalding hot, but the water Dragonslayer's blue eyes widened as she saw the waters begin to evaporate from the boiling hot magic of the 9 that surrounded the pseudo Jinchuriki. Their magic is affecting Juvia's water. Haku-san, the water Dragonslayer called out to the ice Dragonslayer. The daughter of Glacia nodded before she stretched her magic out to the water spheres. A powerful cold front rushed across the lands, ice coating the cobblestone streets and the surrounding houses as Haku froze her targets. Their shocked expressions were etched onto their faces, but even the ice of the dragons could not hold back demonic energies for long. Just what kind of power do the 9 have? Haku muttered as she saw her ice beginning to slowly, but surely melt. Gajeel-kun, Roshi-kun, fire at will. The sons of Metallicana and Volcanus respectively had managed to scale one of the taller buildings before leaping skyward to gain a better position over their frozen objectives. Gajeel turned to the lava Dragonslayer. "You ready, Gigi?" "I'm not that old, Iron Dragon," the red-haired man replied. "Let's do this." With that, the 2 Dragonslayers unleashed their spells. Tetsuryuso. Kishin. Yoryu no Senyogen. Gajiel's arms morphed into massive spear and a steel-colored magic seal formed beneath his body. He slammed his arm against the magic seal before large iron logs were launched forth at a rapid pace. The moment they were launched, Roshi unleashed his lava dragon's acidic lava spell. The massive amount of molten earth coated the iron logs before they all slammed down into the ground and some even speared through the ice prisons that the pseudo-Jinchuriki were caught in. They shattered as a result, freeing from captivity, but that would not allow them to escape from the explosive reaction that from the properties of acidic lava. A chain reaction occurred as the iron logs were ignited, and explosions rocked the kingdom of Extalia and creating a massive crater as a pillar of fire and lava expanded outwards, burning anything it came into contact with. Wendy then flew overhead to snatch the 2 Dragonslayers out of the air before they could fall into the heart of the explosion. The blue-haired girl took them outside of its range just as Fu landed in front of the expanding tower of lava and flame. Furyu no Shoshinkuha, the wind dragon's rising vacuum wave spell came into effect as she held out her hands. The winds bent to her command, moving faster and rising higher until it completely prevented the fires of reaching any farther. However, the wind Dragonslayer's true intentions were revealed as the fire pillar melded with her magic-made vortex, the flames moving faster and faster as hurricane-force winds converted the burning tower of oxygen into a massive fire tornado. The fire tornado detonated as if it were a bomb that went off, but the vacuum Fu created had immediately starved the flames of the oxygen needed to keep it burning, thus revealing the smoking crater that was forged from their attacks. Wow! Wendy gasped in awe watching as the steam rise as the cold rain touched the burning hole in the ground. She dropped her 2 passengers off and floated over to her draconian cousin. "That was amazing, Fu-san. Do you think I can do that with the wind one day?" Maybe." Her orange eyes then gained a glint of mischief as she saw Naruto descend from above, cracking the earth with his impact. "Maybe if you call me Fune-chan I can teach you to use the winds in the way only a Dragonslayer like myself can." "Ooh." Wendy's brown eyes sparkled with childish amazement. "Fune-sensei, teach me." "You hear that, Fujin-sama?" She placed an extreme amount of emphasis on her fellow Dragonslayer's title. "I am Fune-sensei. I will teach her to use the winds better than you ever could." "Don't corrupt my Imouto, Wind Dragon." The son of Agnologia growled, his eye twitching as he saw the mint-haired woman's fanged grin. "Ah, Aototo is so cute when he's jealous," Haku giggled. The other Dragonslayers all released their snickers of amusement and Naruto's eye twitched even more violent LDGE of his nose to calm his nerves before he looked down into the crater where his Daedalus counterpart and said counterpart's comrades lay. The cloaks of demonic energy had shielded them from being heavily burnt by the fire tornado, but that did little to protect their bodies themselves. Their limbs were bent at angles they should not have been bent at, bone protruding out from the surface of their skin with blood and bone marrow evaporating upon contact with the superheated earth. Insert music. Naruto Shippuden blind animal. What happened? Edo Roshi gasped out. "You dare to stop the strongest soldiers of Daedalus?" Fu growled, the energy wings on her back buzzing angrily. Pride. Menma raised his head, his burning red eyes meeting the cold blue ones of his Earthland counterpart. Who are you? Someone who wants to save his best friend. Naruto went through numerous hand motions in the air before pointing them at the pseudo-jinchuriki. Violet magic seals hovered over each of the 7 before they glowed brightly to signal their activation. Seal magic. Gravity. The pseudo-jinchuriki all released gasps of pain as they felt the force of gravity suddenly increase 10 times over. Their bodies sunk into the ground, forming imprints as a result. Now you give back what you stole from the 9. Amaterasu Formula number 60. The magic seals became double-layered and the eyes of the pseudo-jinchuriki all widened as they felt a pull on their newly formed magic circulatory systems. No, what are you doing? Yagura exclaimed as he felt the drastic drop in power. Fear. I'm taking the magic energy from you and I'm going to bring back Kurama and his siblings. Naruto snarled. I can't take all of it because the power of the 9 is too vast for even my body to handle, but I will do whatever it takes to get them back. Jihei, and don't worry. Gajeel gave the 7 before him a manic grin. We're not kill you yet, but we are gonna hurt you. Really, bad. You can't take it from us, Utakata roared, suffering. You can't do this to me. We need the power to realize King Faust's dreams for humanity, Kurabi rhymed. Desperation. I haven't even felt what it means to be alive yet, Edogara muttered. Loss. No. Menma's rage spiked as crimson energy both erupted forth from his body and was being taken from him. You won't take this from me. I will hate you. I will watch you suffer. I will kill you. Grahhhh. Hatred and rage. The negative emotions that swelled within their bodies. Fueled by the magic energy of the 9. Beings that were once the very incarnations of these emotions. They burst forth like water from a dam. The magic was like a fire in the presence of oxygen, and it burned brighter and larger than ever before. The magic energy increased in larger and larger amounts. Their claws digging small trenches in the earth as they curled their hands into tight fists. Grrrooar. The 7 demonic roars echoed across what felt like the entirety of the world of Edelus. Naruto's eyes widened as he felt the magic seals quickly being overloaded. They shattered like glass, vanishing as wisps of violet magic energy, and all eyes shifted skyward as they saw the pillars of red and black that stretched forth from the energy cloaks that covered the bodies of the 7 Shirokage members. Their skin peeled off as the intense heat and acidic nature of the demonic forces to reveal their underlying flesh. Drops of blood mixed with the magic energy. And that was when all hell broke loose. Move! Naruto ordered. He vanished into the wind, scooping up Wendy and Haku in his arms before flying back. Fu grabbed onto Gajeel and Roshi, Gajeel grabbing onto Juvia's arms as the wind Dragonslayer flew past her. The winds whipped wildly as they flew as quickly as they could manage in order to outrun the rapidly expanding domes of crimson and ebony magic energy that chased after them. The earth was torn asunder, the winds raged, fires roared, and Exceed and human alike were literally vaporized by the domes of energy. It was as if destruction itself had come about in the most ferocious manner possible, and then all was silent as the magic energy stopped expanding. The group of Dragonslayers turned around and their eyes widened as they gazed upon the massive depression that Extalia now had within her lands. The crater was easily over 100 feet in diameter, and the land had depressed and cracked considerably. The earth glowed with crimson light due to being superheated by the radiation of the magic energy of the 9. However, the most important feature that the children of the dragons took note of were the occupants of the crater. The magic energies that had once been a bright and noticeable crimson were now such a dark shade that it was almost completely black. It clung to their forms, almost as if it was a second skin which served to accentuate their enhanced musculature. Their fingers and toes had now literally become claws, and their teeth became sharp fangs. Their eyes were shining circles of white while the insides of their mouths were shown to be similar voids of shining white. Each of the pseudo-jinchuriki bore tails that were identical in appearance and number to the Biju Exceed whose powers they held. The Dragonslayers descended to the ground, their eyes never once leaving the pseudo-jinchuriki before them. Oni-san. Wendy gulped, holding onto her surrogate brother tightly. What do we do?
Oi, Fujin, can't we use your seals and stop them again? Gajeel asked. The eyes of the other Dragonslayers were wide in shock as they saw the son of Aknologia shake his head.
What? Roshi stuttered. The magic of the 9 is constantly coming out of their bodies at an extremely rapid rate. It's too concentrated so they would end up overloading the seals, and an increased gravitational field does not seem likely to slow them down. If there was a lesser amount of them, I could hold them back and take them out, but with this many of them, even I would have trouble. They shattered the double-layered seals I placed on them when they shifted into these second forms, so that shows just how powerful they have become.
So what do we do? Fu asked. We fight. His sapphire irises were bathed in the sea of ethereal white light, black and blue magic energy rising from his body like flames.
Wendy gulped, her brown eyes wide with fear as she stared into the seemingly never-ending void that were the eyes of the transformed soldiers. She trembled, gripping her surrogate brother's cloak tightly so as to ensure herself that he was still with her. She released a small gasp of surprise when the blonde's larger hand placed itself over her own. "Oh Oni-san. Imo Udo. If you want to run and hide, I will not blame you. These are not normal opponents, but if you choose to stand and fight then you do not hold back. You fight with everything and anything you have, do you understand?" "I understand, Oni-san." Wendy let go of Naruto and patted her cheeks harshly. "I'll fight." "You got a good kid there, Fujin," Roshi commented. "Not many kids her age have that kind of bravery." "She's my little sky dragon. Of course she's brave." He patted the blue-haired girl on her head, a smile adorning her face at the praise she received. "All right. Well, we did come here to show them what it meant to take on the children of dragons," Roshi said as his arms and legs turned as dark as the scorched earth beneath him, glowing yellow-orange veins of lava decorating them. "Let's show them." Insert music. Fairy tale Toki Hinata. The phantasmal images of the dragons that raised them appeared behind their respective Dragonslayers as their magic spiked, cratering the ground beneath their feet from the sheet pressure it generated. The pseudo-jinchuriki roared in retaliation before leaping out of the craters and taking off across the burning outer city of Extalia. Naruto held up a hand and magic energy swirled to life, condensing into a compact sphere of power. The sphere ices before he vanished from view. He then reappeared above the 7 demonic entities and reared back his arm. "Energy make. Cho Odama Rasengan." With a roar, he thrust his arm downwards and the orb of pure magic slammed against the bodies of the pseudo-jinchuriki. The ground cratered from the force and a powerful shockwave raced out from their location as a powerful dome of sapphire-colored energy obscured the 7 tail-bearing enemies from view. The winds whipped wildly, but Wendy and Fu were quick to take them into their bodies to refuel their systems in preparation for the fight they were soon to take part in. "So this is the man who defeated my student," Roshi thought. Impressive. The powerful dome of magic then vanished, but the blonde was not happy with the results. Rather than being dead like he hoped, the dark red bodies were still standing as if they had never been hit at all. They all began growling at him like the wild animals they had become. Menma and Naruto growled at one another before shooting off towards each other. The ground ruptured from the force at which Menma jumped up, while the sound barrier shattered like glass when Naruto flew down to meet his doppelganger. Menma swiped at Naruto's head with his claws, but the Apocalypse Dragonslayer easily ducked beneath the wild blow and drove both of his fists into his opponent's stomach with enough force to generate a shockwave. He slammed Menma into the ground, but he kept his momentum going, tearing a trench in the already ruined outer city of Extalia. He then flew up and went into the beginnings of a backwards loop-de-loop, but at the apex of his first loop he spun so that Menma was now facing the ground instead of himself. Naruto let go of his doppelganger and pushed off of Menma's back to gain a bit of altitude. The son of Agnologia went into a rapid backflip to build up momentum, extending his leg outwards to bring it down in the form of a powerful axe kick. Mokashiryu no Jinshinkyaku, black and blue magic energy coated his leg before he slammed it down upon his opponent's skull. The seismic stomp spell sent the user of Kurama's power rocketed to ground zero, but he didn't even touch the ground as Gajeel took to the battlefield as well. Tetsuryuken. He slammed his arms together, shifting them into a giant iron broadsword. He spun on his heels and swung his sword like a bat, but while the serrated edges did not dig into the well-protected flesh, it did send Menma flying into Karabi. The two rolled across the ground, but Edo Roshi leapt over them with the agility of a monkey before thundering towards the Dragonslayers like a rampaging gorilla. The four-tailed man took a deep breath before unleashing 2 large orbs of lava from the tube-like projection in his jaws. Roshi's eyes narrowed at his doppelganger. That sun spell. Hyoryu no Hoko. Ice and magic rushed forth from Hakusa's mouth in the form of icy vortex. The lava orbs were quick to cool, turning completely black due to the coming into contact with the sub-zero temperatures. In a gust of wind, Fu and Wendy appeared in front of the frozen project and reared their arms back. The wind swirled around their limbs before letting them fly. Furyu no Kei's Kiwa. Tenryu no Tekken. The Wind Dragon's Wind Edge and Sky Dragon's Iron Fist impacted harshly with the orbs of solidified lava and sent them flying back towards their user only to be shattered by said user's massive fists. Edo Roshi beat his chest like the demonic ape he had become and then did the same to the ground, streaks of lava flowing towards them at a rapid pace. Roshi opened his jaws and the lava bent up, flowing into his mouth until the attack was completely nullified. Itadakimasu. He mocked Son Goku's Jinchuriki, adding insult to injury with a belch. Now let me show how lava is supposed to be used, you amateur. He then slammed his hands on the ground and the earth rumbled and quaked beneath Edo Roshi's feet, knocking him off balance before it began to bulge and turn red and yellow from the source of heat that lay beneath it. Yoryu no Bakuhatsu. True to its name, the lava dragon's eruption spell did indeed erupt. The lava produced a powerful explosion that sent the host of the Yanbi skyward only to be grabbed by his four tails as he reached Naruto's altitude in the air. The blonde Dragonslayer swung Edo Roshi around before bringing him down upon Fu's head, sending them both rocketing to ground zero. The son of Agnologia caught movement out of the corner of his eye and he quickly summoned the 5-point elemental seal, the crimson orb of energy serving to block the strikes of Kurabi's 8 tails as they lashed out at him like whips. However, the holder of Gyuki's strength did not let up as he jumped into the air and reared back his fist. "What the hell?" Naruto muttered in shock as he saw magic energy solidify and seem to take on the shape of a massive ox's skull around his opponent's arm. Groar. Kurabi slammed the makeshift skull of Gyuki against Naruto's defensive shield, a spiderweb of cracks racing out across its surface upon impact, and sent the Dragonslayer flying through the air. The remnants of an Exceed's home came tumbling down as he slammed into it. He growled in annoyance as he climbed back to his feet, his annoyance growing even more as he felt the earth beneath him begin to shake. Edo Gaara had slammed his hands onto the ground and used the powers of the Ichibi to convert the dense stone and rock into fine sand. The granules then responded to his will and Naruto was now bound within a massive square-based pyramid. Menma then took his place at the forefront and opened his jaws. A powerful orb of fire and magic energy shone with an evil crimson light. Taking advantage of the charging time, Roshi quickly headed over to the pyramid and called upon the powers taught to him by Volcanus. He slammed his lava-veined arms against the sand pyramid and superheated as a wave of lava wrapped around it. The sands became clear and transparent as they were turned to glass. The glass pyramid began to rumble, cracks forming across its surface as rays of blue and black light poked through them. The roar of the Apocalypse Dragonslayer echoed across the battlefield as a pillar of his magic shattered his prison into tiny fragments just as Menma fired his attack. The orb of crimson flames rocketed towards Naruto, but the Apocalypse Dragonslayer took a strong step forward before swinging his back leg upwards. The toe of his boot collided with the base of the spheroid to send it skyward, and the blonde leapt after it. He opened his jaws and took the magic for his own, utilizing it to augment his spell as he fell back to earth. Mokashiryu no Hakai Tsume. He slammed his black and blue claws of magic on the ground and the earth was torn asunder as streaks of energy raced towards the pseudo-jinchuriki. Menma countered with a burst of crimson flame that took on the shape of a massive fox's head, its fiery fangs blazing. The two attacks collided and a powerful explosion occurred, a mushroom cloud climbing high into the stormy skies. However, the cloud had a hole punched through it as Yagura fired off a vortex of wind and water. The typhoon was quickly blocked however, as Juvia commanded the rains to form concentrated streams of liquid. Her hydrokinetic abilities won her control over the Sanbi Jinchuriki's typhoon as she manipulated its temperature and turned it into a spear of ice. Fu then rushed forward, hopping into the air as her leg was wrapped in the winds. Furyu no Rankyaku. The wind dragon's storm leg crashed against the newly formed ice spear to send it flying towards Utakata. However, the wielder of the Rokubi made no move to block. Instead, he raised his hand and the Dragonslayers all watched in awe as the ice spear literally melted upon contact with the slime that glistened over his body. Utakata then unleashed a storm of bubbles from his jaws. "He can't seriously think a bunch of bubbles will kill us," Gajeel snorted. His doubts were quickly brought to a halt when he caught sight of ONNG into contact with a sharp piece of rubble. The bubble popped and all eyes widened as the bubble detonated, creating a powerful explosion of acid that splashed over the surrounding earth and melted it. "You were saying?" Roshi raised an eyebrow at the son of Metallicana. "Apparently I was wrong. Bubbles can kill you." "I got it," Haku announced as ice sprung forth from her tailbone area in the likeliness of two whip-like tails. Hyoryu no Harabin. The Tundra whip spell lashed out and impacted with each of the acidic bubbles and froze them into solid orbs of ice along with any of the surrounding raindrops. Once that was done, Gajeel inhaled deeply, magic energy building up within his maw before he exhaled forcefully. Tetsuryu no Hoko. A powerful twister of razor-sharp iron tore a trench in the ground as it traversed the length of the battlefield, shredding the ice bubbles into particles too tiny to be seen with the naked eye and continued on to attack the pseudo-Jinchuriki. Menma's body burst into flame as he released a roar of defiance along with Kurabi. He and his eight-tailed comrade charged forth at a rapid pace and a streak of crimson flame and dust marked their movements as the ground literally burned from Menma's footsteps. The kitsune-like beast unleashed a powerful roar, fire and magic energy creating a shockwave that collided with the iron vortex. The two elements collided, but the iron turned red-hot and became molten slag which Kurabi proceeded to charge through. He emerged on the other side of the makeshift tunnel of molten metal before his and Menma's body released bursts of magic energy that solidified and attached to their body to form literal exoskeletons that looked very much like an oxen's and a fox's respectively. "Their defenses and striking prowess increases with those skeletons," Naruto exclaimed. "Defense my ass. My iron blades can cut through diamond." Gajeel swung his sword arm, the serrated edges rotating as he activated its chainsaw-like capabilities. Tetsuryuken. The sword slammed against the exoskeleton-covered jinchuriki of Gyuki. But the red-eyed Dragonslayer's eyes widened when the strike did next to nothing against the raging beast. It bounced off of the skeleton and his eyes widened, a gasp of pain escaping his lips along with a glob of blood as Kurabi backhanded him in the stomach. He bounced across the ground before slamming through the wall of a house. The elder Nightwalker twin was then allowed to continue his charge uninhibited and leapt towards Wendy. The 12-year-old quickly acted to dodge, but her eyes widened when her right leg was adhered to the ground as Kurabi raised one of his tails and made it release a splash of sticky, black ink. She released a yelp of pain as she fell harshly on her back. It was only through years of battle-hardened reflexes that allowed her to react on instinct. She inhaled deeply, the element of the sky fusing her magic and pooling within her swelling lungs. Tenryu no Hokoo. The raging twister spewed forth from her mouth and slammed into the nine-tailed attacker. Normally, the attack would have sent Menma flying back as if he were hit with the force of a hurricane, but he would have none of it. With a roar of defiance, the white-eyed Jinchuriki stabbed 3 of his 9 tails into the earth to anchor himself. Wendy, Fu and Roshi reacted quickly and they reared back their arms as they reached to Wendy's side. Furyu no Kei's Kiwa. Yoryu no Kiba. A powerful gust of spiraling gale force winds slammed harshly against Menma's body as Roshi's arm was coated in lava that took on the shape of a dragon's maw with its fangs bared. The lava and winds created an explosive react that sent uprooted Menma from the ground and sent him flying back just as Kurabi was ready to fire off a blast of concentrated magic. However, just as he was about to launch it, Juvia converted her body into water and flowed towards the 8-tailed opponent like a rushing river. Suiryu no Sume. She solidified her body before her hands turned into claws of solid water. A powerful slash of her claws sent Kurabi's exoskeleton-covered head snapping to the right and made him lose control of his attack. The orb of magic was launched prematurely and produced a massive explosion, a dome of crimson reducing anything in its wake to rubble, leaving behind a smoldering crater. Suiryu no Kiba. The Water Dragonslayer followed up with the Water Dragon's fangs which slammed into her opponent's ribcage area to send him skidding back. The daughter of Levia was caught off guard however, as Kurabi's body suddenly bulged and the magic energy of his cloak branched out. The magic morphed into the image of Kurabi's upper half, shining white eyes and all, before it roared and delivered a powerful slash with its claws. Juvia's eyes widened as her body was severed in half at the waist and the clone's fanged visage had a satisfied grin on its face. That grin became short-lived however, as the red of blood suddenly became clear when it was revealed Juvia had managed to switch to her water body. She called upon her rainfall and unleashed a concentrated stream of water at her opponent, tearing a trench in the earth as the water stream dragged him across the battlefield. The pseudo-Jinchuriki of the Hachibi and Kyubi roared as they quickly climbed back to their feet, but were quick to get out of the way as a massive wave of sand and one of water both traversed the battlefield. Juvia, will you know that Juvia is the only one who masters the waves? The former Phantom Lord Mage stated. She shot forth as if she were fired from a cannon and melded into the tidal wave produced by the Sambi Jinchuriki. In a matter of moments, the waters were hers to command and she soaked the wave of sand that Edo Gara had unleashed. The sand absorbed most of the water, making it too heavy to be able to be controlled and moved. However, Yagura took his stance and water and wind combined in front of his jaws. The compact orb of magic was fired at high speeds, crashing into Juvia's water body with devastating force. Gah! The Water Dragonslayer cried out in pain as she carried through the air and slammed into the ground near her fellow Dragonslayers. The ground cratered as a powerful explosion of water and wind occurred, with Gajeel and Roshi being sent tumbling through the air as Wendy and Fu recovered due to being able to fly. It was then that Edo Gara's arms lengthened along with Menma's. The two pseudo-Jinchuriki lashed out with their extending limbs, but Gajeel and Roshi batted them aside as they turned their arms into swords and lava gauntlets respectively. However, they caught completely off guard when massive arms of sand suddenly rose up, grabbing them by their ankles. What the fu, the two Dragonslayers were slammed into the ground and formed their own personal craters. Edo Gara had his sand arms keep their holds on them however, swinging the Dragonslayers in wide arcs that had them crashing through entire buildings and the remnants of what used to be buildings before being pulled in towards their captor. They drew closer and closer to the Ichibi pseudo-Jinchuriki, the wind whipping wildly from the speeds they were moving at. However, they came to a momentary and extremely halt as the horned visage of Kurabi roared in their faces. The pseudo-Jinchuriki of the Hachibi had performed a double lariat, and though the Iron and Lava Dragonslayers managed to coat their bodies in scales of their elements, the muscular biceps of their opponents severely cracked them along with a few ribs in the process. They released silent gasps as the wind was driven from their lungs and a bit of blood escaped their lips. Time seemed to slow down for the Dragonslayers of Iron and Lava before they were sent flying back. They rolled across the ground, smashing through a massive boulder in the process. Naruto dropped down from above as he avoided being impaled from Fu's horn, catching his fellow Dragonslayers by their collar in the process. Fu's roar echoed across the battlefield. Her wings ended at the speed of sound. Naruto was ready to move, but his eyes widened when he found himself anchored by a mound of sand which covered his legs. He looked over to Edogara, and he swore he could see the former redhead grinning. The ground then shattered as Fu's impact was successful. A small dust cloud formed, but was quickly dispersed by the shockwave from the crater-forming attack. The three Dragonslayers snarled and unleashed bursts of magic energy from their bodies to push Fu back. The Nanabi Jinchuriki clicked her mandibles angrily. Vernier. Wendy appeared in her field of vision, a sonic boom being the signal of her arrival. Arms, she dug her heels into the ground to slow herself down before jumping into the air, cracking it from as her physical capabilities were increased from her spell. The element of the sky turning into claws around her hands as she struck with a deadly uppercut. Tenryu no Kirusume. Her claws slammed against Fu's lower jaw, making her teeth slam together with an audible clack. Wendy then spun in the air and a tail of wind stretched forth from her tailbone. Tenryu no Shippo Kugeki. The tail strike dug into Fu's body. She released a roar before flying back through the air. However, as she did, the winged pseudo-Jinchuriki belched out a massive cloud of shining white powder that served to blind the daughter of Grandine. I can't see. Wendy squinted before calling upon the winds to disperse the cloud. No, Wendy, don't, Naruto called out to the blue-haired Dragonslayer. It was too late however, as the air current spread the concentrated mass of scale powder over most of the battleground. In that moment, Menma and Edo Roshi had taken deep breaths of preparation before unleashing powerful bursts of crimson and blue-green flame respectively. The fires rushed through the air, scorching the very earth that it passed over before it made contact with the white powder. The powder ignited from merely coming into contact with the tips of the fire blasts and a powerful fiery explosion occurred. A spectacularly beautiful burst of magical flames washed over the Dragonslayers, but the fact that the flames were forged of magic served to make it meet a swift end. The flames swirled into Naruto's jaws as he absorbed the heat energy and the magic that fueled the flames. In a matter of seconds, there was nothing left of the explosion. The white-eyed demons snarled in what seemed to be annoyance at their enemies. You're going to have to do better than that, you mangy mutt. Naruto taunted before making a come hither motion with his hand. Insert music. Fate, 0 this day and never again. Throne room, Extalia, Edala's explosions echoed from outside the castle, and the screams of fear and death reached the ears of the queen. The white-furred proxy of the Nine bolted from her throne and ran towards the windows. Her brown eyes widened as she saw legions flying by, scooping up her citizens and turning them into mangled heaps of flesh and bone as their teeth and claws tore into them. Flames burned as the humans utilized their magic tools to summon forth bolts of lightning and gouts of fire, among other things, from the airships as well as from the atop their winged mounts. Not again. Shagget muttered to herself, tears dotting the floor of the throne room. Why is this happening again? Why does war come to Extalia again? For the glory of the king, and for magic to be in the hands of humanity once more, Shagget-sama. Panther Lily replied as he strode towards her. Nichiya, the only combat-trained Exceed, hopped from his own seat and drew his blade. He brought down his sword in a powerful downward slash, but Panther Lily shifted his own blade and used it to block the strike. A shockwave raced out from the point of collision between the two swords and Panther Lily was surprisingly sent skidding backwards. Wow. Happy and Charles gaped in shock. Despite being like Uchiha from their world in terms of personality, the red-clad Exceed was by no means a weak individual. You've gotten stronger, Lily, Uchiha said. Had this been a few years ago, that blow would have put you down. I put your teachings to good use, Nichiya Taiko. Nichiya bared his fangs before looking to his queen out of the corner of his eyes. Shagget-sama, take the two younglings and go to the Chamber of the Nine. No one other than you can open the doors to those chambers and they are well fortified. You will be safe there. But what about you? What about my citizens? She exclaimed. The kingdom cannot exist without its queen, and all of Extalia had sworn to our creators. We all swore to the Nine that we would all gladly give our lives for the sake of protecting you. The value of all lives pale in comparison to yours. That was exactly what Kurama-sama told us. Nichiya quickly looked back to Panther Lily as they began to circle each other, sizing up one another. Now go. Shagget moved to argue some more, but she found herself being whisked away when blurs of white and blue flew towards her and grabbed her. Charles, happy. I'm not saving you because you're my mother, I just want to live. Now tell us, where is this Chamber of the Nine? Insert music. Magi Enfant Aperu. Royal Palace, Capital, Edalis. To those that were on the outside looking in, so to speak, it seemed as if the castle of the king was trembling. An earthquake? The divine force of the gods? These were some of the many ideas that the citizens of Edalis' capital city were thinking was the cause of these tremors. If those were the causes, they would have been less than surprised due to the fact that the cause of such literally earth-shaking effects was a result of the clash between two beautiful and fearsome red-haired goddesses of the battlefield. The daughter of two wizard saints brought Caliburn down in a powerful downward swing, but Nightwalker raised her spear and blocked the platinum blade with the shaft. The dense white marble floor cracked and broke apart as Nightwalker's armored feet sunk deeply into the material, but she was able to push back. Urza backpedaled and regained her footing, hopping out of the way when Nightwalker brought the Ten Commandments spear down upon her former location. Nightwalker shifted her body and dragged her spear along the marble, tearing a scar in the floor in an effort to take out her opponent's legs. Urza gritted her teeth as the swift strike forced her to make an even swifter decision to block with a low swing of the Sword of Kings. A resounding clang echoed throughout the palace, but due to having much greater momentum behind her strike, Nightwalker had sent her Earthland counterpart skidding away. The Ten Commandments shone with magical energy as Nightwalker took advantage of the distance between them. She took off, the floor cracking beneath her feet from the force at which she pushed off. Explosion! She roared as she delivered a forward thrust at Urza. The citizen of Earthland's eyes widened as she leaned backwards, her upper body lying parallel to the ground, and watched the tip of the weapon just barely brush past the tip of her nose. Reacting quickly, Urza leapt and spun to lash out with a strong kick that collided with the spear's shaft to send it off to the side. Both red-haired combatants went with the momentum of their movements to simultaneously plunge the tips of their weapons into the floor. Magic energy pulsated from their weapons, platinum fire rushing forth from Caliburn while pure explosive flames and force came from the Ten Commandments. The two attacks collided with each other and a great explosion occurred as a result. Marble shattered and blew a massive hole in the floor as the accompanying shockwave of the explosion had both young women flying away from each other. They quickly righted themselves in midair and landed deftly on their feet. However, Urza was the first to spring back into action as she dug her heels into the floor to come to an abrupt halt. She pointed the tip of Caliburn's blade in the direction of Nightwalker, politely before concentrating at the tip, forming a mighty fireball that was approximately the same size as Natsu's Fire Dragon's brilliant flame spell. With a mere thought, the fireball was launched like a cannonball, rocketing through the air at rapid speeds. It punched through the smoke cloud that the two magical weapon users had created. "You think a mere fireball can stop me, fairy tale scum?" Nightwalker roared as her spear glowed once again. Sylpharian, the Ten Commandments shifted into the form that would grant Nightwalker a drastic increase in speed and agility, and Urza's brown eyes widened in amazement and shock as a streak of dust marked her opponent's path before she spun on her heels when she charged directly at the fireball. With a mighty battle cry, Nightwalker raised her spear as it glowed once more. Rune save. The spear shifted back into its default form, but this time, the four, jagged ends that made up its head shone with a bright white light that made the weapon seem almost divine in nature. She brought the spear down in a swift and powerful downward vertical slash that split the fireball in half. Both halves of the fireball flew past their intended target and two powerful explosions of platinum fire occurred that destroyed even more of the room as the back wall was completely blown out and the glass of the windows were shattered from the shockwave. Nightwalker then continued with her run, using the winds from the shockwave to further enhance her already impressive speed and jumped over the newly formed hole in the room, spinning the Ten Commandments over her head to build up momentum before gripping it so it would be brought down in a downward stab. Explosion. Shit, too close to dodge, need to defend. The red-haired namikaze thought. Requip. Fire Empress armor. Her purgatory armor was her toughest armor and boasted of great enhancements to her body, but it would little to reduce the damage from a point-blank explosion. Thus, it was replaced with the red and gold protection that would reduce damage from fire-based attacks. The explosion-generating form of the Ten Commandments made contact with her Sword of Kings, the resulting explosion sending her rocketing backwards through the air. She crashed through 3 support columns, cracked the floor when she started to bounce across it before finally slamming into the wall with enough force to send out a spiderweb of cracks. It didn't end there though, as Nightwalker's spear glowed and changed to have a wide spearhead with the edges on the side curving inwards close to where the spearhead was mounted, and a glowing orb connecting to the shaft. Mel Force. Urza's eyes widened as a powerful vacuum wave tore a massive trench in the floor of their current battleground before it slammed into her with devastating force. The devastating winds created a massive explosion that completely destroyed the wall she had been embedded into. Courtyard, Royal Palace. Edalus magic energy flared from their bodies, the ground beneath their feet cratering as a result of the pressure they created. They inhaled deeply, magic, wind, fire and frost all swirling to life around their bodies. Hyoujin no dogou, Karyu no hoko. A vortex of obsidian eyes erupted from Gray's jaws while a tongue of raging yellow-orange fire stretched forth from Natsu's. The ice gods bellow and fire dragons roar both ripped trenches in the courtyard as they rushed towards their targets. The two jinchuriki had their eyes wide as they caught sight of the oncoming attacks, but that was all they could do before ice and fire collided with them in a violent explosion. A powerful shockwave raced out from the point of impact and a large portion of the palace's surrounding back wall crumbled apart. A mushroom cloud climbed into the sky, orange embers and black frost wafting back to ground zero. The two Slayer mages panted heavily, the relative silence being positively deafening to them. Natsu, Gray. The voice of a certain celestial spirit mage met their ears, causing their eyes to widen in shock. The blonde released a sigh of relief before pulling them both into a hug. "Oh, thank the dragons that you're alive. After I managed to take out the soldiers I was fighting, I saw you both trying to fend off those two monsters." "Lucy," they exclaimed. "You're alive?" She released her two nakama from her embrace, narrowing her eyes in comical anger. "Your lack of faith in my ability to survive hurts me." She deadpanned while hitting them both over the head. "Anyway, I saw Urza jump after her doppelganger in the palace. We should go in and help her." The three members of Fairy Tail's strongest team both looked up at the palace, taking note of the fact that powerful shockwaves were shattering windows and bursts of platinum fire were bursting forth from random portions of the wall. They all sweat dropped, shaking in mild fear as they felt the magic energy signature of their guild's resident den mother. "Do you really think we should?" Natsu asked. "Well, maybe not," the former heiress muttered, scratching her cheek in embarrassment. Lucy then raised an eyebrow as she felt the ground beneath her feet beginning to rumble and quake. "Wow. I knew Urza was strong, but to think the pressure her magic exhumes could be felt all the way here is pretty impressive." Insert music. Fate, 0 The world is tumbling down. Lucy was halted in her speech when Natsu and Gray both placed their hands atop her head and forced her to look in the direction of where Edo Han and Edo Yugito were. Killing intent and magical energy raced out in waves from what looked like a pillar of pure energy rising into the night sky. Edo Yugito and Edo Han emerged from the crater, the remnants of Natsu's flames and Gray's eyes literally being removed from their bodies as their skin began to peel away to reveal their underlying flesh. Their sclera and irides were no longer visible as they were completely lost to the crimson shine they now held. They fell forward, dropping onto all fours and snarled as if they were wild animals. From their skinless bodies, a few drops of blood floated skyward and mixed with the pillars of magic energy that were rising from their bodies, and then all hell broke loose. Domes of red and black expanded rapidly, the courtyard being torn asunder in the process. "Get behind us." Lucy complied with her guild mates, covering her head as they stood in front of her. Walls of ice and fire sprung to life as massive domes of crimson and ebony magic expanded rapidly from the two pseudo-jinchuriki's bodies. The stone of the courtyard was torn asunder before it collided with the elemental shields. Natsu and Gray gritted their teeth, sweat drenching their faces as they felt themselves being pushed back. A simple burst of magic energy, even if it is at this magnitude. To think our shields are already being pushed to these limits, Gray thought. The wild winds then began to die down and the sounds of rock being ripped apart vanished. The walls of fire and ice fell away and the three fairy tale mages watched in fear and amazement at the makeshift wasteland that the palace's courtyard had become. The level of destruction was so immense that they hadn't even felt when the entire land had depressed, revealing that they were now standing within the circumference of a massive crater. "That wasn't even an attack," Lucy muttered. "So much damage." Natsu added. "What the hell are these guys?" Natsu. Lucy. Gray shakily raised an arm, pointing towards the center of the crater. Both mages followed the Ice Master's finger and their eyes became just as wide as their guildmates as they saw what had caught his attention. They were hunched over, standing on all fours with powerful muscles rippling beneath there. They couldn't even call it skin because it was sure as hell not. The cloaks of magic energy took on very fur-like appearances as they had clung to their bodies as if it was their own skins. Their eyes and the insides of their open maws were now shining with white light, almost as if teeth or claws flexed, the broken earth cracking even further beneath them while a miasma of poisonous magic energy flowed from their fang-lined jaws. Edo Yugito's body became a lot more cat-like, her ears having become much longer and triangular in shape. Edo Han's cone-shaped helmet was all that remained of his Shiroikage uniform, 4 horns now protruding from it. Edo Yugito's 2 tails and Edo Han's 5 tails all gently swished through the air as they were now literally emerging from their respective users' tailbones. Black and blue hellfire rose up from Edo Yugito's body while the bones of a horse seemed to cover Edo Han like an exoskeleton. The 2 pseudo-jinchuriki growled. The killing intent and bloodlust flowing from their bodies was so immense that it was practically palpable. DD demons. That was all Lucy could stutter. The burning red magic energy of the 9 made the thick, dense concrete hiss due to both the high temperatures and acidic properties it possessed. In spite of that, the Edoless counterparts of Yugito and Han seemed to be unaffected by the cloaks of demonic energy that they now possessed. Natsu and Gray gritted their teeth as their eyes locked with their opponents. They have the magic of the 9 in them. Demonic powers that are capable of standing above that of even Ji-chan's. Gray muttered. How the fuck are we supposed to deal with something like that? We'll just have to do the best we can. Natsu took a strong step forward. His leg muscles tensed visibly before he pushed off, the ground cracking from the force. A streak of dirt and dust marked his path as he charged towards Edo Han and Edo Yugito. Insert music. Yumaniko op katayoku no tori. Edo Han stood in front of the Nibi Jinchuriki before rearing back his right arm. He then punched the air in front of him, and the arm responded. The eyes of both the Ice Godslayer and the Fire Dragonslayer widened in shock as the massive clawed arm of energy stretched towards Natsu as if it were made of rubber. Natsu quickly leapt to the side before rolling on the ground as the bubbling arm generated a shockwave when it crashed into the ground, a sizable dust cloud hiding it from view. Grr! The energy arm burst forth from the dust cloud and aimed a furious array of slashes at the Fire Dragonslayer, forcing Natsu to keep rolling as it followed after him. The son of Igneel quickly unleashed a burst of fire from his body to give himself some upward thrust just as the hand of energy clenched its fingers into a tight fist. The fist came crashing down just as Natsu made himself airborne, a small, smoking crater forming where his body had just been. He landed on his feet, but had to continuously leap backwards as the arm of energy followed after him. ROWR. Natsu's ears twitched as he heard the sound of feet against stone accompanying the tiger-like roar. He glanced out of the corner of his eye to see that Edo Yugito had taken advantage of his distracted state to circle around and get behind him. Edo Yugito sent out her own claws of crimson energy in order to sandwich the son of Igneel between them and Han's own incoming claws. Shit. The pink-haired teen muttered. Ice make. Pillar. Gray slammed his hands down on the ground and an ice-blue magic seal sprung to life underneath Natsu's feet. A pillar of ice then erupted forth and shot Natsu skyward and out of the way. The clawed hands of the magic energy cloak slammed together with destructive force, the ice pillars shattering like glass and a powerful shockwave racing out from the point of collision. The two jinchuriki growled at Natsu as he landed on the ground. Edo Yugito was the first to rush him, the ground cracking from the force at which she pushed off. She raised her claws and leapt at him, and the Fire Dragonslayer unleashed a burst of fire from beneath his feet to give him a burst of speed as he moved to meet her halfway. Ice make. Road. The feline woman was caught off guard as Natsu was given a road of ice to slide on. He dropped to his knees, leaning back so as to avoid the overhead swipe before fire erupted forth from his knees to push him back into the air. He reached back and gripped Edo Yugito by the back of her head just as Edo Han moved in to skewer Natsu on his horns. The son of Igneel gritted his teeth in pain as he made contact with Edo Yugito's skull, but he powered through and swung her over his head. Dorya! He slammed Edo Yugito down upon her fellow pseudo-jinchuriki, the ground cratering as the force of the slam traveled through Edo Han's body. A pulse of magic energy sent him skidding backwards though, as Han all but completely knocked her aside like a rampaging bull. Whoa! The Fire Dragonslayer ducked just as the hooves of his exoskeleton were aimed for the side of his head. Natsu's eyes widened when he felt the rush of heat and wind that passed over him, the vegetation of the courtyard being completely shredded by the pure air pressure that his attack generated. Edo Han released a roar of rage, heated winds spiraling out from his body as he aimed to rend the Dragonslayer's flesh from his bones. Edo Han was pushed down a bit as Edo Yugito used him as a way to vault over to Gray, her claws aimed for his throat. The Ice Godslayer quickly stepped back before ducking underneath the follow-up slash. Her strikes were wild and haphazard, but they were still swift and strong, so in spite of Gray being capable of reading her attacks, they were still difficult to maneuver around. Whoa! Gray exclaimed as he bobbed and weaved out of the way. However, Edo Yugito spun with the momentum of her missed kick to then lash out with a spinning back kick to the ribs. Gray cloaked his arms in black ice, morphing it into a sturdy kite shield before raising the defensive structure. He gritted his teeth as the kick connected with it with explosive force when a burst of hellfire occurred upon impact. He skidded to the side, his arms now shaking due to how powerful the female Jinchuriki's strike was. Edo Yugito followed after her prey like the feline predator that her newfound powers were derived from and aimed for a downward diagonal slash that would have literally taken out Gray's eye if he hadn't jumped out of the way. Karyu no Yokugeki. Natsu's arms were wrapped in fire, taking on the shape of his draconian father's wings, before he performed a front flip to slam them down on the holder of Kokuo's power. The hat-wearing Jinchuriki was sent skidding backwards, slamming into his fellow Jinchuriki, which resulted in them both being sent directly through the walls of the courtyard and into the populated streets of the kingdom's capital. Screams of fear now filled the capital city as they caught sight of the demonic entities. They climbed back to their feet, rage and hatred fueling their bodies before they unleashed roars to the heavens. What were once protectors of the realm of Edelus were now its reckoning. Magically induced shockwaves via roars, earth-splitting bursts of steam and gouts of hellfire brought an end to many a life within a matter of seconds. The two pseudo-Jinchuriki reared up on their hind legs and roared. Hellfire and steam mixed with the shockwaves their roars produced, and the three members of Fairy Tail could only watch in shock as they saw the townspeople who were caught in the blast wave being stripped of their flesh before the hellfire turned their bones to ash. Buildings shook and cracked before all 7 whip-like tails lashed out like whips of destruction, bringing the many pieces of infrastructure to the ground in a single strike. "We have to stop them," Gray called out. "But how?" Natsu asked. "We can't fight them and protect the people at the same time." Lucy's mind raced, her brown eyes shifting from side to side as the gears turned in her head until finally her bright idea came to light. "I got it." "You do?" The 2 Slayer mages raised their eyebrows in surprise and confusion. "Natsu, how fast can you fly?" she asked. Natsu tapped his chin and thought. "If I really push it, I can probably reach Mach speeds, but since I ith enough magic to fight. At most, I can get up to 200 kilometers. The Fire Dragonslayer replied before his dark eyes narrowed and thought. "What do you have in mind?" "If it were normal mages, I could probably hold them in for a few hours. But with those 2, I'll be lucky if I can manage a minute," she replied, gesturing to the rampaging beasts of crimson. "What are you talking about?" the Ice Godslayer asked. "You need to hit them over to me, and then I can put them in horologium. With that, I can then do a forced closure to send them to the celestial spirit world. We'll get as far as we can away from the townsfolk before I reopen the gate for horologium within the time that we have. We can probably get to the wastelands where our Edalus selves dropped us off within the minute if we go at the speeds Natsu can handle. After that, I'll use Virgo and get out of your way. I'm sure as hell that I can't handle opponents of that level." "You're a beautiful genius, you know that?" Natsu commented. Lucy sputtered a bit, a light blush adorning her face. "Well, I don't know about the genius part, BB, but I." Gray's sweat dropped as he watched the nervously laughing blonde. "Your vanity knows no bounds, Lucy." Once Lucy recovered from the sudden compliment, she released a cot to clear her throat. "Anyway, do you understand the plan? Hit them to you seal them, we book it, and then we kick more ass." Gray summarized with a thumbs up. What he said. Natsu jabbed a thumb in his shirtless guild mate's direction. Lucy's sweat dropped at the 2 Slayer mages with a deadpan expression on her face. "As correct as that is, I can only wonder about your intelligence. And on that note, oi, your mothers were whores." Edo Yugito and Edo Han halted just as they were pulling at the mangled corpse of what had once been a young man. Their faces were void of expression before their white eyes narrowed and bared their fangs at the 2 fairy tale mages. Edo Yugito growled at the Fire Dragonslayer, ignoring the pain-filled cries of her current prey when her hellfire turned him to ash. "Karyu no Yokugeki, ROWR." She dropped down on all fours and her 2 tails struck against the wings of fire. A powerful shockwave of fire and energy occurred and had Natsu tumbling through the air while Edo Yugito was sent skidding backwards, her claws tearing small trenches in the ground as she used friction to come to a halt. Edo Han rushed forward like an angry bull, his clawed limbs leaving visible indentations in the thick stone of the streets as he pushed off and leapt skyward. He arched through the air and went into a front flip to build up momentum to bring an axe kick down upon the disoriented Dragonslayer. But Gray would have none of it. Ice Make. Snow Tiger, a massive feline behemoth with fangs like saber, emerged from a massive ice blue magic seal, roaring like the beast that it was. It slammed directly into Han's incoming heel, shattering apart like it wasn't even there. Natsu landed on the ground beside Gray just as Han grabbed one of the ice shards with one of his 5 tails, the remnant of the Snow Tiger's saber fang. He hurled it down towards the fairy tale mages as if it were a javelin. Gray quickly reacted and lashed out with a strong rising kick that knocked it back into the air before he crafted a bow out of ice. He hopped after it and grabbed the saber fang and quickly reformed it into an arrow. He pulled back the bowstring and let it fly, streams of air resistance flowing around it due to the speed at which it was fired. Edo Han's eyes widened and he quickly crossed his arms in front of his body as the high-speed projectile slammed into his body, sending him careening through the air. The Gobi Jinchuriki slammed into the statue of a large train which had served to decorate the outside of a toy shop, bringing the entire structure tumbling down on top of him. It was then that a tail of bubbling crimson stretched out and wrapped itself around the student of Earth's shirtless torso. The black-haired fairy tale member gritted his teeth as he felt the poisonous energy eat away at his flesh, only to then be swung around rapidly and slammed into the ground with enough force to form his own personal crater. Gray was then dragged across the courtyard, digging a trench with his own body while sharp pieces of stone chipped away at his flesh until he found himself within arm's reach of a very angry Edo Yugito. The Shiroikage member snarled, baring her fangs, as she unleashed a devastating punch to the Ice Make Master's face. He felt as if his face would cave in, and it probably did. The sharp snap of his jaw being dislocated met his ears, but that was overshadowed by the boom that formed from the shockwave the punch generated. Edo Yugito's tail released him and Gray flew back from whence he came at rapid speeds. He bounced across the ground, breaking through 3 buildings and came to a stop at the 4th. He sunk into the thick concrete, coughing up a glob of blood. "Gray!" Natsu quickly ejected flames from his feet and flew over to his guildmate's side, pulling him free from his earthen confines. "You okay?" Gray gripped his jaw, roughly jerking it so it would be forced back into place with a resounding snap. He gave it a few test motions before nodding. "Yeah, I'll live." Insert music. Katakyu no Hitman Suna awakens. Suddenly, they felt the ground begin to shake. Both mages of Fairy Tail turned to see Edo Han had broken free of the remnants of the train statue before charging towards them with his head bent low. The two members of the Shiroikage roared as they charged towards their prey, the ground literally shaking from their footfalls. Gray took to the forefront and inhaled deeply as he placed his body in line with the charging pseudo-jinchurikis. Then once they were close enough he slid his body forward and bent low. He cloaked in body in the ebony ice of Shiva and planted his palms against their chests. Hyojin Maiku. Yari. Spears of black ice stabbed themselves into the Edoless natives' chests, but due to Edo Han's exoskeleton and Yugito's hellfire cloak, it did little to pierce their already durable hides. However, it served their purpose to get the two pseudo-jinchuriki into the air before Natsu appeared behind them in a flicker of orange-yellow flame. Dragon as he used his opponent's momentum against him to place his hands against Edo Han's chest and hurled him through the air. "Get ready, Lucy." The celestial spirit mage nodded as she withdrew the silver key for the sentient grandfather clock spirit, watching as the fire Dragonslayer's body bloated. Steam leaked out from between his teeth before he exhaled forcefully. Karyu no Hoko. The fire dragon's roar spell melted the ground as it slammed against the Edolesian soldiers. They were pushed backwards, growing closer and closer towards Lucy. The brown-eyed mage then caught Natsu's gaze and the pink-haired firebrand gave her a wink. He cut off his flames and Lucy summoned forth her magic. "Gate of the clock, I open thee." Horologium. With the sound of a ringing bell, a golden magic seal sprung forth from the tip of the silver key. The sentient clock opened his body and despite his very thin and long frame, the two Jinchuriki were crammed into the Horologium's body. "It is done, Lucy-sama," Horologium said. "I can hold them for 1 minute as required. Any longer and I may not survive this." "Alright. Forced closure," she exclaimed and Horologium vanished from view as particles of light and magic. The moment he did, Natsu was already on the move. Flames ejected from his feet and he carried himself through the air, snatching Gray and Lucy up on the process. He arched into the air, reaching the necessary altitude before his flames increased in size as the force of his fire-induced thrust was proportionally increased. The world was a blur of color to the three mages as they flew over the kingdom capital of Edolus. Within 20 seconds they had just cleared the outer wall, and within another 10 they had gotten within what they believed to be from the kingdom. Natsu dropped down from the skies, the ground cracking as he landed. Gray and Lucy quickly got out of the fire Dragonslayer's grip and Lucy held out the golden key that was her escape plan. "Gate of the Virgin, I open thee." "Virgo, punishment time, Haim-sama?" the pink-haired maid spirit asked. Now, Virgo," Lucy stated before turning to her friends. "Alright, we have about 20 seconds again before I have to summon Horologium. You too. You're my best friends, so please don't die, especially you Natsu." "Huh? Whow." Natsu held his ribs as Gray jabbed them with his elbow. "What was that F?" He paused in his speech as Lucy stepped forward and kissed him on the cheek. His confusion transformed into shock as he looked down at the blushing blonde. "Lucy? You come to me alive, okay?" Natsu gulped as he stared into her brown eyes. "Promise me, Natsu." The dark-eyed Dragonslayer nodded stiffly, a determined expression adorning his face. He intertwined the girl's right pink finger with his own, offering her a small smirk of confidence. Promise of a lifetime. "Okay." The blonde smiled brightly. She stepped back before holding out the key of Horologium. The golden magic seal formed in front of the silver key, the roars of Edo Han and Edo Yugito echoing through the gate in space and time. As quick as a wink, Horologium appeared, opened his chest allowing the two demonic-tailed beasts to tumble out onto the dirt-riddled wasteland, and then returned back to the celestial spirit world. The moment that happened, Virgo dug her tunnels to escape with her master. "You so owe me for giving Lucy the opening to kiss you just now," Gray said as he watched the growling pseudo-Jinchuriki. "I owe you nothing, but I made a promise to come back alive. So." Natsu's magic spiked and yellow-orange flames cloaked his body and the roaring phantasmal image of Igniel roared behind him. "I'm all fired up." Dining Hall, Royal Palace, Edolus. The dining hall was one of the many highlights that lay within the palace's walls. With a lengthy table that could seat over 50 guests and decorated with the finest quality tablecloths, cutlery and flowers, it was truly a sight to behold when the chandelier above made every glitter as if they were made of gold. Too bad that was all literally shattered when the Titania of Fairy Tail had been sent flying through the well-decorated room via hurricane force winds. She tumbled through the air like a rag doll before crashing on the ground, tearing a trench in the floor as her momentum carried her through the lengthy dining table until she came to a stop at the edge of a massive obsidian statue of King Faust. The Titania of Fairy Tail groaned, shaking her head as she climbed back to her feet. She was disoriented a bit from the vertigo and had a bit of blood pooling in her mouth since she ended up biting her tongue, but to her credit, she was pretty much in one piece and her grip on Caliburn was secure in spite of. She turned and spat out the little bit of blood that had currently stained her white teeth with crimson. Urza was then alerted to her opponent's presence as Nightwalker scattered dust and rubble with another burst of wind from Mel Force. The vacuum wave carved another trench within the palace's walls, but Urza quickly hopped into the air so that she would land atop the head of Faust's statue. With the high ground secured, she was in a bit of an advantageous position, but both she and her Edelus counterpart refused to let their guards down as they stared at one another. The wielder of Caliburn remained silent as she glanced at the 10 commandments in her opponent's hands. That spear, it is quite impressive to be able to withstand the blade and fires of Caliburn. A blade of Merlin is capable of slicing through dragon scales, yet her spear does not even have a single scratch. However, whatever magic or enchantments it's been imbued with, the moment it is about to collide with Caliburn's flames, it is able to tear through them. Caliburn's fire comes out due to sending a constant flow of magic energy to the blade, and the only way to stop them would be to either remove my grip or to stop my magic flow. She had done neither, which can only mean that her spear is capable of nullifying my own magic. If it weren't for Caliburn's own natural durability and being indestructible, I don't think I would have a sword anymore. You fight better than I expected you to. Your spear. Urza gestured to the polearm of her Edelus counterpart, completely ignoring the jab at her fighting prowess. It is quite a weapon. There are literally supposed to be only 2 other weapons in existence which are capable of resisting the sharp edge of Caliburn. Tell me, how does one in a land without magic come across such a fantastical weapon? It was a gift to me from King Faust himself. She spoke with a prideful smirk on her face. For my years of service and for my outstanding deeds done in the name of the kingdom and in the name of His Majesty, the 10 Commandments, a spear handed down to only the greatest of knights in the royal army, was given to me. My spear has tasted blood many times, eating the hearts of those who have had the displeasure of confronting me in battle. You will be no different, doppelganger. That will not be the case this day, Nightwalker. Urza said as she glowed with magic energy. On my world, I am a master of many a weapon and I can use just as many. The blood of 3 of the most powerful mages to ever walk the face of Earthland run through my veins. And it would bring dishonor to them if I were to fall. You are too weak to best me, fairy scum, Nightwalker spat. You can sing your praises all you want, but you will die by my spear. Insert music. Fate, 0 The battle is to the strong. We'll see about that. Her Flame Empress armor vanished from her form and was replaced with the Knight armor. Her requip gates shone like otherworldly portals as they appeared behind her, the tips of the many weapons she had stored within poking through. All of them were fixated on Nightwalker's form. I am Urza Uzumaki Namikaze, and my blades will taste your blood this day. She launched 2 swords, each one glowing with magic energy. Nightwalker looked at the oncoming weapons and quickly got into a strong stance that allowed her to shift her head to avoid the head of the first spear. She spun on her heels and she let one hand go from the 10 commandments to snatch Urza's sword out from the air. She continued with the spin and then raised the sword high into the air to bring down upon the second. A powerful explosion rocked the already ruined dining hall. The smoke cloud dispersed and Nightwalker was revealed to be standing as tall and strong as she was in the beginning of the battle. Dance my blades. Urza called out as more blades shot forth from the requip portals. Nightwalker moved with grace and skill befitting of her title as a commander within the royal army of Edelus, her powerful spear being used to bat aside any and all attacks that came at her. Circle sword. The Titania of Fairy Tail cried out as 5 swords made a circular shape and began to rotate at a high speed. They were flung through the air by Urza's telekinetic command and Nightwalker was forced to raise her spear to block. Orange sparks decorated the air as Nightwalker was sent skidding backwards slightly from the attack. While she was focused on it, Urza fired off a few more swords, using her telekinetic hold on them to make them arc through the air at unnatural angles that defied the laws of physics. That won't work. Mel Force. The magic of her spear obeyed her command and a pulse of hurricane force winds rushed out from the spear. The circle sword spell was broken apart and sent the 5 swords careening through the air. Some collided with the swords Urza had sent flying towards her doppelganger, but even if they hadn't, the vacuum wave would have sent them scattering every which way throughout the dining hall. One of the blades was then sent directly back at Urza's woman backflip to avoid it. As she was in the middle of her acrobatic movement, she called upon Caliburn and slashed the head of King Faust's statue, severing it from the rest of the body. With a follow-up swing, a tongue of fire erupted forth from the sword and slammed into the obsidian head. The obsidian was covered in fire and the explosive force at which the flames had collided with it sent the head of King Faust hurtling towards Nightwalker like a meteor that was descending from the heavens. Sylpharian, Nightwalker took on a burst of speed to avoid the flaming obsidian head of her monarch, but the fiery explosion that resulted from the crash sent her careening through the air. She crashed through a support pillar and rolled on the ground, using the momentum to climb back to her feet in time to see Urza having taken small flight towards the chandelier which hung from the ceiling. Urza severed the chain which allowed it to remain suspended before going into a front flip as she gripped the now broken chain. With a terrifying roar, Urza swung the 4-ton mass of crystal and metal down upon her foe with enough force to crater the floor. Luckily, Nightwalker's Sylpharian gave her the edge needed to avoid the strike before she pushed off into the air to meet her opponent in the air. She lashed out with a strong kick that Urza blocked, but had enough force to send her flying back. Gravity Core. From the tip of her now glowing spear, a concentrated orb of pure magic energy and gravitational force swirled to life. It grew to the size of the massive chandelier that Urza had previously thrown at her before it was fired. Urza was still flying through the air as she caught sight of the oncoming projectile of pure gravity, and so she spun through the air and unleashed a raging inferno from Caliburn. The two attacks collided with each other and generated a massive explosion that took out the entire dining hall and whatever rooms lay adjacent to it. As a result, the royal palace was missing a large portion of its left side. The screams of fear and alarm from the citizens of Edalis were now able to be heard by them, but they were white noise to the two red-haired combatants as they fell. Requip. Flight armor. Urza cried out. Sylpharian, was Nightwalker's reply. Both redheads glared at one another before they began to push off of the falling pieces of the palace with enough force to leave the imprints of her greaves in the hard stone. They bounced around, Urza's form merely being a blur of crimson and platinum while Nightwalker's was crimson and black. They moved in a rather impressive act of synchronicity, jumping, hopping and flipping off the various footholds they found in their paths and clashed their weapons against each other while doing so. Sparks and embers decorated the air until they found themselves back in the palace walls. Their battle now increasing in its pace as they began to traverse what seemed to be the entirety of the palace in an effort to take one another down. Massive scars of ruptured marble and stone marked their paths as their literally earth-shaking strikes echoed throughout the royal palace's ruins. The kitchen exploded in a mighty fireball that served to take out the entire middle right portion of the once magnificent palace. The ballroom became decorated with fiery craters before a hole was blasted in the ceiling when a well-placed upward slash sent Nightwalker through it, a burn adorning her stomach as a result. They continued their battle throughout the numerous bedrooms of the upper floors, making them uninhabitable when the ceilings caved in on them from the shockwave-inducing clashes. Explosion. Nightwalker swung her spear in an upward arc and the fiery shockwave lifted Urza off of her feet before Nightwalker leapt after her and crashed a ferocious axe kick down upon her opponent's head. She slammed through the numerous floors which lay between her before coming to a stop, forming a massive crater upon colliding with the floor that made up the throne room. Blue-crimson. Nightwalker fell down upon her opponent, her spear now becoming twin short spears. One was red, its head burning with red flames. The other was a royal blue and had its spearhead partially obscured in a cloud of frost. Urza went into a backwards roll and got back to her feet before swinging Caliburn in an upward arc. The weapons collided with tremendous force, shockwaves of fire and ice decorating the throne room as a result. However, Urza's physical strength proved to be her saving grave as she pushed back against Nightwalker and sent her back. She hopped into the air and slammed Caliburn down upon her foe. Nightwalker raised the twin spears of blue-crimson in an effort to block, but the platinum fires remained uninhibited when the weapons collided. The Edalis army commander rocketed towards the ground at an angle, carving a trench as her momentum carried her across the throne room. She gritted her teeth in pain as she went to climb to her feet, but the sound of feet against marble met her ears and Nightwalker's eyes were wide with shock as Urza was already within her guard. Fast. The Edalesian commander's eyes widened in shock before Urza lashed out with a strong kick to the side of her head that sent her rocketing through the air and through one of the decorative busts of King Faust, as well as a support column. Requip. Flight armor. Urza rushed across the room, her immense speed giving her the capability to even scale the walls of the throne room uninhibited as she raced past her still airborne opponent. She hopped into the air and her body shone once more as she switched out armors. Requip. Purgatory armor. Now clad in the powerful embrace of the black steel that was publicly labeled her strongest armor, she delivered a strong axe kick that brought her Edalis counterpart back to ground zero. Nightwalker gritted her teeth and managed to land on her feet, the marble floor cracking beneath them due to her harsh landing. HYAH. The Edalesian knight was caught quite off guard by her opponent's quick follow-up move. Rune save. She cried out in desperation. Urza slashed with Caliburn and Nightwalker raised the rune save form of her spear to block. It nullified the fires that would have been unleashed as a result, but Nightwalker gritted her teeth in effort as the force of the strike forced her down to her knees. A fiery shockwave raced out from the point of contact and the force of Urza's attack caused the ground beneath Nightwalker's feet to shudder and quake before it caved it to create a large crater. Glass shattered and marble broke apart from the resulting shockwave before Nightwalker used Mel force to generate a massive burst of wind to send her opponent flying back and gain some breathing room. A spiderweb of cracks forming as said opponent impacted with the wall and coughed up a glob of blood as a result. Urza fell to the ground, landing on her hands and knees, panting and coughing up a bit more blood to stain the pristine white floor of the now ruined throne room. Nightwalker wasn't in the best of conditions either as she cradled her side, wincing as she felt the broken ribs. She was breathing heavily as a result, and the cauterized wounds from Caliburn's attacks scarred her once perfect form, especially the large slash she had been dealt to her stomach. The two Urzas climbed to their feet. They were on their last legs and so they both knew it was all or nothing, down to one final strike. You are indeed a powerful opponent, Namikaze, but this is it. No one who has gazed upon it has lived to tell the tale. Magic energy erupted forth from her body and the spear, the ground cracking beneath her feet from the mere force her aura generated. The glowing form of her weapon lost its shine and revealed the final form of the Ten Commandments. The spear now had a straight point that had 4 edges curving inwards and downwards, respectively, separated by a golden arrow extending out of the head of the spear horizontally, with a diamond shape a red crystal. The grip of the spear bore a red orb that appeared to be held in place by small teeth-like decoration, which connects to the shaft. The final and most powerful form of my spear. Saint Spear. Raveled. If you wish to show me your most powerful spear, then here is my most powerful armor. The entire palace seemed to quake as the daughter of 2 wizard saints called upon her re-equip magic one last time and her body shone as if it were a divine miracle. When the light o' her magic vanished, her ultimate armor revealed itself to the world. It was a dual-toned armor composed of a simple pink breastplate joined to the collar, which sports a heart centered between 2 wing-shaped epaulettes. The pauldrons were structured by 2 pink plates, faintly shaped like wings, consecutively surmounted by one another and pointed downwards. They were adorned by intricate ornamental wings on each pauldron. The gauntlets completely enveloped her arms and featured prominent feather-shaped decorations pointing backwards in correspondence to her wrists. The waist guard was made up of plates attached to the breastplate, surrounded by a thin belt around Urza's waist, and had a short, pinkish-white skirt underneath covering her upper thighs. Her greaves reached up to the center of her bare thighs and possessed feather-like ornaments protruding from the upper edges of her greaves and the lower edges of her knee guards, which had similar motifs carved on them, and each sported a pair of small wings, one attached to the knee guard and one in correspondence to Urza's ankles. The armor was complemented by a large tiara adorning Urza's head, with feather-shaped protrusions jutting out horizontally, and a large purplish-white cape. Urza's hair was now styled into a pair of braids that flowed down from the back of her head. Requip. Armadura Fairy. The 2 Urzas made the entire palace shudder from the gravity of their magical auras. Nightwalker gripped Raveled while Urza had Caliburn at the ready. They stared at one another for what seemed to be an eternity, but was actually only a second. Their eyes burned with battle lust and they took a simultaneous stomp forward. Boom. Insert music. Fairy Tale Dragon King. The ground beneath began to quake and the twin redheads released gasps of surprise, their brown eyes widening as they watched the floor in front of them begin to rise. The marble floors could have been reinforced with steel and it still wouldn't have made difference as said floors broke apart as if they were made of eggshells. Whatever was pushing up against it did so with ease. And it continued to climb higher and higher. It even broke through the roof of the remnants of the royal palace as if it wasn't even there. Urza slid back, but managed to gain enough friction to halt her movement. Her brown eyes continued to climb upwards, widening with each second. The massive behemoth cast an equally massive shadow over Urza's body. It was only when she had her first encounter with her brother, that was the only time she had felt such a level of fear in her soul. What is that? Nightwalker asked. Its silver body stood at a massive height of 300 feet, shining as if it were made from the precious metal itself. Its claws and teeth were a darker shade of gray and its lengthy tail swished lazily behind it, but even then the massive rear appendage was capable of crushing the palace architecture into rubble. A massive gray lacrima, not unlike the one that had been located in the capital's center, was embedded in the center of its chest armor. The lacrima released a loud hum as the crimson energy held within signaled its activation. For a moment, Urza could have sworn she saw the heads of what appeared to be what she could describe as beasts. Though, the head of a fox was the one that stood out to her. The massive machine whirred to life, its once dark eyes shining with a burning red that made a stark contrast against its shadowed visage. Is that? Urza herself couldn't believe the last word that escaped herself, but it didn't make it any less true to her. A dragon, underground, Daedalus. Dark clouds of dirt and dust clouded the air. Sparks of voltage bled from severed wires that drew upon the dregs of power left within the lightning lacrima they were connected to, and small fires littered the ruined underground. The once impressive facility that had been Byro's testing grounds for the Edalesian Kingdom's research and development programs, as well as the area where some of the more vile prisoners within the kingdom would be subjected to horrific experiments as test subjects for Byro's more questionable trials, had been reduced to scrap metal and rubble. In the center of a massive crater, the epicenter of all this destruction that no one outside of the upper echelons of the kingdom would ever know about, there lay a dome of sturdy and thick wood. The wood dome then retracted, seeping into the earth it had come from and vanished as if it had never been there in the first place. King Faust? His cry echoed throughout the remnants of the destroyed underground facility. Bairo-san? His voice continued to echo and Hashirama's obsidian orbs glanced around, looking for any sign of the elderly scientist. His ears twitched as he caught wind of the sound of cloth fluttering in the breeze. The Mokuton user's eyes widened in surprise as he saw the black cloak that Bairo wore, following its trapped form until he spied the stains of blood that lay beneath the large pieces of rock and steel that had once been the ceiling. How did all this? Oh no, the man made Exceed fell to his knees, his red armor rattling as he raised his shaking hands to his face. I can't believe he did that. It is against the laws of Aeolus and yet he activated Dorma Anum. Flashback underground, Aeolus a few minutes ago. Hashirama's eyes were wide and his mouth was agape as he stood alongside Bairo. The brown and black furred Exceed could only stare in amazement and fascination at the massive silvery orb of metal before him. It was covered in black markings that were akin to scales and was wrapped entirely in chains, and beside it was another massive orb, the gray lacrima that had once been placed in the center of the capital city and had been supplying near limitless magic to its populace. The crimson energy of the nine burned within and Hashirama could see the images of the Biju Exceed flicker in and out of existence. Despite their being converted into pure energy, their consciousnesses still thrived and they were filled with unbridled negative emotions. The hatred, the rage and the killing intent, it all stemmed from the lacrima. I trust that all of the necessary modifications have been made to Dorma Anum, Bairo? Faust asked. The old scientist chuckled, a disgustingly wide grin stretching across his face and threatened to split it. Of course, Your Majesty. Bairo tapped a few more buttons on the console he was operating. All central power systems have been removed from the main power lacrima and have been resized and refitted to accommodate for the new lacrima. The magic of the nine will flow through the Dragon Knight and by my calculations, the power of Dorma Anum will increase by over 1000%. All we need is your command, King Faust, and it will be done. The wizened king of Aeolus nodded as he then raised his arms. His wrinkled hands gripped his large, fur-lined cloak and removed it from his body. The heavy cloth fell to the ground with a plop to reveal the gray-haired man was now clad in a skin-tight, black bodysuit that revealed the man was surprisingly fit for his age. Do it. As you wish, my liege, Bairo replied to his superior with a dramatic bow. He then pulled a few levers and pressed a blue button before the lacrima containing the pure essence and energy of the nine was being brought over to the massive silver sphere. It was then that a circular compartment opened in the silver sphere, perfectly matching the size of the nine's lacrima as said lacrima slid easily into place. With a snap and a hiss, steam was ejected from the hydraulic machines that placed the lacrima into place and the black markings that covered the silver sphere shone red for a moment. The lacrima then began to pulsate like a heartbeat and glowed with the immense power it held within. Attachment complete. Bairo replied as he then glanced at the holographic screen that appeared before him. The tan-skinned scientist pressed a large red button and Hashirama's awe grew, but this time, it was accompanied by fear. Insert music. Naruto Shippuden Kagaya Otsutsuki. The chains that once bound the silver orb were broken, the heavy black metal cracking the ground with its weight, and the object began to morph before their very eyes. Its legs stretched out from the underside of the sphere, smashing into the ground. Its body shrunk in width and lengthened, its tail lashing out as it extended to its full length. Two cylinders ejected from its newly formed torso to make the behemoth's arms and claws that could easily rend flesh from bone emerged from the depths of its internal machinery. Its neck stretched out from the top of its torso, the bulbous end of it taking on the shape of a dragon's head. Its eyes were dark, indicating its current state of inactivation, but even then, the steel behemoth was a fearful creation. Eternano conducting mechanisms online. Central power conductors online. Capacitors are at full operating capacity and all functioning capabilities are within the limits of their sources of error. Dorma Anum is ready, my king. The loud whirs of mechanics shifting echoed throughout the underground chamber that Dorma Anum was sealed in, and a small hole opened up at the top of Dorma Anum's head. Hashirama knew his part to play and he sprouted his white feathered wings with a single burst of magic. He flew over to his king and gripped him by his shoulder. The Mokuton using Exceed lifted his superior into the air, carrying him over to the draconian titan of steel. King Faust. The man grunted in acknowledgement, glancing up at his biological weapon. His harsh gaze made the shorter being flinch under its intensity and Hashirama gulped, swallowing the lump that formed in his throat. King Faust, are you sure about this? Hashirama, I told you before that this is the only way for the kingdom of Aeolus to establish its rule with finality. The sixth king of Aeolus pointed to the ceiling, but it was obvious his vision extended beyond that. I am doing this for my people. A king's purpose. is to protect his people. This is the only way I know I can protect them from the Exceed. Those creatures need to be killed, wiped off of the face of this world, and humanity will finally take its place as the dominant rulers of Edelus as we were always meant to be since the beginnings of our world. But, my king, are you defying me, Hashirama? King Faust snapped. Need I remind you that your entire creation, the entire reason you even exist, is because I willed it. I instructed Biro to craft a weapon that could fight against the Nine. I was the one who gave you a purpose and helped raise you for 10 years so that you would be ready for this very day. I am practically your father, Hashirama. Is that what you were doing, Hashirama? Betraying your father? The brown and black furred Exceed shook his head immediately. No, I would never betray you, King Faust. He then glanced at the Dragon Knight mecha. But this machine, this weapon, it was locked away for a reason. The laws of Edelus said it was, and the Nine. They told me about what happened 40 years ago. Everything. Did they now? Yes, my liege. Hashirama nodded in confirmation as they finally reached Dorma Anim's head. He gently rested the elderly monarch into his seat within the draconian machine's head, watching as Faust settled into it. It takes magic to power itself, and Edelus is practically without Eternano. Even with the Nine powering it, will you really risk the Dorma Anim literally draining what is left of our world's magic? If that is what is necessary for my kingdom and for my people, then his eyes widened. Those disgusting Exceed think they are gods. They think they can rule over my subjects and my kingdom just because their queen has the power to predict their deaths? Shagad, she is revered, seen as a divine being. A god. I am but a man, Hashirama. Faust spoke with a sigh, his wrinkled features seeming to become more paramount as he gazed into the eyes of the winged feline before him. I remember when my father, and his father before him, they told me about the ancient stories and fictional tales of heroes who fought gods. They tried to, but it was far too much for them, and so they fell before the might of the divine. However, there were those who did whatever it took to defeat their holy adversaries, taking on the powers from other sources. Darker and more vile beings in order to defeat them. The work of devils are the only thing that can defeat gods. King Faust, Hashirama gulped. What are you saying? The king's eyes blazed with a manic light and he placed his hands on the controls of Dorma Anim. The draconian titan roared to life, the lacrima within it pulsating. Hashirama was thrown back as massive pulses of magic were released from the Dragon Knight, landing back at the feet of Biro. The old man was in a trance of madness, it seemed, as he just cackled, his eyes alight with amazement. It works, it works. The booster rockets beneath its feet had white smoke billowing from it. And from those clouds of smoke, the Dragon Knight began unleashing tongues of flame to allow it to rise. The bursts of magic continued to be released from Dorma Anim, and the entirety of the underground quaked and shook from the awakening of the beast. Biro-san. The black-eyed Exceed quickly tackled Biro to the ground, and the two of them rolled across the floor as a large piece of the ceiling nearly crushed the laughing scientist. The ceiling continued to fall apart as the support columns literally crumbled from the force of the magic that Dorma Anim was unleashing. The wild winds from the Eternano bursts caused the Mokuton user's fur to billow and his red armor to clatter violent. But in spite of all these sounds, the voice of Faust was still audible throughout the collapsing chamber as it was projected from the speakers of the Dragon Knight mecha. Hashirama, let it be known that man has tried to kill God. It proved to be something that cannot be done, and so, if man cannot kill God. Dorma Anim's eyes shone brilliantly and its monstrous roar signaled its awakening. Red magic energy flowed around its body like a fiery blaze and gave the already demonic-looking creation an even more intimidating persona. The devil will do it. The Exceed's eyes widened as Dorma Anim's booster rockets finally generated the necessary thrust to send it climbing into the air. The roar of the Dragon Knight echoed once more and the underground facility continued to collapse. Hashirama's eyes widened as a massive shadow encompassed his diminutive form. Looking up when he saw a large piece of dark rock descending towards him, he quickly converted to his more humanoid form and clapped his now hand-like paws together. Mokuton. Mokujoheki. Pillars of earth burst forth from the ground on either side of Hashirama. They arched and interlocked, forming a dense dome of sturdy wood, and with the wood locking wall spell established, Hashirama was now forced to sit and wait. End flashback. Insert music. Death Parade Moonlit Night. Why? Does he not know of the danger that he is putting his people in now that he has once again activated Dorma Anim? Has the demonic power of the Nine corrupted him somehow? Why would King Faust do such a thing? Hashirama muttered all these questions to himself, but then his eyes widened in realization as he recalled his conversation with the Nine when they told their story of how they escaped to Earthland. The words of Seiken filled his mind. He loved his people and would do anything for them. But that was what ended up being the problem. The six-tailed slug frowned as his eye stalks drooped a bit. What? What have I done? What has my king done? The armor-clad Exceed looked up at the massive hole in the ceiling Dorma Anim had created, though it would be more accurate to call it a tunnel since the metal dragon had climbed through the earth with the intent of rising to the surface and then to the heavens to accomplish the goal of its wielder. He recalled his outbursts in defense of his king. He said everything that could be said to defend the honor and integrity of the ruler of Edalis, but he could no longer use them as he had witnessed the madness of his own king. He had accomplished his goal of regaining the Nine to supply magic to his people. He had the power to overthrow Shagat through mere intimidation, and yet an army was still created. The power of the Nine was implanted into the X-Pills to give magic to the Shiroikage members. Dorma Anum was activated and the lacrima that had once been seen as a light of hope, had now been converted into a literal engine of destruction. Tears crawled out of his tear ducts, pooling at the corner of his eyes until he could not hold them back any longer. The streams lined his fur-covered cheeks. He was a soldier to his king. He was a weapon and a tool to his user. He had been everything and would be anything so long as his king commanded him to do it. And King Faust was not wrong when he had said he was like a father to him. And that was what made the pain the worst, as the feeling of his heart being constricted in his chest increased. The winged feline could only continue to cry in anguish and anger at his own loyalty as the memory of Kurama speaking to him emerged. Your king is a tyrant under the guise of a saint. He will not rest until he sees humanity above the rest. Extalia still exists and he will bring about another war to see our creations burn. Royal Palace, Edalis. It was really quite a stretch to call the Royal Palace a palace anymore at this point. The raging battle from the two versions of Urza had reduced over half of the palace to rubble, and the interior appeared as if all forms of natural disasters had wreaked havoc throughout the former architectural marvel. Acting in conjunction with the battle in the courtyard between the members of Fairy Tail and the two pseudo-jinchuriki, which now looked like a war-torn battlefield, there had been quite a significant amount of damage done. Now even more had been done when the hulking draconian mass of machinery had emerged from the depths of the earth. A dragon. Urza's expression of shock was still mimicked by her Edalesian counterpart. But how? The Dorma Anum turned its massive body, causing more of the remnants of the royal palace to crumble as it was no longer supported by the behemoth's body nor the support columns, seeing as how they had been destroyed by both the battle between Urza and Nightwalker as well as Dorma Anum's entrance. The red-eyed machine then turned its head to the outskirts beyond the kingdom's walls. A loud rumbling was then heard as the thrusters beneath Dorma Anum's body activated once more. Clouds of smoke billowed out from underneath its feet as the magic energy and fuel necessary to propel the silver metallic dragon skyward were generated. With a roar that was akin to thunder, Dorma Anum was launched through the air and a massive shockwave ripped the palace apart, sending both red heads tumbling through the air as they were blown back. As Dorma Anum vanished into the distance, its metallic body glinting like a star in the night sky, Urza and Nightwalker were quick to recover their bearings as they now lay within the palace's gardens. They climbed back to their feet before their identical brown eyes met each other once more. With the dragon-like monstrosity no longer present, they were free to focus on their battle once more. Titania vs. Fairy Killer. Armadura Fairy vs. Saint Spear. Raveled. The strongest items within their respective arsenals now facing off against one another in one final bout to determine who was with only the remnants of a once majestic palace as their spectator. This ends now, Nightwalker. I couldn't agree more, Namikaze. Now let's see if your armor can hold its own against my spear. Nightwalker smirked. Maybe I will kill you just like the rest of those pathetic fairy tale members. Urza's fingers tightened around the hilt of the Sword of Kings. I think you will find that it will hold up just fine. She growled as emerald magic energy and platinum flames flowed around her body in a menacing fashion. Nightwalker's body was outlined in an aura of gold to match the force of the magical pressure exerted by her opponent. The gravity within the area seemed to increase tenfold as the two female warriors shifted into their battle stances, their magic energies rising into the air like columns of smoke. This act of intimidation continued for a few moments until they both realized that neither one of them would cower to the other. The glows of magic diminished visibly and Urza closed her eyes in concentration as her magic vanished from view. Silence reigned supreme between the two redheads and Nightwalker raised an eyebrow in confusion. However, her confusion was quickly replaced with surprise when Urza's brown eyes snapped open and the fairy tale mage vanished from view in a blur of color. Her former location now a small crater of cracked earth. Insert music. Fate Stay Night UBW 2014 Souls to Fight. Nightwalker took a tentative step backwards as her eyes shifted quickly in every single direction within her field of vision. Her senses were placed on high alert until finally she felt a burst of heat and killing intent from directly in front of her. She spun on her heels and swung her spear as Urza swung Caliburn down in a ferocious downward slash. Sparks and embers exploded forth as the two weapons collided. Nightwalker raised her spear and held it in a vertical position as Urza swung the platinum blade in a horizontal slice in an attempt to rip into her opponent's side. Nightwalker smirked, a toothy grin spreading across her face as bloodlust and adrenaline flowed through her body. With a grunt of effort she spun on her heels and swiped raveled at her Earthland counterpart, but Urza blocked the blow with the flat of her blade. The force of the attack sent the daughter of two wizard saints skidding backwards slightly, but she quickly reacted to perform a downward diagonal strike to divert the downward swing that Nightwalker sent her way. Urza then took a strong step forward and pushed herself towards Nightwalker with tremendous speed to deliver a thrust attack, but Nightwalker hopped to the side while also lashing out with Raveled so that another storm of sparks and platinum fire would decorate the air of their battleground. Urza's speed was great enough that she was now several feet away from her opponent, but she took it in stride as her armored feet became blurs of pink. She ran in a wide arc, circling her opponent as said opponent followed her, spear at the ready. Urza raised Caliburn and unleashed a storm of platinum fireballs at Nightwalker, but the red-haired commander of the Edalesian army was quick to display her skill with the spear. In a blur of motion, the 10 fireballs were met with 10 fast-paced spear thrusts. Each fireball was extinguished by a burst of golden light that burst forth from the tip of Raveled's spearhead, small explosions of light and fire now dotting the air. Nightwalker then swiped the smoke cloud that formed in front of her, dispersing it so that she kept the Titania of Fairy Tail within her sights. As Nightwalker did that, Urza saw it as the opportunity to strike. Now, she uttered to herself. After what was only a few seconds of fast-paced running, Urza dug her heels into the earth, ripping the garden soil up as she pushed herself in the direction of her enemy. Yes, come at me Namikaze, Nightwalker laughed as she met Urza's charge. Show me what you can really do. In the immortal words of my Nakama. Urza gripped Caliburn tightly as the weapon's flames burned brighter than before. I'll wreck you, bitch. Raveled and Caliburn collided with devastating force, a fiery shockwave racing out from the point of impact and sent grass, soil and flowers scattering in every direction. Urza then followed up with a strong kick to the head which Nightwalker ducked under before rolling to the side as Urza went with the momentum of her spin kick to then shift attacking limbs, raising her other leg to bring it down in the form of a devastating axe kick. The ground cratered from the force of her heel's impact before raising her forearm up to bat aside the spear swing Nightwalker made to her head. Nightwalker spun from the deflection, but took the movement in stride as she dug her weapon into the earth. A lengthy scar was torn in the garden soil as Nightwalker utilized her spear as an anchor to allow herself to hop into the air and lash out with a strong kick to the chest. Urza leaned backwards, her upper body parallel to the ground as she avoided the attack. Once her fellow redhead's leg passed safely overhead, Urza righted herself and lunged towards her Edalesian counterpart. Nightwalker ripped Raveled out of the ground as Caliburn was aimed at her. Light and fire exploded forth from the impact between the two weapons. Nightwalker quickly took off and circled around Urza to strike from behind, but the requip user was no slouch in her expertise in swordplay as she quickly turned and unleashed a monstrous swing to counter the thrust of Raveled. Urza then pushed back and aimed for an upward swing which Nightwalker blocked by holding her weapon horizontally. The force of the strike was enough to lift her off her feet, but Nightwalker went into a backflip to land in a stable position. Once her footing was secured, Nightwalker continued the exchange of blows by swinging Raveled up at her armored counterpart to send a burst of light energy at her. Urza roared and swung Caliburn downwards to match the arc of golden light with an arc of her own platinum fire. The two magic attacks caused a small explosion that turned the azaleas into ash before Urza sent another burst of fire at her enemy. The fairy killer ran forward and then went down on her knees while leaning backwards so as to slip under the fiery attack. An explosion occurred far behind Nightwalker, but neither combatant paid heed to it. I've shown you before, Namikaze. Your little fireworks won't do much good if you can't hit me. Nightwalker hopped into the air and went into a front flip, bringing Raveled down with terrific force. Urza raised Caliburn and blocked the attack, but the force traveled through her body and caused the beautiful roses beneath her feet to be scattered apart as a crater expanded out from beneath her. And I've shown you, Nightwalker, that you will struggle just as much to hit me. Urza put a bit more strength into her swing to send Nightwalker careening through the air. The spear wielder bounced across the ground twice before managing to use her momentum to roll and climb back to her feet. However, Urza gave her opponent no time to breath as she stabbed her sword into the ground to send a stream of platinum flame across the gardens. You think a fairy tale members has what it takes to defeat the fairy killer? Nightwalker ran towards the stream of fire, but then used her spear as a pole vault. True to her methods, she did indeed vault over the flames. She tucked herself into a ball to cover a bit more distance before she touched down on the ground as Urza moved to close the distance between them both. I don't think a fairy tale member has what it takes, Urza exclaimed as she hopped to the side to avoid the thrust aimed for her thigh. I know I have what it takes. She moved to attack with a thrust of her own, but Nightwalker put on a burst of speed to avoid the fiery blade of Merlin before swinging her glowing spear. Ha! Those are some very pretty words, Namikaze. Tell me, do you also sing songs of happiness and tell motivational speeches of Fry? Do they give you strength? My Nakama give me the will. The drive to fight with everything I have. Urza twisted at her hips to bring Caliburn across in a horizontal swipe to try and hit her opponent in the ribs. But Nightwalker dodged it before being forced onto the defensive as she was forced to block the following slashes that came after their predecessor. I do everything I can in battle for their sakes, but words won't give me the power I need for victory, and I will show you that power. Urza roared as she brought her burning blade down upon her spear-wielding enemy. Raveld and Caliburn generated another explosion of sparks and fire that was accompanied by a shockwave. Nightwalker smirked as she twisted her body to get to her opponent's unguarded side. She lashed out with a strong swipe of her golden weapon. Ha! Don't make me laugh, Titania. An arc of golden light marked the path of her weapon as the Titania of Fairy Tail ducked underneath it. The fairy killer followed up with a quick thrust to the chest of the Titania. Urza pirouetted out of the way and planted her feet firmly in place as she now stood back to back with her red-haired counterpart. If you won't laugh, then maybe I will make you bleed. Insert music. Fairy Tail Natsu theme, Outskirts, Edalis. Karyu no Hoko. ROWR. Blue and white flames burst forth from Natsu's mouth as Edo Yugito countered with her own blue and black ones. The two high-intensity flames scorched the ground they traversed before they collided with destructive force. A dome of flame and light expanded outwards from the point of collision to leave behind a smoking crater. But Edo Yugito decided to take advantage of the smoke, and the transformed Shiroikage member stretched out her arms and expanded the size of her fists to be, from Natsu's perspective, the size of Ignil's head. Ice make. Spikes. Gray slammed his palms down on the ground and an ice-blue magic seal appeared beneath the Bakaneko-esque monstrosity. Two massive spikes erupted from the magic seal and stabbed themselves into Edo Yugito's belly and sent her skyward. But the Hellcat Jinchuriki was not fazed by the strike as the sharp tips of the ice spell failed to even penetrate her flaming visage. With a roar, Edo Yugito continued her attack. Her arms stretched and bent in ways that were not humanly possible thanks to her newfound magic. Magic seals littered the ground as Gray summoned forth more spikes to try and divert the descending claws of blazing hellfire. But Edo Yugito's limbs either plowed their way through the spikes like they were made of glass or simply veered around them to continue on their path towards the son of Ignil. Gray, they're getting closer, Natsu exclaimed. Do something. Why am I the one with the responsibility? Gray pointed at the incoming fists of flaming feline fury. Those have fire on them. Why can't you just be a glutton and eat them? Because that's hellfire, you jackass. It tastes like shit. Now is not the time to be picky about eating fire. Gray and Natsu glared at one another, lightning sparking between their intense gazes. With their mutual rage towards one another at an all-time high, the two mages of Fairy Tail turned to the incoming attack. Natsu's fist was wrapped in orange-yellow flames while a massive gauntlet of black ice coated Gray's own. Don't interrupt. The two roared in comical anger while also delivering simultaneous punches. The level of synchronicity between the rivals was actually quite impressive, and Hellfire met Dragonfire and Divine Ice with terrific force. A shockwave tore the earth asunder while gusts of ebony frost and embers of blue-black and orange-yellow flame decorated the atmosphere. Natsu and Gray were sent skidding backwards as a result of their instinctual decision to meet their opponent's attack head-on. Such was the way of the typical Fairy Tail mage. However, the Slayer magic users heard the roar of Edo Han as he thundered across the rocky battleground. Karyu no Kouen. Hyojin Meiku. Dingnur. The two mages of Fairy Tail unleashed a raging fireball and a massive spear of black ice respectively at their horned opponent.
Edo Han's white eyes seemed to shine brighter as he was engulfed in the glow of Natsu's flames before the two spells generated a massive explosion upon making contact.
Fire and ice expanded outwards in a dome, and the resulting crater was revealed to be half boiling magma and scorched earth, and half obsidian ice. The resulting smoke cloud climbed high into the air, but a part of the smoke cloud stretched forwards, arching through the air before it dispersed to reveal an unharmed Gobi Jinchuriki. A clawed hand was morphed into a tight fist as it began glowing with steam like magic energy. Graw! Move! Gray quickly tackled the pink-haired Dragonslayer just as Edo Han brought down a devastating punch that ruptured the earth. The miniature recreation of Kokuo's 5 mountain jump spell created a fiery shockwave that was no less dangerous to the two Fairy Tail members than the original spell of the 5-tailed dolphin horse. The Fire Dragonslayer and Ice Godslayer were sent careening across the battlefield. They bounced across the dusty wasteland before rolling on the ground. They utilized their momentum to climb back to their feet just as Edo Han charged at them once more and lashed out with a strong right hook to Gray's head. The student of Shiva quickly forged a sword out of the ebony ice. He parried the strike and stepped into his opponent's guard before lashing out with a horizontal slash to the chest. Edo Han stumbled back from the strike before Gray spun on his heels and morphed his sword into a massive hammer. With a loud battle cry, he slammed the hammer against Han's left knee and sent the massive pseudo Jinchuriki off balance. Natsu now, on it, Karyu no Kajutsume. Natsu jumped up, his leg catching afire just as he delivered a strong rising kick to Edo Han's chin. The larger man's head snapped back from the force of the strike before Natsu lashed out with 2 strong flaming punches to the face that had Han stumbling. Karyu no Inchu. Natsu lashed out with a flaming elbow to the diaphragm, knocking the wind out of his opponent's lungs and forced him to hunch over enough to bring his head within striking level. Natsu took the shot as he shifted his body at the hips to deliver another elbow strike to the face before a final rotation of the body allowed the Fire Dragonslayer to crash another elbow down upon his opponent's skull. Han shattered the earth from the force of the impact at which met it. Karyu no Saiga. Natsu reared his leg back, allowing it to burst into flame before swinging it forward. Flames were also ejected from his heel to give it an extra boost in speed just as it went through the motions, meeting the downed Edo Han's body with terrific force. A streak of fire and dust marked Edo Han's path as he was sent careening across the rocky wasteland and slammed into a rock formation, bringing it crashing down upon Edo Han's form. His ears then twitched as he heard Edo Yugito's roar. "Keep your eyes on, I have her," Gray told the pyrokinetic Dragonslayer. Hyojin Maiku. Fuma Shuriken. The black Fuma Shuriken were hurled from Gray's hands just as quickly as they formed, embedding themselves into the woman's arms. Edo Yugito gritted her teeth in pain, but the magic of Matabi easily melted the juvenile Godslayer's ice and healed her wounds. The Shuriken had done little in their job as the Nibi Jinchuriki began thundering across the battleground. She raised her arms to slash at Gray, but the ebony-eyed mage's eyes widened when Edo Yugito suddenly vanished in a flicker of crimson. It was Natsu's turn to be surprised when his sensitive senses forced him to turn around just as the Nibi Jinchuriki reappeared within his field vision due to her circling around. Natsu quickly cloaked his arms in flame as Edo Yugito released a bestial roar, bringing her clawed strike down upon the Fire Dragonslayer. The magic-cloaked woman's attack collided with Natsu's armrig and Slayer gritted his teeth as the ground shuddered and quaked beneath his feet before it caved inwards to form a crater. "It's heavy," the pink-haired mage thought. His eyes then widened when the Nibi Jinchuriki's two tails raised up and then dug into the earth. Not a moment later did the ground rumble beneath his feet. The twin rear appendages began to wrap around him like a cocoon, squeezing him tightly like a boa constrictor. And like a boa constrictor, the tails would not let him go until he was dead. Edo Yugito's white eyes gained a shine of glee and her jagged maw seemed to stretch into a malicious grin. With a tiger-like roar, the transformed Shiroikage member unleashed a burst of hellfire from her tails. However, the moment the fires were released, their user was caught completely off guard when the flames receded just as quickly as they had been summoned. Feiya Doraibu. With a dragon-like roar, a powerful explosion of blue and white flame freed Natsu from his confines while also sending his feline opponent flying backwards. The Nibi Jinchuriki dug her claws into the earth, utilizing friction to halt her movement. Wrapped in the high-intensity flames of his drive mode, Natsu vanished from view as a flicker of blue and white fire before reappearing behind Edo Yugito so he strike her in the back. Karyu no Tekken. Edo Yugito snarled and was quick to spin around and launch a powerful swipe with her claws as they were then cloaked in blue and black flames. Dragon fire and hellfire crashed against one another, the fires literally turning the ground into lava due to their intensity. "Natsu, push her back," Gray ordered. Natsu complied as he pushed himself forwards and opened his jaws. Karyu no Hoko. He unleashed the most powerful of his basic spells, the stream of dual-colored flames sending the pseudo-Jinchuriki of Matabi flying back. The moment she did, a black-blue magic seal formed beneath Edo Yugito. Hyojin Maiku. Doragon, a dragon made entirely of black ice roared as it was brought into the world. Its blue eyes glowed violently before it clamped its fangs down upon her body. Edo Yugito's magic cloak made the dragon hiss as it ate away at the divine ice, but the dragon remained stable as it carried her skyward before arching through the air. With a final roar, the ebony reptile slammed the blonde into the ground where Edo Han was currently rising to his feet with enough force to create a sizable crater. "Alright Natsu, let's finish it, don't give me orders, stripper." Their magic energies flared as they prepared to deal what they believed would be the ending blow for this battle. However, just as they were about to launch their spells, a deafening something echoed through the air. The two mages turned to the skies in confusion, and the two pseudo-Jinchuriki before them were also forced to succumb to their basic sense of curiosity as they looked for the source of the sound. "What is that?" Gray asked. "I don't know," Natsu replied, "but it sounds like it's getting louder, and closer." His words were revealed to be true and the four combatants were all witness to the descending form of the Dorma Anim. The ground shattered with a resounding boom as the mechanized reptile crashed down upon the battlefield. The shockwave had all four magic users skidding backwards, but they were quick to recover so as to marvel at the red-eyed mecha before them. "Natsu, yeah? Are there such things as?" He pointed a shaky finger at the taboo of Daedalus, metal dragons. "Igneel never mentioned them, and he usually told me a lot about the dragons when I was a kid." "Huh," was Gray's intelligent reply. "Han, Yugito. You are needed for the final battle, you have no time to deal with pests such as these Earthland natives." The voice of King Faust echoed from the speakers built into the silver-plated dragon mecha. The The two pseudo-jinchuriki released enraged roars of defiance and unleashed blasts of steam and hellfire at their lord and ruler. But Dorma Anum was not a magic impervious robot for nothing. With a single swipe of its claws, the attacks that Natsu and Gray struggled so desperately against were completely nullified. You have succumbed to the rage of the Nine's powers. Faust scowled within the cockpit of his mecha. You are useless to me if you do not have the control to go with the power you possess. If that is the case, then Dorma Anum shall make better use of it. I will take back what is mine. A low hum was heard from the massive crimson lacrima in Dorma Anum's chest. The hum then grew louder and louder until it reached the point that Natsu's ears began to hurt. He covered his ears, gritting his teeth in pain as he fell to his knees. Gray quickly ran over to aid his pyrokinetic guildmate, but the two kept their eyes on the scene before them. What is that? Gray muttered as he looked at the crimson lacrima. The swirling crimson magic energy that lay within suddenly took shape for a split second. One image looked like a massive cat head while the other seemed to be some sort of dolphin with 4 horns protruding from its skull, both animals being something that the two pseudo-jinchuriki and the robotic titan's claws bore resemblances to. Gray knew that could not be coincidence. The surprise on the two mages' faces only increased when the roars of the struggling Gobi and Nibi jinchurikis began to undergo changes. They took on an actual human tone, losing the bestial nature they once possessed as the magic energy was literally stripped from their bodies and sucked into the body of Dorma Anum. The central power lacrima of Dorma Anum released a brief flash of light, almost as if content with the energy it had taken. Edo Yugito and Edo Han were then released from the grip of the red-eyed behemoth, falling to the ground with their eyes rolled up into their heads and bathing the outskirts of Edolus in their blood due to the complete loss of their skin when they transformed. They were dead. You killed them. Natsu turned up to the dragon mecha with anger burning in his dark-colored eyes. You killed them, oi. Listen to me when I'm talking to you, jackass. A powerful fireball was launched from Natsu's hands, slamming into the shoulder of Dorma Anum with enough force to cause the Dragon Knight to backpedal. You annoying whelp. Who are you to challenge the mighty King Faust of Edolus? The Dragon Knight's crimson eyes shone dangerously. Begone from my sight. Natsu and Gray could stare in shock as Dorma Anum's tail lashed out violently and slammed down on them with terrific force, cratering the earth as a result. The image of the mighty dust cloud was enough to satisfy Faust before he activated the thrusters, allowing the Dragon Knight to move towards its intended target. Extalia. Insert music. Naruto Shippuden stand upon the roaring earth. Extalia, Edolus Menma snarled. The magic-made exoskeleton of Kitsune bones rattling as if it were making its own snarl of displeasure. Apparently the Kyuubi Jinchuriki did not take kindly to be calling a mutt by the Apocalypse Dragonslayer. The leader of the Shiroikage assassination squad then decided to act upon his displeasure by swiping the air with his claws. The power of his arm swings was so monstrously large that they generated their own high-speed circulation systems, and so 2 massive tornadoes dug trenches through what had once been the living area of many an exceed. Acting in tandem with the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, Yagura unleashed a powerful torrent from his jaws while Son Goku released a plume of glowing orange lava from his own. Yagura's waters met with one of the tornadoes Menma formed, turning into a raging typhoon while Son Goku's lava turned the second tornado into a spiraling firestorm. The 2 elemental twisters made their way towards the Dragonslayers. Juvia and Roshi scowled as their respective elements were forced upon them. Juvia raised her hands to the sky while Roshi planted his palms against the ground. You will not use my element against me, they exclaimed in unison. The Reihi earth rumbled as a spiderweb of cracks formed in front of the elemental twisters. Suiryu no Hanryu, Juvia announced as the rains collected above her head. With a thrust of her arms, the magically formed rainwater rushed through the air in the form of a blast of highly pressurized water. The tearing torrent spell slammed into the typhoon Yagura and Menma had created. It did not overpower the attack, but it did its job of being mixed into the typhoon itself. Yoryu no Funin. Beneath the firestorm, the spiderweb of cracks widened and grew larger as a massive torrent of lava erupted forth from the subterranean depths of the floating kingdom. The lava plume spell easily stretched high into the sky, exceeding the height of the fire tornado and engulfing it. Parts of the plume of lava arched through the air and forced the others to move out of the way of the falling magma. Careful where you throw that stuff, Fu yelled to her lava using compatriot. Sorry. Roshi chuckled nervously as he scratched the back of his head. I sometimes forget that my spells usually cause widespread damage, but in this case, I think you can forgive me for this. What do you say, Juvia-chan? Juvia agrees with you. The blue-haired Dragonslayer nodded. The daughter of Levia and the son of Volcanus looked back to the elemental twisters before them. She and Roshi made swiping motions with their hands as if they were swatting away a mosquito, and the typhoon and fiery lava tornado shifted to crash into one another in a powerful explosion of steam. Grr. I can't see shit. The Iron Dragonslayer growled. Wendy, Fu, can't one of you get rid of this steam? Gajeel-kun, that would not be a wise decision. Haku's gaze met Gajil's as the former Phantom Lord Mage gave her a confused expression. Last time we scattered a cloud of something. It turned out to be advantageous to the enemy. The one who uses Chomei's abilities might possibly have mixed the scale powder in with the steam, and if we were to scatter it like Wendy did last time. The blue-haired daughter of Grandine frowned a bit as she once again made aware of her blunder. Our enemies could aim to detonate it like last time. But Fujin could just eat it like he did earlier. He could. Haku agreed. But it would not hurt to take precautions. Nay, Ototo? Naruto did not acknowledge his older sister figure as his nostrils flared slightly. His eyes then widened as he heard the hissing sound that came something being melted. I would agree with you, Ice Dragon. But not at this time. We need to scatter this cloud now. Seiken's user just unleashed an alkaline substance that's melded with the steam cloud. Wind Dragon, Sky Dragon. On it, the wielders of the wind and sky unleashed pulses of wind, and the steam cloud of melting alkali was sent outwards. Naruto's proclamation was proven to be correct, as well as the steam had floated through the air and ate away at the already ruined households and their dead exceed occupants. Yay! Up high! Wendy! Yash! The two wielders of wind gave each other high fives, matching toothy grins adorning their faces. However, their celebration was cut short as the ground beneath them began to shift. The hard, rain-soaked stone beneath their feet began to shift as it suddenly began to break down into smaller particles at a rapid pace. All eyes shifted to the Ichibi Jinchuriki, and the powers of Shukaku were made known to all as the dark sands moved to the will of Edogara. Move! The Dragonslayers all followed Naruto's exclamation. Wendy, Naruto and Fu had taken to hovering high in the air, but the others were left to fend for themselves on the ground. However, they were all quick to observe the rather sluggish pace at which the sands had stretched out after them to try and trap them in its grasp. They went into a series of backhand springs to continue to gain more breathing room between themselves and the sands, but the sand was relentless in its hunt. Yoryu no Sume. Roshi's hands were covered in lava that took on the shape of 5 claws. With a roar, the red-haired Dragonslayer swung his claws at the sands and superheated the granular particles of crushed earth. A large amount of the sand was turned to glass within that moment, but the sands were never ending as another wave of sand flowed across the battleground to replace its lost portion. Not even turning it to glass is slowing it down. Roshi scowled. Haku, how does freezing it sound? As long as that one holds Shukaku's power, I don't think doing anything to the sand will stop it. The daughter of Glacia replied as she froze over the sands with a gust of sub-zero winds. The blizzard did not hold up well due to the combination of an endless flow of sand and the powerful storm that Juvia's rain clouds brought with them. Said water Dragonslayer had converted her body into water to prevent a tendril of sand that nearly speared her through the stomach in its attempt to catch her, but it was upon contact with her liquid form did the daughter of Levia notice that particular portion of sand began to move noticeably slower than the rest of its body. That's it. Juvia stated with a look of realization present on her face. Juvia knows what to do. Well, do it quick, Roshi exclaimed as he wiped rainwater off his face. Inhaled deeply. Water and magic energy swirled and condensed within her gaping maw until it became a tight sphere. Suiryu no Hoko. The sphere exploded forth, turning into a powerful blast of pressurized water that washed over the sands. The sands began to slow down, each grain adhering to one another until the massive wave of sand became a sluggish mound. Juvia cannot create a more violent rainstorm as it would inhibit everyone else, but Juvia did notice that the water is what slowed down the sand. So Juvia used her roar to stop it, and since it is filled with water. The blue-haired Dragonslayer turned to the ice using Dragonslayer beside her. The black-haired Ice Dragonslayer caught Juvia's gaze and her eyes widened in realization. I see what you are saying, Juvia-chan. Haku smirked as her magic energy flared out in the form of a cloud of frost. Hyoryu no Hyotenkaga. The Sub-Zero Fang spell was cast over her hands and a beautiful pair of dragon heads made entirely out of crystal blue ice came into existence. The dragon heads bared their fangs and with a resounding battle cry, Haku punched the sluggish mound of sand. The fangs bit into the soaked sands and the sub-zero temperatures generated by the daughter of Glacia washed over the sands, freezing it solid. Edogara growled in annoyance as he tried to take control of his sands once more, but the combination of water and ice holding it back made it quite clear that this particular amount of sand was no longer his to tame. Ah, you want your sand back? Gajil teased before a sadistic grin came onto his face. Gee hee. Well here, he charged and delivered a strong kick to the newly formed glacier. Have it, the ice cracked heavily from the blow, but it was still sent careening across the Exceed homeland towards the pseudo-Jinchuriki. As a counter to the oncoming projectile of ice, Kurabi had been the one to strike as he charged like the rampaging bull his exoskeleton resembled. The glacier shattered like glass as the horned Jinchuriki crashed into it and continued his charge. The ground rumbled as he thundered across the battlefield only for him to a complete and utter halt when Gajil slammed into him. The ground cracked as the two beings gripped each other's shoulders, pushing against one another in a contest of strength. Hachibi Jinchuriki's eyes narrowed as he recognized the Iron Dragonslayer before him, but he remembered having slapped him away with ease, this time however. Gee hee hee. Gajeel laughed, his red eyes staring into the white voids that Kurabi's eyes had become. His skin shone like silver as the scale-like patterns that stretched across the bare parts of his body decorated it, and the output of his magic energy far surpassed anything he had released throughout the bee. Then dug his heels into the ground, and to the surprise of the eight-tailed pseudo-Jinchuriki, Gajeel had pushed him back. The growl of surprise made Gajeel ecstatic. Kurabi roared and his 8 tails rose up behind him before moving with great speeds, slamming down on Gajeel with devastating force. The ground quaked as it caved in before a massive crater formed along with a sizable cloud of dust and dirt. The user of Gyuki's power released what sounded like a laugh as he felt the grip Gajeel had on his shoulders slacken in a manner that made it seem as if the mighty Iron Dragonslayer had fallen. The moment of celebration came to an abrupt end however, as a pulse of green and steel-gray magic energy scattered the dust cloud. Gajeel's grip returned with a vengeance, and claws that shone like steel dug into the flesh of the Hachibi Jinchuriki. Kurabi roared, but whether it was out of pain or rage, it was really quite hard to tell. The ground cracked heavily beneath Gajeel's feet as his magic output continued to increase. His hair gained silver highlights. His skin became akin to that of steel as scale-like markings adorned his body, and an aura of steel gray and green outlined his body. Insert music. Fairy Tale Mahu Taisen, Iron Doraibu. With an application of his increased strength given to him by his iron drive form, Gajeel pushed Kurabi back to the point that he sent the Hachibi Jinchuriki skidding backwards and into a house. The impact was so powerful that the entire structure came crashing down on the holder of Gyuki's power. Gajeel-san is so strong now. Wendy exclaimed in awe as she watched from her perch in the air. Oni-san, what is he doing? What was that spell he used, and why does he look so different? Oh, it seems I never got around to teaching you about drive mode, did I? Drive mode? Wendy tilted her head in confusion at her older brother figure. Yes, drive mode, the blonde replied. It is a technique only to us Dragonslayers. You have been told about Doragon Fosu, correct? The blue-haired 12-year-old nodded in confirmation. Drive mode is essentially the halfway point between that and our base powers. We are made stronger, faster and more capable in the usage of our respective elements than before, at the cost of expending great amounts of magic to keep it activated. Once this is over, I will be willing to teach it you. Wendy's brown eyes widened in awe at the description of drive mode before looking back down at Gajeel's metallic visage. Alright, you little piece of shit. You think you can take me? Well, think again, because you haven't seen what we Dragonslayers can do just yet. But right now Iron Doraibu is gonna make you wish you never fought me in the first place. Gajeel unleashed a burst of magic energy and killing intent, the ground cracking beneath his feet slightly as he tensed his leg muscles. With a resounding battle cry, the son of Metallicana then took off and the ground shattered where he had once been standing. Kurabi growled as he rose from the rubble he had been buried under. The Hachibi Jinchuriki roared and a shockwave of magic energy tore the earth asunder as it headed towards Gajeel. But the Iron Dragonslayer simply raised his arms and plowed through it as his increased weight and durability prevented him from taking any noticeable damage. Surprise motherfucker. Gajeel reached his location, standing in front on Kurabi with a snarl on his face. The phantasmal image of his draconian parent roared behind him as he converted his arm into a sturdy club. I'm gonna use my iron. He glared at the durable bones which covered his opponent. And I'm going to break those bones. Tetusryukon. Bam. The red-eyed man rose up through his knees and delivered a ferocious uppercut to the underside of Kurabi's jaw. The blow struck with such an impact that a shockwave raced out from that point and the lower jaw of the ox skulls actually cracked slightly. Kurabi rose skyward before Gajeel spun on his heels to build up momentum and lashed out with a strong kick that slammed into Kurabi's exoskeleton-covered ribs with another Iron Dragon's Club spell. The pseudo-Jinchuriki of Gyuki crashed through several pieces of stone and one house. He was about to continue through a second one until Gajeel appeared beneath him in a burst of speed. He brought his arms together and in a flash of magic energy, the limbs became a massive serrated edge broadsword. The sword's edges then began to move like a chainsaw, moving and vibrating at high speeds. Tetsuryuken. He swung his sword arms in a powerful upward swing that carried Kurabi up the side of what looked like an apartment complex. Kurabi cleared the roof just as it was revealed that the entirety of the building had been cleanly sliced in half due to Gajeel's mighty slash. Kurabi hovered high in the air until Gajeel flickered into existence beside his target. Tetsuryuso. His right arm transformed into a sharp spear before he stabbed into the ox-like man's stomach. The dense coating of demonic magic energy prevented the flesh from being pierced, but that meant little to the Iron Dragonslayer as he extended his spear arm to slam the Hachibi Jinchuriki into the ground. He then adjusted his arm's angle, while continuing to extend it, dragging his opponent through the dirt and digging a trench with the 8-tailed monstrosity of magic. He would have continued, but the Iron Dragonslayer was suddenly forced to stop as his arm burst into pain. His red eyes widened when he saw a being made of violent purple magic energy slithering up his spear arm like a snake. Utakata's slimy body excreted a large amount of acid, eating away at the iron despite its dense structure. Soon the wielder of the Rokubi's power appeared in Gajil's face and reared back an arm. Groar! Utakata roared and delivered the powerful punch to Gajil's face, the acid coating it causing the man's cheek to burn. His arm returned to normal before he was sent flying through the rainstorm-filled air. Uindo Doraibo. A sonic boom signaled the shattering of the sound barrier, and Gajil found himself caught in the strong grasp of the daughter of Cyclonus as she called upon her drive mode. She continued on her flight path with Gajil's gums flapping in the wind from the speed at which she flew at. She then went into a front flip, her leg wrapped in swirling winds before she brought it down in the form of a painful axe kick. Furyu no Rankiaku. The axe kick crashed down on Utakata's skull and sent the slug-like man down the ground zero. He now lay in his own personal crater, and Fu smirked at her handiwork. Good idea deciding to use drive mode at this point. I think the battle might drag out for quite a while if we kept going in our base forms. I more or less did it to smash his face in. I know, but what better reason is there? Gajil stared into the orange eyes of the Wind Dragonslayer as if he had just seen the gates of Algesia themselves. Marry me. Fu laughed lightly and patted the cheek of her fellow Dragonslayer. You're cute, but not my type. Gajil bore a comically stone-faced expression at having been shut down. But then again, what kind of response do you expect from a proposal in the middle of a battlefield such as the one they were in? The Wind Dragonslayer's ears then twitched as she heard the loud clicking and roar of her Edelus counterpart. Fu's wings buzzed, sounding like an angry swarm of locusts as she raced towards the two Dragonslayers. Fujin, hold this for me. She then spun around and hurled her catch towards Naruto. The blonde reacted almost reflexively as he caught the former Phantom Lord Mage by the collar of his shirt. Naruto's glowing eyes met Gajil's crimson ones and raised an eyebrow. A proposal to Fu? Really? Shut up. I just don't understand why you're so disappointed. You've never met her before and you ask for her hand in the middle of a fight. Naruto replied. What did you expect? It was an in-the-moment thing. I don't actually like her and want to marry her. You confuse me, Iron Bastard. Naruto rolled his eyes at Gajil's words as the 19-year-old continued to grumble about his disdain for the Apocalypse Dragonslayer. The man continued to grumble as Naruto descended to place the son of Metallicana back on the ground. Wendy could only sweat drop at the scene before her attention shifted upon hearing the boom that came with the sound barrier shattering. The three Dragonslayers turned to see a pair of jet streams formed by the high-speed aerial battle that took place between the Wind Dragonslayer and the pseudo-jinchuriki of Chomei. Insert music. Fate Stay Night UBW Blazing Ashes 2. Garden, Royal Palace, Edelus with a loud battle cry. Urza swung the Sword of Kings down to take away the Edelesian Knight's right arm. But Nightwalker raised the back end of her spear so that the fiery blade would come into contact with the polearm and not her actual arm. The two weapons users then spun around and crashed their weapons against one another once again. The shockwave-generating collision ripped the earth apart beneath their feet while also sending them skidding away from each other. Small trenches were formed from their armored boots digging into the grassy soil, but the soil beneath the earthland Urza's feet was now a crater as she leapt into the air. HRAH! Nightwalker released her cry of defiance as she raised Ravel to divert the fiery swing Urza sent towards her. Urza was quick to strike again as she repeated her method of attack, but it was an act in futility as her Edelesian counterpart deflected it once again. Urza then leapt into the air once more, going into a series of twists as she unleashed a storm of fireballs from above that fell towards Nightwalker like a meteor storm from the heavens. That won't help you, Namikaze. Nightwalker's eyes burned with battle lust as she watched the armored Earthland native descend. I got you. She took off at a tremendous speed, easily avoiding the fireballs and the blast waves of their resulting explosions. Urza landed on her feet just as Nightwalker reached her position and was forced on the defensive. They clashed at speeds no other weapons user could ever hope to match. Flowers, grass, soil and stone were reduced to burning and scorched remnants of what they used to be as fire and light exploded forth with each clash. Ravelled and Caliburn were arcs of gold and platinum to the untrained eye. Their arm movements were so fast. The ground cracked before a crater expanded outwards when the two crashed their weapons against each other more. Don't make light of me, Namikaze. Nightwalker howled like a banshee as she twisted her body to avoid the horizontal slash from Urza. The sister of the Ogono Fujin followed up with an upward vertical slash, an arc of fire ripping into the earth as she weaved both methods of attack into one. But Nightwalker took a step backwards and shifted her body to avoid the intense fires. Once she was in the clear, she then spun Ravelled in her hands and then leapt and rotated to bring the glowing weapon down upon her opponent. Gah! Urza released a cry of pain as she was struck in the chest. A shockwave formed from the force of the impact and she was sent skidding backwards from the attack. She dug her heels into the earth, tearing the soil asunder as she came to a halt. That was a good strike. She complimented her alternate self as said alternate Urza attacked with a strong thrust to the chest once more. But not good enough. Urza swung her blade down to divert the strike before taking a strong step forward and swung Caliburn in an upward diagonal slash. Nightwalker shifted her spear into a vertical position to block the attack. The speed of their motions forced them to exchange positions and Nightwalker spun on her feet to try and take Urza's legs out from under her by aiming for her ankles. However, the red-haired wielder of Caliburn would have none of it as she hopped over the Saint's spear. She gripped Caliburn with both hands, a blazing determination burning in her brown orbs. HRAH. She brought the Sword of Kings down upon her opponent's skull, but the wielder of the Saint's spear raised said spear up to defend. The ground ruptured as a shockwave expanded outwards from the point of impact. So heavy. Nightwalker muttered as her arms shook to hold back the attack. Her brown eyes then widened when a burst of magic energy exploded forth from Urza and the daughter of two wizard saints then applied a greater amount of force to her strike as platinum flames burst forth from the other side of her blade to act as a mode of propulsion. DORYAAAAH. The ground cratered as an explosion of fire and magic occurred. Urza's attack won the round and Nightwalker was sent careening through the air. She bounced across the grass, ripping up soil and flowers before her momentum literally dragged her through the mud. A lengthy trough was dug into the garden as a result, until her unintentional journey across the now destroyed garden's landscape came to a rather explosive end when she was sent smashing into the triple-tiered stone fountain. A cloud of dust and debris wafted through the air and Urza panted in exertion. Her brown eyes stared at the cloud that obscured her opponent from view as she wiped the sweat and grime from her brow. Once the dust settled, the wielder of Ravelt was shown to be laying against a piece of the broken fountain, her visage dripping wet from the water that had soaked her. Her lengthy hair had been burned short and there were even a few very severe second-degree burns present on her thighs, arms and part of the lower left area of her face down to the corresponding collarbone. She breathed heavily, the reddening areas of burned flesh obviously causing her a great deal of pain. Her angry gaze met the tired one of her counterpart as she climbed back to her feet. Nightwalker. That's enough. You fight anymore and you may not live to see another day. As if I care if I live or die anymore at this point. Nightwalker spat, her legs trembling from the burns to her thighs. I have always lived for the thrill of the fight, and you are by far the second best I've come across. Which is actually quite funny. Nightwalker chuckled. One of the best fight I've ever come across actually being myself. I can relate to that. Urza nodded in agreement as the image of her brother came to her mind. She then pointed Caliburn at the commander of the Edalesian army. If you will continue to fight, then I will oblige you. A flare of golden energy was her reply as Nightwalker held Ravelt at the ready. The silvery blue image of the Saint's spear was then wrapped in the golden aura it generated due to being a holy weapon. For a soldier, a good death is its own reward. Insert music. Fate Stay Night UBW 2015 Excalibur. The two redheads then took off as their magic energies flared. They were blurs of color as they wreaked havoc across the gardens and even throughout the rubble of the palace. Large scars marked their paths before they came to a stalemate. Marble, stone and garden land were all sent flying away from the explosive contact the two holy weapons created until they continued their exchange of blows. Their arms were blurs and Caliburn and Ravelt were nothing more than streaks of platinum and silvery blue, respectively, as they attacked, parried, and blocked. A violent wind storm formed around them due to the pure speed of their strikes, until finally the Titania of Fairy Tail saw an opening. She swung her blade upwards and the ground ruptured from the force of the strike, Nightwalker stumbling backwards. She managed to regain her footing, but Urza had stamped her foot on the ground and took a few strong steps forward to propel herself. HRAH. She hopped into the air and rotated her body to bring the full weight of Caliburn down on her foe, which Nightwalker proceeded to hold off with Ravelt. A shockwave of magic energy and fire raced out from the point of collision. The two redheads gritted their teeth, grunting in effort to try and overpower each other. Their arms' TRC energies flared like pillars of pure light, but Urza lashed out with a strong kick to the burned area of her opponent's thigh. Gah! The cry of pain lanced through the air and brought the spear wielder down to her knees before Urza continued on with her attack. An arc of platinum fire marked the motion of the blade of Merlin and a loud scream echoed throughout the battlefield as the final blow was struck. Nightwalker gasped as her right arm fell to the ground, its grip on Ravelt lost so as to allow the holy weapon to fall as well. The Edalesian knight panted heavily, darkness creeping out from the corners of her vision. She looked up at her Earthland counterpart, the Sword of Kings being held to her throat. Insert music. 2 steps from Hell Master of Shadows. Skies of Extalia, Edalus the Wind Dragonslayer and Nanabi Pseudo Jinchuriki crashed against one another in a powerful exchange of blows, shockwaves decorating the rain-filled skies.
Fueryu no Kase Kiwa. Grower. The Wind Dragon's wind edge met an enlarged horn of demonic energy in another shockwave-inducing collision that had both combatants shifting away from each other.
Fu unleashed a cloud of scaled powder from her mandibles. The bright white powder blinded the daughter of Cyclonus, forcing her to hold her arms up to shield her eyes. Taking advantage of that, Fu clicked her mandibles and a spark of magic energy ignited the powder and turned it into a raging conflagration that lit up the dark skies. Furyu no Shinkudama. A spheroid of wind was generated before the entirety of the scaled powder could be ignited and encased the fires. Without any oxygen to keep it burning, the vacuum sphere spell turned the burning firestorm into nothing. Once that was done, Fu launched the sphere of compressed air at her opponent and an explosion of wind occurred upon crashing into the pseudo-jinchuriki's body. The female jinchuriki tumbled through the air until Fu appeared above her in a flicker of motion. The sonic boom that accompanied her movement acted her herald before she raised her high into the air and brought it down as a devastating axe kick. Furyu no Rankyaku. The green-haired Dragonslayer then lashed out with a strong wind-encased kick, nailing her counterpart directly atop her skull. The Shiroikage member rocketed through the air at a downward angle, but her white eyes suddenly caught sight of the watching Wendy marvel. Her mandibles clicked and her wings buzzed to help her regain her bearings. Fu then utilized the speed of her descent to head towards Wendy. Fu's eyes widened as she saw what was happening. Wendy, move. Huh? The brown-eyed 12-year-old looked up to see the frightening image of a humanoid kabutomushi beetle with glowing white eyes and mouth descending towards her with the intent to kill. Fu's mandibles opened wide and Wendy could only raise her arms in a feeble form of defense. Armor. Wendy managed to summon forth her magic, enhancing her defensive capabilities as much as she could in the time it took for Fu to reach her location. That time only amounted to a few seconds and so, while her bones were not completely broken through, Fu's sharp teeth did pierce skin and muscle tissue, earning a scream of pain from the blue-haired girl. Fu seemed to grin as she held Wendy's flesh in her maw and bit down even harder. Blood flowed down the Sky Dragonslayer's arms and her healing factor tried its best to fight off the toxic magic energy that threatened to dissolve her flesh. Gah! Wendy's eyes widened, releasing a gasp of pain as she was slammed into the ground. The earth broke from the force of the impact, but the Edelus warrior did not stop there as she continued to drag Wendy across the battleground, even smashing her through broken walls. The bleeding daughter of Grandine gritted her teeth, fighting back the tears that came with the fear and pain of her current situation. Get off me! With each exclamation, Wendy lashed out with a strong kick to the winged beast's stomach. However, she did nothing to faze the Shiroikage member and her flesh being bitten into even further was the reward for her troubles. Fu then lifted Wendy up off the ground and released her arms from her mandibles, but Wendy soon found the strong grip of her opponent's claws around her throat and she was smashed through a house and cratered a wall as the winged woman finally decided to stop. Wendy's raised her arm up, wind and magic energy spiraled into a compact sphere of rotating destruction before she thrust it forward. Metsuryu Ugi. Tenryu no Rasengan. Her self-made secret Dragonslayer art slammed into Fu's face with terrific force and the drilling effects of the attack did manage to cause the beast pain. With a roar of pain and annoyance, Fu batted Wendy aside, sending her through the wall she had been pinned to and rolling across the rain-soaked earth of Extalia. Wendy shakily rose to her hands and knees, spitting out the blood that stained her teeth. Though her armor managed to protect her from the majority of the damage, steam still rose steadily from her wounded body as her magic energy instinctively supplied itself to her cuts and bruises in order to heal them. Her head snapped up when the frightening growl of Fu met her ears. The Nanabi Jinchuriki pushed aside what remained of the wall to gain easier access to her prey. The winged Jinchuriki stalked towards the Sky Dragonslayer, raising her claws menacingly. Energy Make. Odama Rasengan. Naruto flickered to the right of the Nanabi Jinchuriki and time seemed to slow down as the basketball-sized orb of glowing blue destruction slammed into Fu's body. Fu's body bent sideways before she was sent spiraling through the air in a powerful burst of blue. She slammed through several buildings and pieces of stone before coming to a halt as she slammed into the body of Edo Roshi with a resounding crash. Oni-san! Wendy exclaimed before stumbling to her feet and hugging her older brother. Her eyes then widened as she caught sight of the loss of Naruto's left sleeve and the bandages that had once adorned it. The skin was red and the singes that adorned the edges of the remnants of his clothing showed that the cause had been due to some form of fire. You're hurt. It's alright, my little sky dragon. Naruto patted the girl on her head before turning away from her. But what will you do, Oni-san? I have a doppelganger to deal with, he replied as a powerful roar and a burst of red fire in the shape of a howling fox head emerged from the depths of the ruined section of Extalia. The daughter of Grandine ran off in a blur of speed just as he pulled up the 5-point elemental seal to defend himself as the powerful fiery explosion rocked the battleground. Insert music. Naruto Shippuden. I've seen too much. Garden, Royal Palace, Edelus, you've rarely ever killed, haven't you, Namikaze? That is true. No wonder. Nightwalker released a ragged cough. No wonder. You were so soft in your swings. I killed before when I was child, and it brought me no joy. Urza recalled her days in the Tower of Heaven. Her rebellion had unlocked her magic and allowed her to earn her revenge. The guild I belonged to does not take kindly to killing, and it was something that I made to be a part of my philosophy. For many years, I have struck down many enemies, but I have never killed them, for it is not something a mage should do. However, as I have been told by Oni-sama and by my senseis who taught me how to use my weapons, I would not survive long in this line of work if I do not find a way to kill. Wise words. Indeed. Haha. You're shaking, namikaze. Urza looked down to find her Aeolus counterpart was indeed stating a fact. Her hand continued to shake slightly even as she focused intently on preventing it. I despise killing. In the beginning, Nightwalker's breath began to slow as the final blow Urza had brought down upon her had led to some ribs breaking. It hurt to breathe. No one ever likes to kill, you think. Not killing makes you better than Thuaos, that you have a higher level of self-control since you've never had to gaze into the abyss as deeply as those of us who kill for a living. I felt the same once. After all, other than defending the crown, I had no right to play judge, jury and executioner. Nightwalker glanced at the fallen Ten Commandments spear alongside her lost arm that was now burning to ash from platinum flames. But you live a life on the battlefield, and you realize that killing is a necessary evil. It will save you one day, namikaze. But I don't want to save myself, I want to save my friends, but without. Stop being such a child, namikaze, Nightwalker snapped, shutting up her counterpart. The Aedolesian soldier winced, the shout having jostled her ribs before she was forced to cough up a glob of blood onto the ground before her. Nightwalker, you're… Hush, you insolent girl. Urza froze at the cold tone of her Aeolus counterpart. How many times have you had this conversation? How many times have you been told that killing is something you need to do? Once with my teachers, the other with my brother. That's one more than necessary. Listen to me, you are not righteous, or just, for sparing a soul after a battle. Nightwalker wheezed. Tell me, if you let me live and I somehow found a way to get your world. And I found you. And I slaughtered all of your friends. Urza's eyes widened at her doppelganger's words. Would you kill me then? If I took the one you loved the most in all this world and any other. And slit his or her throat before your very eyes. Would you kill me then? Nightwalker asked before spitting out a bit of accumulated blood from her mouth. You see what I'm saying to you, Urza? There may be a silver lining among the dark clouds. An enemy you will fight that has the capability for change to become someone better than what they had originally become. But you need to learn to distinguish those types of enemies from all the ones you have fought now and in the future. And you're one of the ones who I have to put down is what you're saying. Urza said it as a fact, not a question. Nightwalker did not respond as she looked up at the smoke and fires above, the sounds of conflict echoing from Extalia's hovering form. Urza gripped Caliburn tighter in her hands, the platinum flames rising off the blade of Merlin once more. Tears then began to spill from her eyes as she gritted her teeth, taking shaky breaths of preparation. I can't. You're a good girl, Urza Uzumaki Namikaze. Nightwalker gave her counterpart a blood-stained smile as she watched her opponent cry for her, tears of her own flowing down her cheeks. But nobody stays good in this world. With those words, Urza stabbed her sword forward. The sharp blade pierced through skin, fascia, cartilage and bone before exiting out the other end of her opponent's neck. The platinum flames that could turn dragons into burning corpses ate away at Nightwalker's body and reduced her to ash. Urza screamed to the heavens, stabbing Caliburn into the ground and ripped apart the palace ground in a storm of platinum fire to vent her emotions. The daughter of two wizard saints lay kneeling in the center of her personal firestorm. She killed out of instinct in the Tower of Heaven. She killed to survive to prevent Arya from rapid her. But this kill was the first she had ever made of her own free will. She held the life of her opponent in her hands and she crushed it, burning it to ashes in the most literal way possible. She remained still for a few minutes until she stiffened suddenly. A massive spike of magic energy radiated out across the world of Aeolus, making the redhead snap out of her stupor as she recognized the energy signature. She tilted her head heavenward, a pillar of black and blue magic energy stabbing into the skies where thunder boomed and lightning flashed above the kingdom of Extalia. Oni-sama. Insert music. Fairy tale Toki Hinata. Extalia, Aeolus, the pillar of black and blue magic energy, died away as Naruto stood tall and strong before his kitsune-like adversary. His drive mode made the earth tremble as he took a step forward, the ground cratering beneath his footfalls. Mokashiryu no Hakai Sume. He raised his arms as they became wrapped in the energy of his adoptive father's magic. Menma roared at him like the beast he had become. Crimson flames erupted forth around the Kyuubi Jinchuriki's claws. Show me what you got, mutt. Gruar. Naruto and Menma rocketed off from their positions before unleashing their claws of energy and fire at one another. The two attacks collided with devastating force, a fiery shockwave racing out from the point of impact and resulted in the formation of a massive crater. Their arms shook for a brief moment as they tried to overpower one another, but they quickly pushed back away from each other and circled back for another clash. Menma attacked with a swipe to Naruto's head, but Naruto hopped and rolled underneath the attack before pushing himself up into the air to bring his energy claws down in the form of a brutal hammer strike. Menma raised his tails over his head to block the strike, the ground depressing from the force of the attack from Naruto. Flames then danced across Menma's tails as he unleashed the fires of Kurama from his body, but Naruto backflipped as the fire blast sent him through the air so that he would land deftly on his feet. Menma roared and attacked with his tails again, but Naruto's arms suddenly created two whip-like beams which bore sharp tips that were akin in appearance to Agnoloya's tail. Mokashiryu no Soso. The twin spear spell was a definitive counter to the 9 lethal weapons of fiery destruction as Naruto swung at a pace fast enough to hold them at bay. With each deflection he aimed to strike wherever he saw an opening, but the exoskeleton of magic which covered Menma did a fine job of protecting him. Annoying mutt. Naruto scowled. As if in response to the insult, 3 fiery tails stabbed towards Naruto in unison. But the Apocalypse Dragonslayer immediately dropped his twin spear spell and caught them and held them firmly in his grasp. HRAH. The Apocalypse Dragonslayer then spun Menma around. The Kitsune exoskeleton-covered man crashed through several buildings, sending them crashing down until Naruto decided to let go. Menma slammed through more ruined pieces of Extalian architecture until his Earthland counterpart appeared above him with his arm reared back. Mokashiryu no Kuroi Kiba. He roared in Unshin with the dragon head of energy that formed around his fist. Menma growled and roared back, a powerful shockwave of magic and fire splitting the earth and made the air quake as it sent Naruto skyward to deflect him. The 9-tailed pseudo-jinchuriki then jumped after his foe and swung with his fiery claws. Naruto gritted his teeth in pain as he was sent to ground zero, tearing the earth asunder from his impact. The white-eyed Dragonslayer snarled as he quickly rose back to his full height and inhaled deeply, taking in magic energy into his lungs as the fox skull that encased Menma's head opened to draw an Eternano that had exploded from its user's body. Red negative Eternano and blue positive Eternano combined into the violet-black orb that was the Bijudama, while Naruto's body swelled as the magic energy he had called upon was swallowed and held at bay until it was ready to fire. Mokashiryu no Hoko. Garoar. The 2 beams of energy, one crimson and white and the other being blue and black, collided in an epic explosion of energy that generated a shockwave which literally turned everything within its radius into dust. When the blast died down, Menma engulfed his body in fire and fell towards Naruto from above like a rocket, but the drive mode user quickly went into a backflip to avoid the strike. He was sent skidding backwards as a fiery shockwave formed from Menma's descending form, but he was quick to recover and snarled at his opponent. "Kurithus than you ever will be," Naruto said, his magic flaring with his rage, "and that's why you will never be able to beat me." Roar. Mokashiryu no Kahaya. Menma slammed his claws on the ground and streaks of crimson flames rushed across the battleground, while Naruto punched the earth and unleashed his own streak of blue and black energy. The devastation wave spell tore the battleground asunder once more as it collided with the flames. The rising cloud of embers and dust stretched towards the heavens, but Menma burst through it in hopes of a sneak attack. "You cannot escape my eyes, mutt." Naruto snarled as he backflipped to avoid the fiery claws of his opponent.
Menma went for an overhead strike, but Naruto quickly hopped over the strike, lines of crimson fire lancing from the impact as the ground cracked from the blazing attack. Naruto then landed on the ground as Menma reared up on his legs to strike with his fiery claws once more. The Apocalypse Dragonslayer raised his arm and batted the blow aside like it was child's play, which it technically was since his opponent was no more than a beast wielding the power of his best friend.
Mokashiryu no Zanso. Naruto's boot-covered feet were cloaked in energy in the shape of sharp talons. His left leg was as strong as a tree trunk, supporting the entire weight of his body as he lashed out with a strong upward kick that dug into Menma's neck and sent him skyward. Naruto then hopped after his opponent and lashed out with a strong spin kick to send the bestial Menma rocketing through the air. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki created his own personal crater as he landed in the center of the primary battlefield as the other Dragonslayers and Pseudo Jinchuriki were doing battle. Naruto landed at the edge of the crater of his Edolas counterpart, but he was forced to look away as Edo Roshi had been knocked back by his Earthland doppelganger from a strong punch that was encased in solidified lava. The wielder of Son Goku's power crashed down on the ground, beating his chest like the ape he had become before unleashed a powerful set of lava spheres at him. He didn't stop there as he unleashed a burst of bluish-green flame from his wide mouth. However, the attack was effectively halted as Haku and Juvia stood beside the Apocalypse Dragonslayer. Mizu Doraibu, Isu Dorabiu. Like said son of Agnologia, scale markings adorned their bodies as they utilized their drive modes. Juvia's water drive had given her dark blue scales that glittered like the ocean itself. Her hair was let free, no longer in the neat curls which she had made to try and appeal to her beloved Grey Sama due to her time of battle, and bore highlight of violet. Her blue eyes had grown an even deeper shade of blue, and were borderline black, almost as if they had become as deep as the ocean trenches themselves. From her forearms, spines with purple webbing in between them protruded. One could actually compare them to the sail fin of the extinct reptile, Dimetrodon. From her calves, fins made of solid water curved upwards, made of hard water, and were similar in appearance to those of a shark's. Haku's ice drive gave her already pale skin color an even paler shade, to the point that she was practically ghost white with a tinge of blue. The whitish-blue skin color that made it seem like she was made entirely out of the crystalline substance which she forged from her magic too, as her scale markings were outlined in shining blue. Her hair gained white highlights and made a stark contrast with her naturally raven-colored locks, as said highlights made it seem as if freshly fallen snow had mixed into it. Her claw-like nails had gained a sparkling appearance as the keratin gained ice-like qualities. Her eyes that were once a beautiful shade of obsidian gained a rather unique appearance, as her irises were now a startling shade of ice blue. Another unique feature was that her breath was visible with each exhalation due to the naturally cold body temperature she now possessed. Insert music. Naruto Shippuden Uchiha Itachi, Suiryu no Sume. Hyoryu no Harabin. The tundra whip of the ice dragon had completely frozen over Edo Roshi's attacks, even turning his fires into a crystalline structure. However, due to the momentum of their flight, the icy structures were still on their path, only to then be completely eroded away as the claws of the water dragon ripped through them with the force of a raging tide. "I trust Sky Dragon is safe?" the Apocalypse Dragonslayer asked. "Wendy-chan's watching us from behind," Haku replied. Their gazes never shifted away from their pseudo-Jinchuriki opponents even as they spoke. The pseudo-Jinchuriki all roared at their Dragonslayer opponents before Menma hopped out of his crater and unleashed a powerful blast of magic energy. The other 6 followed their Kitsune-like compatriots' actions and unleashed their own blasts of crimson magic energy. They only bear a portion of the power of the 9, but I had hoped they would be a better match for us in our drive modes. Naruto snarled as he opened his jaws. The blasts of magic energy suddenly halted in the air before being drawn into the vacuum forces generated by Naruto's lungs as he inhaled deeply. The magic energy, the heat from the surrounding flames, the magic imbued into Juvia's rain. Nothing was spared as Naruto drew in all forms of Eternano up until the magic blasts were completely consumed. Once he had done so, the blonde utilized his partially replenished magic stores and made numerous hand motions before swinging his hand in a downward motion. Seal magic. Gravity. A massive violet magic seal spun to life above the 7 pseudo-Jinchuriki, and the force of gravity increased 20-fold. The pseudo-Jinchuriki all roared as they were forced into place by the drive mode enhanced Dragonslayer. "Juvia will end the rains now as per Roshi-san's instructions," the daughter of Levia stated as she looked to her rain clouds. Immediately the rainfall halted and the dark cumulonimbus clouds parted to reveal the night sky alight with the moon and stars. Juvia turned her deep blue eyes to Roshi. "Roshi-san, you spoke of your plan before Fujin-san went to save Wendy-san. Fujin-san has brought his doppelganger back into the fray and now has them all in place. Is parting the rain cloud really all that is required of me for your plan to be initiated?" "Yup." The red-haired Dragonslayer nodded. "The last part is just something from me, and also because everyone else is doing it." Gajeel, Fu and Wendy each raised a single eyebrow while simultaneously tilting their heads in confusion. "And that would be?" Roshi answered the question of the 2 younger Dragonslayers in the form of his magic energy spiking. Yellow, orange and black magic energy billowed from his body like volcanic ash from an active volcano. His body then became completely black and was an even darker shade than Naruto's own scales. The scales that now covered his body were outlined by yellow-orange magic energy and flowed in a manner that made it seem as if lava was moving across his body. His sharp teeth and knives were now also a deep shade of black. His eyes were now the color burning magma and his red hair gained highlight of black within them. The ground beneath him bore a deep orange glow and the ripple due to the intense heat his body was now producing, acting in a similar manner to the icy atmosphere Haku's own form created. Yugen Doraibo. With his lava drive now in place, Roshi cracked his joints. "It's been almost 20 years since I've had a good enough fight where I've had to bring this out, so hopefully nothing will be too explosive. You all might want to step back a bit." Lava Dragon. The son of Acnologia growled at the son of Volcanus, his annoyance being paramount. "I warned you," Roshi said with a shrug to Naruto's words. He cracked his fingers before wiggling them as if he were about to play the piano. "Yoryu no Kazanbai." There was silence for a moment until a low rumbling sound met the ears of all present. The rumbling them back grew louder until it felt as if a continental plate was shifting beneath their feet. Finally, the earth burst apart in violent explosion of ash and lava. The volcanic ash spell emerged and the burning cloud kicked up everything that had collected from the ground. Water from Juvia's rain, the stone and dust from the ground and the remnants of ice that formed from Haku's spells. The pyroaccumulonimbus cloud rolled through the air until it finally settled over the wielders of the power of the 9. The ash cloud suddenly released rumbling sounds and the particles of dust, ice and stone began to make friction with one another. Sparks of violet-colored voltage collected within the ash cloud until finally Roshi called upon the magic energy he used to fuel the cloud. Magic and electricity accumulated into one single force before Roshi swung his arm down. Metsuryu Ougi. Kazan Kaminari. The name of the spell rang out throughout the battlefield and in a flash of light, a massive bolt of violet lightning fell from the ash cloud. The attack came crashing down with the explosive force of a volcanic eruption. The pseudo-jinchuriki all released cries of pain as they were being electrocuted by the magically forged lightning bolt. A shockwave of lightning ripped the ground apart before a mighty explosion rocked the entire island kingdom. A smoke cloud rose into the air and Roshi nodded at his handiwork. The lava drive user smirked as he looked at the shocked faces of the younger Dragonslayers. Naruto was not as impressed, but with the attacks he created which were reported to have wiped out mountains, Roshi would take what he could get from the blonde Dragonslayer. Why you're a lava Dragonslayer, but… Juvia paused due to the shock, but Haku finished her statement. You summoned lightning. Pretty cool, right? Roshi grinned baring his obsidian fangs. It is cool, but that just doesn't make sense, Gajeel said. Actually, it does. Roshi replied. You see, electrical charge are generated from volcanic eruptions when rock fragments, ash and ice particles in a volcanic plume, also known as a pyrocumulonimbus cloud, collide. A pyro what now? Fu asked. Fu-san, a pyrocumulonimbus cloud is a storm cloud made as a result of a volcanic plume. In essence it is similar to the way Juvia makes rain clouds through condensing the water in the atmosphere with her magic. Only Roshi-san makes these storm clouds using the lava and ash from his lava eruptions. Oh. The mint-haired girl planted a fist in her palm in realization. That makes sense. Juvia, you're a bright girl. Roshi praised the blue-haired water drive user, patting her on the head. Juvia studies when Juvia is bored. The water Dragonslayer grinned, reveling in the praise. Juvia likes to be smart. So I can see. Anyway, as I was saying. Roshi turned back to his other Dragonslayer comrades. As a result of these particles colliding, it generated a large amount of electrical charge which produces lightning. I then take the magic I used to create the cloud and meld it with the static charge so I can then guide the lightning bolt and release it when I want. Wendy looked up in awe at the lava Dragonslayer. Her brown eyes sparkled with childish amazement before she turned to Naruto. Oni-san, Oni-san. Can I learn from Roshi-san too? I want to make storms like Fu-san and make lightning like Roshi-san. Fu and Roshi slid towards Naruto from either side, smug grins present on their faces as they poked the scowling Apocalypse Dragonslayer. You hear that, Roshi? Wendy-chan wants to learn from us. So it seems. Fu. Oh, I wonder, do you think we should teach her how to use her drive mode as well? Naruto's eyebrow twitched at that and the Dragonslayers of wind and lava continued to provoke the blonde. Oh my, Roshi, whatever would you mean? Don't you know her supremely overprotective Oni-san wants to teach her that technique? Fu spoke with a mocking tone. A massive spike in killing intent and magic energy came from Naruto. The towering son of Agnologia cast a shadow over the two annoyances, his white eyes glowing like stars within the pillar of dark-colored magic. What was that about teaching my Imouto to use drive mode? Fu and Roshi immediately hid behind Wendy. Gajeel, Juvia and Wendy all sweat dropped while Haku giggled in amusement. Ah, Otuto is so emotional. I will not spare you either, Haku Ne-chan. The divine Dragonslayer's dark voice made the ice drive user's spine tingle as she broke out into a nervous sweat. However, it was rather humorous to see frozen droplets of sweat fall to the ground as she remained laughing and waving her hand in a nonchalant manner. Oh, Otuto, you wouldn't dare hurt your beloved Oni-chan, would you? You care to test that theory? I'm sorry, Oto-Uto, Haku ran up and hugged the taller Dragonslayer. You know I love you. Wendy, Juvia and Gajeel's sweat drops only increased in size at the sight of the fearsome Apocalypse Dragonslayer being reduced to whatever you would call this. Fu and Roshi had recovered from their sudden fear of the blonde Dragonslayer and peeked out from behind their diminutive Sky Dragonslayer's shield. They bore sweat drops of their own as they watched Naruto try in vain to pry the Ice Dragonslayer off of him as she had literally stuck to his waist with ice. What is happening? The five thought. Insert music. Boku no Hero Academia Villain Invasion. The lighthearted moment was brought to a quick end as the sound of a roaring engine met their ears. The drive mode users and Wendy all looked to the heavens and caught sight of a shining silver object in the night sky that was obviously not a star due to how it was moving directly towards them. In a matter of seconds, the large mechanical monstrosity that was Dorma Enum crashed down upon the location where the weakened pseudo-jinchuriki were currently struggling to rise to their electrical charge upsetting the synapses in one's body did not allow for a swift recovery in most cases. Seems all of you were useless. King Faust's voice echoed from the Dragon Knight. Han and Yugito were overcome by their emotions, so I assumed you would have been overcome as well. I would have actually preferred that. But to find that you have actually been defeated by these lowly earthland mages is beyond insulting to you all as well as myself as the king of Edolis. Naruto's eyes narrowed as he watched the Dragon Knight reach down and take the 7 pseudo-jinchuriki up from the ground. Through his visual prowess, he saw the crimson energy of the 9 being drained from the Shinobi members and into the massive crimson lacrima that lay within Dorma Anim's chest. The heads of Shukaku, Isobu, Son Goku, Seiken, Chomei, Yuki and Kurama became visible to all that observed the process as the energies were accumulated into one singular point. Once the entirety of their magic had been drained, King Faust allowed the now dead members of the Shinobi to fall to the ground. You took the powers of the 9, King Faust. Naruto snarled. We'll be taking them back. Oh, I would like to see you try Earthlandian, but even if you were strong enough to handle these 7, the fact remains that they only wielded a portion of the 9's power. I on the other hand, he used the Dragonoid mecha to gesture to the central lacrima in its chest. I have it all. Shukaku, Matabi, Isobu, Son Goku, Kakuo, Seiken, Chomei, Yuki and even the mighty Kurama. All of their magic energy is mine and it is infinite. You cannot hope to stop the Dragon Knight as I raise the kingdom of Extalia. Naruto walked over to Wendy. You wanted to learn drive mode Imouto? Wendy nodded. Well, now will be your first lesson and your target will be the giant dragon mecha. Faust laughed as he heard those words from Naruto. You think a little girl can beat me? Not by herself. No, I've heard about the Dorma Anim from Kurama. A magical armor capable of absorbing magic energy to continuously power itself and fight as a juggernaut of destruction. MVER. Your beast is still a dragon and we are Dragonslayers. Naruto said. We have trained to take down any and all dragons. And how exactly will you do that? With great ease once my idiot student decides to stop hiding. Roshi said. Natsu, get up and give him a taste of what Dragonslayers can do, won't you? Faust turned the Dorma Anim's head in the direction of where Roshi was looking and his eyes widened as he caught sight of one Natsu Dragneel gripping the tail of his machine. What? Impossible, I killed you. I'm more durable than you think, Roshi-sensei made sure of that. Damn right I did, Roshi exclaimed with a thumbs up. Natsu returned the gesture before wiping his mouth with part of his vest. And for the record, sensei. I wasn't hiding. I was recovering from my motion sickness. This thing flies really fast. Also I think Gray fell down somewhere since he slipped off. Natsu muttered as he glanced back in the direction of the wasteland below. Do you not care for your guildmate at all? The son of Volcanus Sweat dropped at his student's words. Insolent little brat. I'll make sure to leave nothing left this time, Faust growled from the safety of his cockpit. Dorma Anim's tail lashed out, flicking Natsu skyward before a multitude of compartments opened up from the Dragon Knight's shoulders and back. With the press of a button, Faust unleashed a storm of golden energy blasts and missiles from the taboo of Edolis. The projectiles all converged upon Natsu's location and engulfed the pink-haired Dragonslayer in fire and smoke. There is no way in hell he would survive that. That would be true. Roshi agreed with a nod. But you see, my student is the fire Dragonslayer and providing him with flames is a good way to set yourself up for quite an ass-kicking. What? Faust's disbelief was made paramount as he watched the fiery explosion suddenly begin to decrease in size. In a matter of seconds, what had once been a great conflagration had become literally nothing as Natsu released a burp upon consuming the entire explosion. Not bad, old man. Now what was that about me not surviving? Impossible. Not for a Dragonslayer. Natsu replied with a determined expression. The scarf-wearing Dragonslayer then raised his hands high above his head. Fire in right hand, fire in my left hand. Bring them together and… Natsu swung his arms down and the two bursts of flame converged and combined into a massive fireball. Karyu no Kouen. The mighty blue and white spheroid fell as if it were a meteor from the heavens before it crashed down on the Dorma Anim. The durable dragon's armor was superheated as the fire dragon's brilliant flame created a massive explosion, engulfing its target in a pillar of flame. The son of Igneel then dropped down atop the burning metal dragon, but he was completely unfazed by the red-hot metal as he jokingly rapped his knuckles against the head of Dorma Anima. Not bad, huh? Natsu laughed before hopping off the beast. It's superheated now, Naruto said. Water dragon, ice dragon. Suiru no Suiru. Juvia held out her arms and unleashed a massive torrent of water from her hands. The waters then formed a compact sphere, rapidly cooling the red-hot metal. Once the entire water prison spell's volume had been obscured by steam, Juvia immediately dropped the imprisoning spell to allow for Haku to unleash a cold front from her body. The cold front froze everything between herself and Dorma Anim and then some. Now here is a lesson in basic science, Faust. Naruto said. When you superheat metal and then rapidly cool it, it becomes brittle. No matter how dense or how powerful that metal is, rapid fluctuations in temperature will decrease its molecular integrity and thus make it vulnerable to the point that, say, even a blade of wind can cut through it. To further bring the point home, he and Fu simultaneously made slicing motions with their arms. Arcs of razor-sharp wind moved through the air at high speeds before completely severing the mechanical behemoth's arms. The two limbs came crashing down on either side of their former wielder, and King Faust watched in fear from the cockpit as Naruto's glowing white eyes seemed to stare into his very soul through the monitors. Iron Dragon, make sure he can't move. Tetsuryu no Shibari. Gajeel stabbed his arms into the ground as he converted them into spears of iron. The iron moved deep through the underground before it exploded out from beneath Dorma Anim's feet and formed very efficient restraints. Those bands are connected to iron poles buried at angles about 200 meters underground. He's not moving anytime soon. Gajeel then separated his arms from the iron and let them return to their original form, dusting his hands off as if he had just finished taking out some trash. The Dorma Anim was now made useless in almost every single definition of word. Insert music. Boku no Hero Academia Yusei Run. At this point, Wendy was placed to the forefront of the little group of Dragonslayers. Naruto placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Now Wendy. To activate drive mode, you need only draw upon your magic and go as deep as you can possibly go. Naruto instructed the blue-haired girl. Take a deep breath and think of the sky. Draw upon your element and firmly grasp it. Have you done that? Wendy's face contorted into a look of intense concentration. An aura of light blue magic energy outlined her body as she continued to struggle. I think I have it. Good girl, Naruto praised her. Now, think of a dragon. Think of Grandine. Like I told you, drive mode is the halfway point between our base power and our ultimate power in the form of Doragon Fosu. And so essentially you become as close to being a dragon as you can possibly be at that point. Imagine you are armed with dragon claws and dragon talons. Your magic is Grandine's magic. The sky is your dominion and yours to control. Take the magic you have drawn upon and combine it with those thoughts. Imagine you are stronger, faster and better than before. Imagine that you are a sky dragon, Wendy. The others watched in fascination as Naruto gently gave his little sister figure instructions. Other than Roshi, due to him teaching Natsu, none of them had seen what a pilot activation of drive mode looked like from the outside, and for Wendy's, it was downright beautiful. Her light blue aura increased in size as her output of magic increased. Scale-like markings rapidly covered her skin and gained a cloud-white hue. Her hair gained highlights of bright pink, and the wind she generated from her increasing powers caused it flutter gently. You've done beautifully, Wendy. Now do what I told you to do when I first made you my student, my little sky dragon. Naruto released Wendy's shoulder from his grip and stood back. A proud smile adorned his face as he leaned down and whispered in her ear one single word. Roar. Wendy's eyes snapped open, revealing them to have become encircled by a shining ring of sky blue, something which seemed to complement her brown irises quite well. The magic output she unleashed increased tenfold and the ground cratered as the pressure her body exhumed acted upon the world of Edelus. The phantasmal image of Grandine roared behind her, and suddenly Wendy felt as if she had been granted new life as her body's wounds became completely healed and she recovered from her fatigue. She inhaled deeply, magic energy and the element of the sky bending to her will. Tenryu no. Wind and magic energy swirled into her gaping maw, building up to extreme levels until finally the young preteen could no longer contain it. Hoko. The spiraling vortex of wind tore a massive trench in the ground as it rocketed across the battleground. Faust's scream was paramount for all of a few seconds as the howling winds of the sky dragon's roar drowned them out. The high-powered wind circulation system ripped apart every single piece of Dorma Anim's armor and carried it across the floating island, sending them all over the edge. Injustice, the sixth king of Edelus, fell from grace and descended into oblivion. Soon, the only thing left of the Dragon Knight was the massive central lacrima that once powered it. Wendy fell to her knees for a moment, gasping in effort as she felt the pull on her magic reserves being much greater than anything she had ever felt before in her life. Drive mode within 5 minutes, huh? She's really something. Roshi praised as he stood next to Naruto. You must be proud. She's my little sky dragon, was his only reply. And now it's time I get back my little furry pain in the ass Kitsune. Naruto moved to walk towards the massive crimson lacrima. He could literally feel the fiery blaze of power of kurama within it, fighting to free itself. The energy lacrima pulsed and shone, cracks spreading across its surface. Oto. I don't think that's supposed to happen, Haku said. Naruto did not heed her words, but he paused when the fox's head suddenly appeared from the cloud of demonic energy. Crimson eyes full of fear met blue bathed in ethereal white that were alight with confusion. Naruto. Run. Insert music. Naruto Shippuden Shukusei no Megami. Those two words heralded the shattering of the lacrima and a massive explosion of demonic crimson energy. A cascade of effects occurred as the energy sent all the Dragonslayers flying back until they were forced to dig their claws into the earth to anchor themselves. The winds howled as cumulonimbus clouds swirled overhead. Thunder boomed and lightning arced through the heavens like lances of the divine before they stabbed down into the earth and wreaked havoc upon the world below. The rains fell in the form of a torrential downfall, falling with such force that it would have stung normal flesh. "Juvia, please tell me this is your doing," Gajeel pleaded. The ocean blue-eyed Dragonslayer turned to Gajeel, and her gaze said it all. This was not the work of the water Dragonslayer. Nor was it the work of the Dragonslayers of wind and sky as tornadoes suddenly fell from above and stabbed into random areas across not just Extalia, but all of Edalis. The storm expanded at a rate that was unheard of for any sort of meteorological phenomenon, but through the darkness of the storm, the mighty crimson glow of demonic energy continued to shine like a beacon. What's happening?" Fu yelled out over the winds. "Oni-san, I'm scared." She crawled over to her brother figure with a valiant amount of effort, and the son of 2 wizard saints could only watch the events that unfolded. From the accumulation of 9 demonic entities worth of magic energy, there came something that could be described as monstrously powerful. Naruto had only felt power like this when he was with Agnologia, and his wide eyes were forced to gaze upon its wielder as the crimson energy beam morphed and solidified. The glow died down, and in place of the energy explosion, there was now a towering beast of destruction. Its body was brown in color and stood at a height of at least 500 feet tall. It was difficult to make an estimation since the beast was so large. The beast took on the shape of an muscular humanoid with elongated limbs and a twisting neck. It possessed long legs, which it used along with its muscular arms to stand. Atop its back was a massive growth that bore an appearance similar to that of a conch shell. The beast's head was altered greatly in terms of what humanoid facial features would look like. A single ear grew on the right side, and its mouth, which contained straight teeth and bore a grin, was positioned to the left side, with a single triangular nostril appearing above it. In the center of its face there lay the lid of a massive singular eye. Several horns formed on various parts on its head, 2 above each side of its face, 2 beneath its eye, and another below its ear. Its monstrously large eyelid snapped open to reveal a massive crimson eye. Its pupil was encircled by 2 rings in a concentric pattern, with each ring having 3 tomo decorating it in a manner Naruto could see resembled the Sharingan. From its tailbone, the beast had 10 massive tails which swished lazily behind it and seemed to scrape the heavens. With his visual prowess and connection to the divine element of energy, Naruto was the only one who was able to see the practically limitless power the beast possessed. This power. The Dragonslayers stared into the face of death and destruction, and the creature tilted its head skyward before unleashing a roar which heralded its sum into the world. It was said to be the progenitor of all that exists in the world. A god that created countries, had the power to swallow oceans, split the land, and carry mountains. It was known by all these things and so many other titles, but its most well-known and fear-instilling title was simple: the Jubi.